This guy just wanted to live. He really wanted to live. But at that moment, the doctor was giving him terrible news. The patient's name was Kim Isaac, and the disease he had would be named after him because it was something totally unknown. The doctor, of course, didn't want to break the news, but he had no choice. Isaac had only 6 months to live. As he walked down the street, Isaac felt nothing but despair. He thought he had worked as hard as a dog, only to end up like this, doomed to die. He crossed the street without paying attention to the cars, completely lost, until someone had to save him from being run over. Kneeling on the ground, he felt as if he had received a death sentence. And it was exactly that same day that he won the lottery, but even so, he thought that the only thing he really wanted was to stay alive. He didn't want to die. He would be happy with anything. So he asked whatever deity was listening not to let him die. What he didn't expect was to live like that. He was reincarnated as a bald skeleton, a body so miserable that he couldn't even take care of himself. At that moment, demons started attacking Isaac, and he reacted quickly. With his great demon blade, he killed them all with ease. After getting blood on his sword one more time, he looked back and saw the last enemy. It was a monstrous, gigantic demon, but Isaac managed to dodge its attack. He thought it would finally be over. Ready, he advanced and quickly cut the creature's neck, ending the battle. When the monster's body fell, he understood that the subjugation of the rebel forces was finally complete. Isaac thought about how, after being reincarnated as the weakest demon, he had evolved into a lich, the king of the dead. He had revived the entire demonic civilization that had been destroyed many centuries ago. He was even a little proud, because even though he was bald, he was now a king. Everyone celebrated for him, but everyone called him Isaac instead of Isaac, and he thought those idiots couldn't even pronounce his name properly. Nevertheless, he left. People asked where he was going, and he followed in silence, thinking he wanted to get his paycheck. He wanted to eat bad food again, but real food. And he wanted to go back to doing his business like any human. He wanted to become human again. So he threw an ogre's head in front of a bunch of people who were terrified, and at that moment, he was climbing the steps of the divine realm, going to meet those entities who had made a deal with him. Isaac said that he had killed all his enemies, as requested, and that the agreement still stood. According to the contract, he was to become human again. The deities asked if he had really killed them all, something they thought would take 500 years, but he had already finished. The people around him began to whisper, saying that some nobles worked for him for free. Isaac replied that he was listening to everything and wondered why they were talking so much. Hadn't they said that he would become human if he defeated all his enemies? One of the gods, who was in the center, asked him if he could do one more job. Isaac was furious. Even though he was a skeleton, he thought it was time they stopped. He asked if they were trying to turn him into a slave. He thought that even if they were gods, he would wipe them all out. His aura became intense and frightening. Then he wondered if they had made him work all this time without knowing how to turn him into a human. One of the goddesses replied that it looked like he had finally realized it, and another god confessed that he had known it would end badly from the start. Isaac then angrily asked if that was all they had to say. Isaac said that, apart from the forgotten summoning technique, those gods could neither create nor destroy. He reminded them that he was not a living being, but an undead. If they couldn't transform him, he could put the entire divine realm in danger. The gods asked for more time, offering him the chance to make more requests, but Isaac replied that, as payment for the broken promise, he would kill them all. He said they would all turn into skeletons. As he accumulated his power, a monstrous aura grew around his body. Suddenly, however, this energy began to diminish until it disappeared completely. Isaac realized that he could no longer use magic and that his body was paralyzed. He wondered what was going on. One of the gods explained that it was useless to resist. The name they had written on the spell was wrong. It read Isaac, not Isaac, but the spell still worked. That technique had been used in the past to seal away disasters like him. The god told him that he should be grateful for what they had done, because now he would live as an insect. Isaac looked at his new body and realized that it was a small, weak caterpillar. He wondered why it couldn't at least be a hairy caterpillar. The god even mocked him, saying that he was still obsessed with the hair. Suddenly, Isaac's body began to glow. He thought that everyone there was an idiot, and that if they were going to do this to him, then they should have done it faster. He would rather kill himself than live like an insect. Then his body glowed brightly, and he screamed inside that everyone should eat shit. Immediately afterwards, a huge explosion took over the cathedral of the divine realm. Smoke covered everything. As it began to dissipate, everyone tried to understand what had happened. Isaac had disappeared. One of the gods said that he had probably been sealed inside that insect. With the Demon King finally out of the picture, some began to think that they could regain power over that world. But the gods knew it was too early to relax. They decided to create a perfect barrier between the sacred world and the human world. They said they would exterminate all demons. Meanwhile, one of the gods who had used a lot of power was asked if he was all right. He replied that it didn't matter, because now the Demon King had turned into a little cockroach. He said that he would be stuck there forever, and that he would make him feel pain. At that moment, Isaac wondered if he had been tricked by the gods. He wondered if he had been dumbed down after that, since skeletons didn't have brains. Everything around him was very bright. He realized that he had eyes again. He began to feel strange at the touch of his own skin. It was soft. He looked at his hands and realized he was in a human body. Then he wondered if the seal had gone wrong. A maid approached him, calling him baby, saying that he had finally woken up. She said he had been sleeping so well and asked why he had woken up now. Isaac didn't know who those people were. He really had become human again. But to his surprise, the maid said that they would feel a bit bad about it, but that they had to do their job. They said they would put him back to sleep, only this time for good and in peace. Isaac thought he had just died and was about to die again, and the servant was ready to give the child poison in his bottle. But as he tried, little Isaac dodged in every possible way. The servant began to wonder and asked why he wasn't eating. Isaac thought he would never eat something so suspicious, but at the same time he wondered why he had become human. At that moment, the servants called him Isaac. It was exactly the same name as before. He thought that the pronunciation of his real name had always been Isaac, with the same intonation. The problem was that the gods used a different pronunciation. They said Isaac, changing the sound slightly. Because of this, the seal didn't work. The seal needed to contain the exact name of the sealed person, and the gods got it wrong. He still thought that, in addition, he had been reincarnated in a body with the same name, and everything indicated that those idiots had made a mistake even when making the seal. It was at that moment that the servant managed to put the bottle in his mouth, and everyone began to wonder why that child was so strong. Isaac thought it was just a vegetable juice. So what were they trying to kill him with? Intestinal pain? But he soon realized that something was wrong. He was feeling a strange reaction in his body. Meanwhile, in the temple of the Holy Empire of Hela, an old man was walking quietly through the corridors, thinking that that baby would soon meet its end. Then a figure appeared in front of him and commented that he looked well. This man was Alexander Heathcliff Hela, the emperor of the Holy Empire of Hela. The old bishop bowed to the son of the empire, and the emperor asked what he was doing there. The bishop replied that he had come to meet the candidate for the sainthood of House Joshua because he needed to feel the presence of the one who would be holy. The emperor commented that the way he spoke, it sounded like a burden, and said that nothing could go wrong with the saint being cared for by the holy seat. The bishop replied that he didn't know what he was talking about, but suddenly everyone heard a cry coming from inside the temple. Everyone ran to the bedroom, and the emperor asked what had happened to the young master. The excited maid explained that the boy was very cute, that he had eaten so much that his belly was full. They told him that he had already drunk 15 bottles of vegetable juice. When the bishop heard this, he was paralyzed. He thought it was impossible. How could that child still be alive? He knew it wasn't just vegetable juice. A few minutes earlier, Isaac had sensed that the liquid wasn't just juice. He soon realized that it was poison, and it was no ordinary poison. It was holy poison, an extremely powerful kind, capable of destroying any divine power. Its effects were not immediate, but if accumulated in large quantities, it could even kill. However, this poison was made with the mana of demons, and Isaac had been a demon, so for him that taste was delicious. He was enjoying it, and absorbing large amounts of mana on top of that. He threw the bottle away and asked for another. Of course, all in the language of a baby, but his wish was understood. The waiter, unaware of the truth, thought it was great and brought more poison, believing that the effect would not be immediate. Isaac continued to drink, happy to be accumulating so much mana, and thought that what he needed now was to enter his own inner world, to reach the deepest part of himself, the core of everything, his mana core. He began to focus all his energy and direct that absorbed mana into the core. As he did so, he prepared himself carefully, but suddenly he felt a magical explosion inside him. However, it didn't manifest as he had expected. He was confused. The mana core was supposed to glow with one of the 3 primary colors, but at that moment something very different happened. Then he wondered why the core was white, but he soon realized that it wasn't just the color that was striking. There was an absurd amount of power inside that core, even though it wasn't fully formed, since that body was still that of a baby. Isaac thought that this exceeded all his expectations. He approached it with difficulty and wondered how blessed that body was. If he managed to grow well inside it, he might become an even bigger monster than he could have imagined. Isaac had always chosen to survive. It was something that was deeply engraved in his soul, a desire to stay alive no matter what. In the end, he became the genesis of the Skeleton King and created many unique and special abilities. Now, all those abilities were in that body because of his name and his soul, Isaac. Later, while he was concentrating, the employees began to wonder if he had finally died. But Isaac just raised his little finger, and everyone was surprised to realize that he was still alive. Then, quite naturally, he asked for another bottle, this time a stronger one. Back in the present, the emperor was relieved, believing that nothing bad had happened. But Isaac thought that a apart from the fact that Kermit was murdered right there, nothing else had really happened. He began to wonder why the bishop was watching him so much. Had he eaten too much? But then he thought he couldn't arouse suspicion, so he decided to act like a normal baby and smiled innocently. The bishop, however, thought how absurd it was. Instead of dying, that bastard was smiling at him as if he were mocking him. This made the bishop furious. A few days earlier, in the capital of the Holy See, a man commented that whoever became the next saint would inherit the Holy Empire. He said it was a bad joke. He also commented that this was why all the noble families were declaring their own children to be saints, which he found extremely annoying. That same bishop appeared and tried to calm him down, telling him not to worry, because they would deal with all the candidates for sainthood. But the man, known as the man with the chalice, revealed that he had heard an unpleasant rumor. It was said that a new candidate for sainthood had appeared in the Joshua house, which was worrying, since this house was the emperor's right-hand man. The bishop said there was nothing they could do about it, but the chalice man angrily threw down the chalice and declared that the boy would probably die before he even reached them. All the bishop had to do was check the body. After all, according to him, the saint could only come from his house. House Barrett was led by Hire Barrett, an influential cardinal and head of the family. In the present, the bishop was thinking about the information he had received. They said the baby was already dead. So why was that child still alive? He believed that he couldn't leave it at that. Just then, the emperor approached and commented that the child was interesting. Its hair shone with a clear light, and he commented that the founder of the Holy Empire had exactly the same color hair. Isaac understood at that moment that the man was the emperor. The emperor said that the child seemed more blessed than the current pope himself, and said that he must be the true candidate for sainthood. Isaac was confused, not believing that the body in which he had been reincarnated was a candidate for sainthood. The bishop noticed the emperor's reaction and began to worry. He thought he couldn't allow that child to receive the emperor's support. Then the bishop asked to examine the child. The emperor asked what was wrong, and the bishop replied that there was something very strange. It was impossible for a baby to have had so much vegetable juice. But the emperor responded naturally, saying that he didn't see anything wrong with a candidate for sainthood eating a lot. Meanwhile, Isaac wondered how a demon king could be mistaken for a candidate for sainthood. The bishop continued to insist that he needed to examine him. It was then that Isaac accidentally burped and let out some of the demonic energy that he hadn't yet fully digested. He became apprehensive, wondering if the bishop had noticed. The bishop approached him with his eyes fixed and said that he had felt demonic energy coming from that child, asking if that wasn't too strange. Isaac didn't know if he had really noticed or if he was just trying to create an excuse to get rid of him. The bishop said that the child could only be a false candidate, someone who was misusing mana, and demanded that an inquisitor come immediately to examine him. The emperor was indignant and asked how he could dare to speak like that about a candidate for sainthood, but the bishop calmly replied that there was no need to worry. According to him, the pope had already decided that the true saint would come from the house of Barrett. The emperor reflected and thought it was shameful. They wanted to force the chosen child to come from the cardinal's own household. Meanwhile, Isaac understood the motive behind it all. They wanted to get rid of him. The bishop then took Isaac in his arms with the justification of taking him to the inquisitor, but the emperor intervened. He said that the Joshua house was a close ally of the imperial family, and as emperor, he strongly suggested that the examination be carried out later. The bishop replied that he understood, but also said that he had already spoken to the pope and that the blessing ceremony for the crown prince would only take place after the official selection of the new saint. The emperor understood that they were trying to blackmail him. The pope planned to deny his son recognition as heir unless he accepted Massa Barrett's choice. Isaac thought he was surrounded by a bunch of sons of bitches. He realized that continuing as a candidate for saint was too risky, so they might discover his true identity. Even so, the bishop went ahead with Isaac in his arms and said that they were going to perform a sacred exorcism technique. If the child was really human, he wouldn't suffer any effects. But it was at that moment that Isaac picked up the bottle and hit the bishop hard in the face. The impact was so great that blood came out and some teeth flew out. And then Isaac thought that this bishop was the son of an extremely arrogant woman and decided to play the game once and for all. The bishop, still dizzy, wondered how a bottle could hurt so much. The people around him began to notice a strange light emanating from the object and wondered if it was divine power. The bishop confirmed it internally. He had indeed felt the presence of divine power. At that moment, Isaac prepared another attack with his enchanted bottle and started hitting the bishop hard in the face. He beat the bishop with his own bottle non-stop, while the bishop thought that this was definitely mana being used for real. The emperor watched with a smile on his face, completely satisfied with what he was seeing. Isaac thought he was going to reinforce his bottle with resistance magic, keeping up the appearance of an innocent baby all the while. He wondered what that asshole bishop bishop thought of it. As he fought, Isaac felt something strange. Every time he used mana, an even greater magical power manifested itself. He began to realize that mana and divine power didn't go together, couldn't be used together, and it probably had something to do with the white core inside him. But suddenly the bishop grabbed the bottle and threw it away angrily. He swore by everything he possessed that this baby was a sinner and that they should continue with the exorcism. Isaac thought that piece of garbage hadn't given up yet. He didn't want to go that far, but at that moment, he pulled out something very interesting that was hidden in the bishop's own clothes. The bishop was terrified to see what Isaac was holding. It was a high-level sealed demonic body, a totem, a powerful artifact made with the properties of a demon that had devoured others of the same race and absorbed their mana. The bishop thought that he had saved the totem for an emergency, in case he encountered a demon and needed to defend himself, but he wondered how exactly that baby knew of the object's existence. Without hesitating, Isaac simply threw the totem away, because he had had enough of that bishop. It was then that the seal on the totem pole began to break, and the demon trapped inside began to awaken. Isaac thought that these were the consequences of the bishop's own actions. He had awakened the demon contained in that artifact, and thought that now the bishop could examine it at will. The emperor watched the scene with shock and asked Bishop Masa Barrett what he was doing. He asked if the bishop was mad for releasing a higher demon inside the temple. The bishop in despair said that it was the child's fault, that it was he who had thrown the totem. But the emperor replied that the totem was an object used to seal a demonic beast, so how had it come back to life? Without wasting any time, the emperor ordered all the forces present to protect his son, and as expected, they immediately took the child from the bishop's arms. Isaac thought that he was now the big joke in the situation, but at that moment, the newly freed demon seemed to be looking directly at him. The monster was saying that it needed to kill the saint, that it needed to finish the saint off immediately. Isaac didn't understand why this was happening, but the demon advanced furiously towards him. The knights protecting the temple gathered around to protect the young master. Isaac wondered what was wrong with that demon. After all, he had just saved him. Even so, he still thought that the paladins would be able to protect him. But no, the first paladin was dropped like a piece of garbage. Isaac wondered if that guy was a real paladin, but had no time for further reflection. The demon kept advancing, determined to kill him, and the paladins were being thrown away like dolls. Isaac thought that he should have subdued the monster earlier, and wondered if anyone would notice if he used magic in that desperate situation. He also wondered why everyone wanted to kill him in this new life. The demon attacked him, and out of instinct, Isaac reacted with a furious expression, stared at the monster with eyes full of rage, and called it an asshole demon. The demon stopped for a moment when he heard that and muttered the word Demon King in a low voice. It was at that moment that a strong glow began to emanate from Isaac's body. It was a divine power so intense that everyone there was shocked. The glow began to burn and melt the demon's body, forcing him to flee. The people there began to comment, saying that this was a divine power that had come straight out of the baby's body. They said that Isaac, at such a young age, had single-handedly expelled a great demon. While everyone was impressed by his feat, Isaac wondered if he really possessed divine power. However, he soon realized that he had completely run out of mana. He reflected that his body seemed to transform mana into divine power, and began to wonder how he could accumulate more mana if the Holy Empire didn't have it in abundance. The bishop then started shouting, demanding that he be let go. He claimed that the baby was a heretic, using demonic power, and asked how he had dared to crawl there. The bishop said that he would prove all this through an exorcism, but the emperor ordered him to keep quiet. He said that the bishop was unjustly accusing an innocent candidate for sainthood, and that he himself had freed a demon inside the temple. The emperor said that this would not be ignored, and that even though he was from the Holy See, the bishop would not escape the consequences. The bishop realized that the emperor was beginning to suspect his true identity, and that if this happened, the Holy See would face even more problems. He knew that even if he took responsibility, he had to at least protect his own family, so he decided that he would kill the would-be saint right then and there. Without hesitation, he made a powerful invocation, calling forth a great predatory beast, a wild and threatening spiritual beast. Isaac looked at that creature and thought that finally that damned bishop had shown his true nature. Even so, Isaac was out of mana and knew he couldn't do much against that summon. Just as the beast was about to swallow him, something stopped it. A powerful force gripped the creature, and a voice echoed, asking who dared lay hands on the direct lineage of House Joshua. They were the knights of the Joshua house. The one at the head was the seventh son of the family, Hillai Joshua. Hillai immediately ordered the bishop to be executed for high treason. All the knights bowed to Isaac Ashai, recognizing him as their young master, and Hillai apologized to him for being late. Isaac thought that those people looked really powerful. Hillai then said that they had brought a special present for the little one. Isaac was curious, wondering if it was jewelry, gold, or something shiny. But the gift delivered was a statuette statuette depicting the Demon King being beheaded. Soon after, they delivered another, showing the same king being burned to death, and yet another of a nun crushing the Demon King with a holy force. Isaac, who had been the Demon King himself in his previous life, didn't like it at all. He wondered how he would survive in such a place. But the people around him interpreted Isaac's tears as emotion, saying that he had enjoyed the gifts so much that he was crying. As he cried inside at his humiliation, Isaac finally remembered who the Joshuas were. They were the family of the saint responsible for killing him in the past. Isaac remembered that all the saints he had killed in his past life belonged to the Joshua family. He had eliminated number 45, number 61, and now he realized that not only was he a candidate for sainthood, but he was also part of the same lineage as the saint who had killed him. He began to wonder what he had done in his past life to deserve such an absurd fate. Meanwhile, Bishop Mesa, still in the room, continued to resist his arrest. He shouted that everyone there was a damned heretic and claimed that he would find out the true identity of that damn thing. He said that the child was a monster, but it was at that moment that someone made a clean cut across his throat. It was Hillel Joshua, who stopped him from continuing to speak and said that the bishop should be grateful for the benevolence of the Joshua house, which had spared his neck even after so much insolence. Isaac wondered if Hillel had almost beheaded the bishop just because he had insulted his family. All that confidence was impressive, but as he reflected, people around him began to say that the baby was hearing horrible things and that he needed to hear good words. Isaac thought that he was now surrounded by a bunch of crazy people, but he remembered something important. The Joshua were incredibly strong. His former subordinates became desperate whenever they saw those damn knights in blue armor. The emperor commented that he now seemed to have incurred a debt with the Joshua household. He asked Hillel if he could convey to the head of the family that the imperial palace wished to raise that child. Hillel responded by saying that the emperor's jokes were exaggerated, but the emperor continued, stating that the Holy Empire had an interest in that boy, both internally and externally. He commented that even though he knew the Joshua were very powerful, he questioned whether the so-called Blue Faith was strong enough to protect Isaac. Isaac thought without really understanding what was going on, wondering what the man was trying to say. The emperor explained that the Pope, in particular, would not approve of the boy. The reason was the color of his hair, which symbolized the ancestors of the Holy Empire. In addition, the Skeleton King seemed to be after the child, but Isaac was confused. He himself was the Skeleton King. Why would he go after himself? Hillel then apologized to His Majesty and said that the child was of direct Joshua lineage and should therefore be raised in his own house. He guaranteed that neither the Pope nor the Skeleton King could stand up to the Joshua family, and mentioned that if the Skeleton King appeared again, the former Saint Melissa would be only too happy to face him. The emperor replied that he thought so. Hillel added that he couldn't let a direct descendant of Saint Melissa grow up in the imperial palace. Isaac was stunned to hear that name. He thought it couldn't be the same Melissa he had fought before coming to this world, that crazy saint who was extremely difficult to defeat. So, as well as being a candidate for sainthood born into the holy lineage, he was the son of a saint. Isaac wondered why his life had to be like that. And then it was explained what a saint was. The gods, who had lost countless times to the Skeleton King, wanted more than anything to be able to defeat him one day. So the gods created a supreme weapon with all their efforts. This sacred tool was sent directly from the heavens with the sole aim of destroying all evil. She was called the Lion of the Battlefield, the knight who wielded the sacred light. She represented the great light of the Holy Empire and achieved the rank of highest knight because of her overwhelming power. Because of that saint's strength, everyone believed that the Demon King would see his last days. However, the Skeleton King was merciless and ended up defeating every single saint sent his way. Even so, Isaac thought he had never actually killed a saint, because if a saint died, her divine power returned to the gods. And then they could simply send an even more powerful version. The last one, Melissa, really was very strong, and now he found out that she was his ancestor. Hillel then explained that a saint only exists because of the mission to exterminate the Skeleton King. He told the emperor that the Joshua family was responsible for producing these saints and executing the will of the gods. They were an extremely proud family. Hillel affirmed that the Joshua family had the necessary skills to protect that child. Another knight agreed, saying that many saints had been martyred by the Skeleton King, but Isaac thought to himself that he had never killed any of them. The knight then told him that the Skeleton King had once banished a saint to a labyrinth because he thought she was too weak to fight, but Isaac remembered it differently. He had freed the saint, but she ended up getting lost on her own. Another knight commented that 5 saints had died from illnesses linked to depression and stress. Isaac thought that perhaps they should have gone to hospital. Hillel then looked at him seriously and said that it didn't matter if he was cursed. Everyone was grateful for before his birth. They wished that he would grow up to be as terrifying as the Skeleton King himself. Isaac was unable to react, but in his thoughts, he apologized to the parents he had never met for having been such a bad person. The Emperor then asked Heli to reconsider. He said that the Skeleton King had been sealed away 150 years ago. Isaac was surprised, as he didn't think it had been that long. If Melissa's last fight was when she was about 50, then she would probably be dead by now. But the Emperor went on to explain that during this time, the demons became much stronger. The saint was a valuable resource for increasing the power of the Holy Empire. That's why the boy was also important. What's more, there was no active saint in the Joshua household at the time. It had been a year since the last saint gave birth and disappeared along with the child's father. Isaac wondered if his mother was the saint. He wondered if she was still alive. Heli confirmed it, saying that the matriarch of the family was still alive, and that the Joshua house was capable of protecting that child. Isaac then thought that he could no longer be surprised. Discovering that his mother was the saint was too much for him at that moment. Meanwhile, the knights in blue armor of House Joshua were commenting that Melissa was destroying the Skeleton King's subordinates. Isaac was shocked to learn that she was still alive, even after more than 200 years. The Emperor commented that it would be a while before she returned, and asked if the boy was all right, because he seemed strange. Isaac wondered if it was really all right to discover that his greatest enemy was still alive. If Melissa discovered his true identity, he would be finished immediately. The other people there seemed to accept him, but Melissa was completely insane, and he thought that if he wanted to survive, he would have to act much more carefully from now on. Then Isaac grabbed the Emperor's finger and asked to be taken with him, which made the Emperor completely happy. The Emperor looked away and showed Heli that the boy wanted to go with him, while Heli replied that he was probably just needy. The Emperor pulled the child to himself and said that the Imperial Palace could offer a lot to the young lord, adding that the Joshuas might be experienced in producing saints, but they didn't have the experience to raise a saint, let alone a boy. Heli insisted that the child would become an exorcist knight who would defeat evil, explaining that the Joshua family was known for producing the greatest exorcist knights in history. He declared that Isaac would be the first saint in history, something the Imperial Palace wouldn't know how to deal with. At this point, the two began to pull on Isaac's arms as if they were playing tug of war, and one knight commented that he would end up being torn in half. Isaac thought he wanted to go to the Imperial Palace because when he looked at the Emperor, he felt that the light that reacted with his origin, the same light that shone in the core of his body, was also present in him. He knew he couldn't miss this opportunity. The Emperor said that the young master had made an excellent choice and wondered what that glow was. Meanwhile, outside, Bishop Massa insisted that Isaac was innocent, but said that the baby had used mana and was therefore a demon. The hooded person countered by saying that divine power belonged to the gods themselves, and that they had granted that power to a demon. Bishop Massa retorted by saying that it was mana, and that he would never be confused. Even so, he was accused of blasphemy, and his head was cut off right there. Soon after, another of the hooded men approached and said that they were going to form an assassination squad again. But Harry replied that this wouldn't be necessary, as the Emperor wanted to take the child with him, and there would be plenty of opportunities at the royal palace. He said that this time Isaac wouldn't survive. Inside a carriage, Isaac thought that at that moment he was being taken to Joshua and remembered that everyone was wondering why he was going there. A few days earlier, when he saw that big glow, he wondered what it was that was so strong. Heli commented that Joshua was not a good place to raise a child, and said that their house stored mana cores and demonic bodies, the most precious of which was the body of the Skeleton King. It was then that Isaac asked if his body was there. He thought that maybe he should have stayed in Joshua, and at that moment, he grabbed Heli's hand and said that he wanted to go there now. Heli was extremely moved. Isaac reflected that it was like giving up a life of luxury to serve in the army, but he understood that it was the only way to recover his own body, a body that he himself had refined, accumulating enough mana to fight against the gods themselves. He knew that if he managed to recover that body, reaching rank 10 would be nothing. It was also the first time he had seen the light of a taughtened survivor shine so brightly, and this meant that following Joshua would be extremely beneficial in ensuring his survival. A writer from Joshua then asked why the holy forces were after the young master. Isaac was curious and also wanted to know what it was all about. Heli explained that the gods had sent a prophecy saying that the saint would be welcomed as a son of God, which meant that he could become the next pope. So House Barrett was desperately trying to give birth to a new saint, and at the same time wanting to kill Isaac. He thought confusedly about it all, trying to understand what was going on, until it was explained that the pope was the strongest man in the entire clergy, with the ability to use rank 10 magic, being considered the king of the clergy and also of all the paladins, an absolute being with enough power to challenge even the emperor. Isaac reflected that it made sense for House Barrett to be desperate, since for hundreds of years they had been responsible for giving birth to the Pope, and now that this position could be occupied by a saint, they were panicking. Just then, someone suddenly stopped the carriage, and Hila Wuchis went to check what was going on. It was the coachman himself, warning them that they were approaching the duchy. But there was a problem. A guard appeared saying that they couldn't enter the territory, which annoyed Hilai, who asked him if he didn't recognize the seal of House Esta. But the man replied that they wouldn't allow anyone who carried the blood of a saint to enter, because that child had to be killed. In fact, that guard and the others were demons in disguise, and Isaac was confused when he realized this, as he was sure that he had forbidden demons from attacking humans. The demon then declared that their glorious king had ordered all saints and holy beings to be exterminated. Isaac concluded that there must be a new king among the demons, but the enemy claimed that the order came from the skeleton king himself, called Lord Isaac. Isaac was astonished, not understanding when he would have given such a command. The demon said he would spare everyone there if they handed over the child, but was immediately consumed by divine flames. It was clear that the person responsible for this was Hilai, who was furious and scolded the demon for blaspheming in front of a Joshua exorcist like him. Hilai declared that the demons should pay close attention, because protecting the little things of this world was Joshua's sacred duty, which would destroy all evil and cast all demons back to the confines of hell. He claimed that the skeleton king was a cursed being who forced his subordinates to their deaths because of an immoral desire. The demons were furious at Hilai's words and advanced against the knights. As the fight began, one of the knights grabbed Isaac and ran to protect him. However, at that moment, Isaac activated the origin of survival and released his magic, summoning a spirit. He called on the Watcher's whisper, and the spirit appeared, saying that it had missed its master terribly. Isaac, annoyed, asked it to be quiet so as not to attract attention, but it acknowledged that it was also happy to see him again. Isaac thought that he really thought that the Watcher had already been destroyed, but it was good to meet him again. He had created that being precisely because he didn't have time to detect magic during combat, so the Watcher did it for him. Since gaining consciousness, the spirit had behaved with a personality of its own and commented that its master was still as evil as ever, even saying that he had stolen the body of a child. The spirit was enraged to see that divine magic users had touched its master's body, saying that it didn't accept dirty hands touching a baby. Isaac ordered him to stop talking and start detecting the presence of enemies. The Watcher obeyed and began the magical scan, saying that in a radius of 100 meters around there were a total of 88 enemies, all demons, and guaranteed that none of them would touch Isaac. At this point, the knights were managing to defeat several enemies, but a new presence appeared, something even more frightening. The observer detected the approach of a lich, who was standing right in front of Joshua's knights. The imposing figure asked how they dared to touch their king with those dirty hands. The lich declared that everyone there would pay with their lives, and Isaac wondered what was so powerful about that being. The lich said that his king, his one and only great master, had been unjustly imprisoned in the body of a baby, and that in gratitude for being freed, he had developed a deep appreciation for Isaac. The lich said that no one could even look at his master with those disgusting eyes, or he would tear their eyes out. But luckily, humans couldn't understand the demonic language. The Watcher commented that the whole thing was a mess, while Isaac thought that the lich had probably figured out that he was the skeleton king, and followed him there. The knights then prepared for combat, but Isaac didn't think it had to end that way. He started to get very angry, fighting back and shouting, trying to stop them from fighting, while a knight asked him to calm down, as they would soon sort everything out. The lich noticed that his master had recognized him, acknowledged his existence as well, and then ran towards Isaac, saying that he would stay by his side. Hilai realized that the lich was heading straight towards the young master and became alert. The lich asked how those foolish paladins had managed to seal his master, and Isaac thought he had finally caught his attention, which was great. He knew he couldn't let his mana source die and asked the lich to break the barrier. The lich obeyed without difficulty and destroyed the barrier with a single blow. Isaac smiled discreetly, praised the lich for his good work, and said that now his subject could rest. The lich asked what his master was doing, as he had been sealed again, and wondered why he had done this to him. The paladins were completely shocked, as they had just seen Isaac turn a demon into a totem right before their eyes. Back at the Joshua house, everyone started celebrating, saying that Isaac had turned a demon into a totem in a few seconds. They said he possessed the sacred art of the saints and cardinals. However, Isaac knew that it wasn't sacred art, it was magic. Hilai commented that it did look like a sacred art of totem transformation, and he was impressed to see a child using such an advanced technique, even more so without feeling any divine energy coming from him at the moment of use. Hilai believed that the lich ran towards the young master because it realized he was a threat and focused only on him. A knight commented that Isaac really did seem to have divine powers and was sure that he would be the saint. But Hilai thought he was wrong. That demon ran into a child, and even if he wasn't a saint, he was certainly someone special. He reflected on the Skeleton King's curse and wondered why this had to happen to a boy, since the men of House Joshua suffered from this curse. Then a knight said that he had already made up his mind. As commander of the Knights of Azuri, he would protect the young master Isaac, as he believed him to be the hope of House Joshua. Hillai was a little taken aback, but he recognized that he had been a fool. Instead of worrying so much about the Skeleton King's curse, he should have seen that this child could be the real hope. Hillai then said that they could go home now, because he, as an uncle, would teach Isaac many things and said that he had great potential. Isaac thought that he didn't care whether he became a paladin or not. He just wanted his body back. Hillai said that even if Isaac was destined for an extremely short life, he would find a way to save him, and assured him that his name would be known throughout the continent. Isaac was confused and wanted to know what this short life was all about. Hillai changed the subject and said that as soon as they got home, he would teach Isaac how to curse the Skeleton King, which made Isaac think that those damn bastards were up to something. Later, at the Joshua House mansion, the place was well decorated, full of ornaments, beautiful and luxurious. Isaac wondered if they had so much fun while they were exterminating the demon race, and how much that mansion must have cost. He thought that those bourgeois scoundrels were living there well, while the demons were starving, and he himself had gone through a lot of hardship just to feed his people. The Watcher commented that that castle was a paradise compared to the garbage castle they had in hell, saying that if they sold the statues there, they could buy 10 brand new castles. Isaac thought he had understood and told him to shut up. Hillai introduced the place, saying that this was the mansion of Joshua House, the continent where exorcism originated, and promised that she would teach him everything when he grew up. There they were all beating up a Skeleton King doll, beating, cursing, and swearing at the figure, as part of training. Isaac thought it was strange that they were teaching that to children, but he figured it didn't matter. Since joining the Holy Empire, he had decided to make the Emperor his personal puppy. The Watcher commented that even if he was the Skeleton King, it was ugly to hurt little children, to which Isaac replied that he should just keep watching. The Watcher agreed and began the magical scan, detecting several magical points scattered around the mansion. Isaac noticed that there were many monocores in the place, more than 100, and the observer confirmed that he had never seen so many either. When they finally arrived and got off the carriage, Hillai ordered them to rearrange his room, as Isaac would be staying with him. But the servants apologized and informed him that they had been ordered to take Isaac to the annex. Hillai asked what they meant by the annex, and the servants explained that it was the 5th young master who had determined that he could not enter the main house. Hillai was indignant and asked if they were really sending Isaac to a cursed place where people died. Isaac thought that this was clearly a family feud and realized that he should have noticed it before. Hillai remarked that his older brother always made these kinds of jokes. Isaac wondered why he should go to the annex if there was such a big mansion there, but the observer whispered in his ear that the manticore was in the annex. Even so, Hillai said she wouldn't let her nephew enter that cursed house. Isaac was torn, as he wanted to go to the annex, while Hillai insisted that he go to the bedroom, saying that she would read him stories from the sacred scriptures and then teach him how to recite an exorcism made especially for the Skeleton King. Isaac thought that Hillai really wanted to exorcise him. At that moment, someone appeared and questioned Hillai, saying that first he had brought that vermin, and now he wanted to cause trouble. He claimed that it was he himself who had sent the child to the annex and complained that Hillai, after disappearing for so long, was now showing up to defy his older brother's orders. That man was the first son of House Joshua, Gowel Joshua. Isaac, looking at him, thought what a jerk he was. Gowel ordered them to put that little thing down, as he would take Isaac to the annex himself. Hillai asked if he was serious, remembering that the child was part of the direct lineage of Joshua House, and now they wanted to send him to live in the warehouse. Isaac concluded that that idiot didn't want him to stay in the main house, but he still wanted to go to the annex. Even if Gowel was a complete asshole, he felt that was where he needed to be. Gowel said that that little child was more disgusting than the body of the Skeleton King, and asked if they really thought he was of direct lineage. Isaac thought he'd go to the annex anyway, because he wanted to go there anyway, but he wondered who that asshole was. In the end, whatever. He wanted to go to the annex to absorb the monocore. Hillai explained that they were trying to brand Isaac as a cursed child just to prevent him from entering the family line of succession. Isaac was startled by the word succession and realized that this could be a much bigger problem than he had imagined. He concluded that he needed to suck up everything that man had, because then he could become a saint and then the new pope. This was necessary so that he could take revenge on those damned gods. Gowel retorted by saying that it was clear that they were trying to stop him because demons had already appeared to hunt that boy, which showed that he was already cursed. However, one of the knights replied that it wasn't quite like that, since Isaac had exorcised one of the demons, and the fact that the demon was now focused on him was proof that he was special. Gowel scoffed that it was funny to see everyone so angry trying to cover up that piece of garbage and told everyone to shut up. He teased that if Isaac really was a saint, he should prove his abilities. The Watcher asked the Master if they should show him something, but Hillai just thought he should shut up at once. Then Gowl, with more sarcasm, said that if he was really a saint, he should try to save the family symbol or anything else that would be useful. He said that the head of the family would love to see that tree revive. Gowl explained that it was a divine tree that died after absorbing demonic energy and said that if Isaac really had the power of a saint, he could revive the tree easily. Isaac remembered that Melissa was a hard worker, but that her children seemed like idiots. However, when he looked at the tree, Isaac noticed something strange and asked if the Watcher wasn't seeing it. The Watcher replied that he should go and get it. Hillai said that no one had managed to save the tree in the last 70 years, and now they were waiting for a child to do it, but suddenly they all felt something very intense coming from the direction of the tree. Hillai was amazed to realize that the divine tree had been revived. It was there, alive and full. Goel, shocked, said that not even sacred purification arts had achieved this and asked how it was possible. Isaac thought it was no big deal, as there was only a mana full of demonic residue on the branches, so the Watcher went over and ate it all. One of the knights asked if Hillai had done it, but he denied it. Then they asked if it had been Isaac, who only replied awkwardly that it had only been mana, thinking it was all a bit shameful. Everyone started to get emotional when they realized that it had really been young Master Isaac. But Gowl, annoyed, said that everyone was crazy, because no one had managed to save that tree, so how could a simple child have done it? However, no one paid any attention to him. Everyone ignored him completely and began to greet young Master Isaac with enthusiasm. Gowl said that Hillai had certainly done something, so he grabbed his arm and accused him of purifying the tree by pretending to be that damn baby. Isaac thought it wasn't the best time for Melissa to be out killing monsters. She needed to get home soon and raise her own children. He thought that older brother Gowl didn't look like Melissa at all, while Hillai was like a version of her dressed as a man. The observer wondered if they weren't half-brothers, and Isaac thought it made sense, since Hillai didn't really look like her father, unlike Gowl. Gowl was still furious and said they were hiding the truth. He accused everyone of pretending, and that they wanted to push that kid as a new candidate to take the throne. Isaac began to wonder if there was another candidate in that house and who the idiot was who was favoring it. The observer commented that Isaac seemed pretty calm for someone who was in the middle of all that mess. Hillai asked Gowl if he really wanted them to abandon the child, since he was their nephew, their older brother's son, and had a right to be there. Gowl called him an idiot and said that their older brother was a deserter who had fled the house when it was in danger. According to him, now everyone had to take care of the trash of a son he left behind. Isaac finally understood why they were treating him that way and thought that everything was getting more interesting. Gowl said that it was all right. He could even be the son of a saint, a half-breed brought in from outside to become a new saint, since his brother's wife was a saint, but he wondered if that child really was his son. At that moment, Hillai punched Gowl and sank his face into the ground. Gowl, surprised, asked if he had really hit him, and Hillai replied by asking if he thought he didn't deserve to be hit after saying that. Isaac thought it was normal, since brothers always fight, and he himself had learned many things like that in the past. Of course, everyone tried to break up the fight, but deep down Isaac was happy to see that the family was so united, because that would make it much easier for him to take advantage and destroy that damned woman's entire house. The Watcher commented that if the house was destroyed, he would end up being destroyed too, but Hillai just mentally told him to shut up. Later, inside the castle, Isaac was sulking, upset about something. He thought he was getting angrier and angrier because no one in that house seemed to be normal. He was sitting at a conference table where some people were commenting that by turning that poor girl of unknown origin into a saint, she should have been grateful instead of giving birth to a useless boy. Isaac thought that those bastards couldn't stop talking about him for a moment, but then a woman silenced them all. She was Henna Joshua, the second wife of the head of the family. She questioned Hillai, saying that one of the secondary families had promised to look after the boy, so she wanted to know why he had brought him to the main house. Isaac saw on her face how much he hated him, and concluded that it was surely she who had wanted to send him to the annex. When he looked closely, he realized that she could only be the mother of that Gowl. Gowl reinforced the question by saying that the mother was speaking as the head of the family and wanted to know why Hillai wasn't answering. Hillai calmly asked if their father had officially left that position to her, and replied that he had only left for a short while. Hillai said that it was a real pity, as she wanted to tell her father in person that the boy Isaac had managed to revive the divine tree. Everyone was impressed, but Gowl stood up saying that it was just a coincidence, stating that a child could never do something like that, and that the tree was only saved because the faithful of the house of Joshua had been praying all along. One of the elders agreed with Gowell, saying that the head of the family had exhausted himself trying to find a solution to the problem. So it didn't make sense that a mere child had managed to save the divine tree. Henna reinforced the elder's opinion, saying that this was exactly what she thought too, and said that there was no concrete proof of this. However, another elder interrupted, saying that even without proof, it was undeniable that the fact that the tree had been saved was still a blessing. Isaac, irritated, thought that if it was proof they wanted, then that was exactly what he was going to show. Everyone was completely shocked by what happened next. He began to accumulate an enormous amount of energy in front of everyone. The concentration of power was so great that everyone was incredulous, their eyes wide and their mouths open. What he was accumulating was the energy of the divine tree itself. He even tried to respond to their provocation. But what came out was just a baby talk, which made the situation even stranger. Even so, everyone felt the presence of that ancient and powerful energy. Some thought it sounded like the energy of the Skeleton King himself, the bastard they had mentioned earlier. Henna became worried and thought that Hilai was digging her own grave by defending that child so much. So she asked for permission to test the boy and requested access to the Vault of Divine Artifacts. Meanwhile, to the northwest of the Holy Empire, in the Black Forest, a monstrous creature was being beheaded at that very moment. The person responsible for the act said that the whole thing was a complete waste of time. A knight approached soon after and gave a respectful salute to the lord of the house, informing him that the deputy leader had asked permission to use the Vault of Divine Artifacts. The chief, however, replied that he had already made it clear beforehand that no one could have access to the sacred vision. The knight explained that the deputy leader didn't want the sacred vision. She just wanted access to the vault to determine whether the boy really was a saint, since he had saved the divine tree. The chief was confused and asked how so, wanting to know why they were saying there was a saint inside his own house. This man was the head of Joshua House, called Eli Joshua. He declared that he refused the request, saying that the place would kill anyone who wasn't a true candidate for sainthood, and ordered them not to pick useless fights, stating that there would be no exceptions. But then a woman approached them firmly and told them to let it happen. It was Melissa Joshua who confirmed that it was Isaac who had done it. She said that the thought of that kid saving the divine tree was really promising. She then proposed that if they were going to open the vault, they should throw all the candidates for sainthood in at once. The knight warned that the son of another house could end up with the most powerful artifact, but Melissa replied that she preferred that. According to her, someone who could accomplish this feat deserved it more than anyone, since not even the greatest saints in history had managed to take that artifact. She explained that, with that artifact in hand, it would even be possible to track down the Skeleton King and kill him once and for all. In fact, Melissa said that they should reward whoever managed to bring that object back. She ordered the knight to spread the message that the child who brought the best artifact would be granted a reward that not even the Pope could offer. Not only would they be given the saint's heirloom passed down from generation to generation by House Joshua, but she herself would personally teach secret techniques, ensuring that the child had everything necessary to achieve success. It was then explained that the chest in question had held divine artifacts and secret techniques for thousands of years. For generations, it had been up to the saint to protect that sacred chest and prevent it from falling into the wrong hands. Joshua House could be considered the owner of that sacred vault, since only children under the age of 10 could enter. The chest was used in rituals on the first birthday of candidates for sainthood. During the ritual, the child's future was predicted based on the item they took out of the safe. However, the place was extremely dangerous. Even would-be saints could easily die in there. Because of the deaths and losses accumulated over the years, the vault was eventually sealed. The observer commented that he now wondered if Isaac would be able to get the treasure out of the saint safely, and Isaac got angry, wondering why he was playing the narrator. But the observer asked him if he wasn't excited, and Isaac replied that of course he was, not least because they said that the body of the Skeleton King was sealed in that place. Then someone approached him asking if he was excited, and it was one of the knights who told him that the matriarch had released the vault to all the candidates for sainthood. He also said that the children of the 5 great houses were going to get together and visit the house of that terrible pope. He said he was sure that Isaac would win. The observer commented that the event would be bigger than expected, but Isaac thought it was for the best. With several children entering at the same time, the watchers would have their attention divided, which would make it easier for him to recover the body he was looking for. However, the knight warned Isaac to be careful. It was Hilai who explained that demons captured during the war were guarding the vault. Isaac wondered if that was why the place was so dangerous, but thought that if they were demons of rank 6 or lower, he could easily control them. However, Hilai said that the demons inside the vault were rank 8, which meant that they wouldn't be easy enemies to face. Isaac wondered who had managed to capture a rank 8 demon, but the knight revealed that the most dangerous thing there was a rank 9 dragon. Hillai confirmed the information, and the Watcher commented that House Joshua must have been full of crazy people to put a dragon in a baby's first birthday ritual. Even so, he said that his extensive knowledge of dragons might help Isaac deal with it, and asked why he was so afraid. Isaac thought that dragons were dangerous in a different way, since in the past he used to trick dragons instead of facing them for real. The observer asked him how many dragons he had tricked, and Isaac, remembering everyone who had been furious with him, mentally counted about 70. He thought that was a bad thing, because surely the dragons would remember him and recognize him by his soul. The observer commented that it sounded like a great opportunity to change masters, and Isaac said that he had heard that, but had no choice. The vault was full of rank 8 demons and a rank 9 dragon, and with his current skills, he could only deal with demons up to rank 5. To beat them, he thought he would have to infiltrate the annex, where all the spoils of war were kept, and steal all the mana cores he could to strengthen himself. Later, already inside the castle, Isaac was in his room and looked dejected. The observer asked if everything was all right, because he looked like he was about to be exorcised. And at that moment, as if it were part of a broadcast video, a message appeared saying that if the viewer hadn't yet left a like, they should do so now and subscribe to the channel to support the content, encouraging the continuation of these quality stories. After the message, the narrative continued as normal. Isaac thought that if he could figure out how to use the sacred power, he would be able to learn the sacred arts easily. The problem was that he still didn't know how to do it. He even wondered if he should use mind control on someone to learn, but the Watcher called him crazy for trying to use magic within the clergy, saying that he would be accused of being a demon and end up dead. Isaac thought that his personality had changed a lot in the last 150 years and concluded that, after all, theory alone wouldn't help. He needed something more practical, even if it was risky. Then, when he started to get tired, someone picked him up, and it was Hillai, saying that he had already been through a lot that day. Isaac thought it was true after all. At that age, he needed to sleep at least 16 hours a day. But then the knight noticed the book Isaac was reading, and at that moment, Hillai used a sacred art of recovery on him. Isaac thought it was great, and thought that now he wanted to learn from that uncle. But the Watcher said that they needed to go to another building, so they had to get people out of there as soon as possible. Isaac agreed, thinking that those people really needed to leave soon, so he pretended to go to sleep. The observer wondered who would fall for that act, but they both believed him and commented that he had fallen asleep so quickly that he was cute. As the guys started to leave, the observer commented that Isaac had a great family. Just then, Hillai told them to put away the totem Isaac had made because it was his first. Isaac thought he needed to get it back because he needed the mana from the totem, so he decided that since he had reached this point, he would extract a whole mana core. He started to climb out of the cradle, and the observer asked him if he thought he could get there by crawling. Isaac replied that he would, because he had a plan, and asked the observer to open the door. The observer said he wouldn't carry him and explained that, unfortunately, the door was locked with a sacred art. Isaac ordered the door to be broken down, but the Watcher said that they might think it was an attack. Isaac got very angry because he couldn't stand by, but he knew that if he used magic there, things would get even worse. It was at that moment that someone opened the door right in his face. It was another child who was also carrying a totem pole in his hand, and commented that the one who had knocked on the door was a baby who couldn't even walk. That child was Shuri, Gowl's son, who looked at Isaac and began to wonder if that baby was really his rival. Shuri couldn't believe that a baby like that had managed to make a totem pole, while he, a genius, hadn't yet. So he started accumulating divine magic, and said he would become the next saint, questioning how Isaac dared try to steal his position. Only Isaac just held a toy up to Shuri's face and thought his transportation had arrived. Shuri asked him if he knew who he was, and Isaac thought that the kid looked just like Gowl, so he was definitely his son. He realized very well that the boy was accumulating holy power to attack him, so he decided to beat him up first. Isaac started hitting Shuri several times, thinking that the kid was going to carry him outside. The boy was being thoroughly beaten until he finally defended himself with a defensive spell. Shuri, still surprised, asked if Isaac was impressed, as he was the only one his age who could use rank 3 defensive holy arts. Shuri warned them not to be surprised by that alone, so he used a sacred art of attack called Holy Light and launched it at Isaac. But Isaac thanked him for the meal, created a barrier around himself, and began to devour all that power. Shuri couldn't understand how he managed to do it, while Isaac thought his uncle had never taught him, so he got curious and ended up learning it himself. It was as if he was giving all the power back to Shuri and thanking him for showing it to him. The boy barely had time to react, and Isaac threw all the absorbed energy back at him, while the other two just watched as Shuri was hit. The observer commented that it was quite impressive, but asked if it was all right to kill the boy. Isaac replied that he hadn't killed anyone, as none of the attacks had really hit. Even without being hit directly, Shuri was furious and warned that this couldn't be done to a candidate for sainthood. It was then that a figure appeared asking him how he dared attack his king. It was the Lich, who was trapped inside the totem pole, and he threatened the boy, asking if he wanted to die. Shuri was completely terrified as Isaac climbed onto the demon's shoulder and said that he wanted that bastard to carry him. Later, from Shuri's perspective, he remembered that he was destined to become a saint. He thought he would leave that cursed house and become the Pope, but now he was there being enslaved by a baby. He didn't understand why he had to do it, but he knew it was the Lich who was forcing him. The demon was ordering that useless little guide to take him faster, and Shuri only thought that perhaps it would be better to focus on surviving first. They approached the annex, with Isaac riding like a little horse, and Shuri was already dying of exhaustion. He wondered where that boy wanted to go so late at night, until he realized that they were in front of Joshua Manor, the second annex. Shuri recognized the place and remembered that it was said to be cursed. He wondered why that crazy baby had taken him there, since the head of the family had warned them not to go near that place. The observer commented that there were hundreds of mana cores in there, and that Isaac would be much more powerful with them. Shuri asked if Isaac really wanted to go in, pointing out that they could die, but the Lich told the little worm to keep moving. Inside, they walked through the old, dust-covered corridors. Isaac found everything much messier than he had imagined, until he noticed something strange. The Watcher explained that the whole place was sealed off, and that each door had a magical barrier. Shuri told Isaac that they had to go back, because everything was locked and there was no way through. It was then that Isaac was startled by something, and started pulling Shuri's hair, who asked him to stop, but Isaac wanted to see the portraits of the former heads of the family. Shuri was astonished to discover that Isaac had wanted that all along, and told him not to even think about it, because that position was his. But Isaac simply launched an attack on the middle picture, shattering the painting of the ancestors. Shuri was shocked, because Isaac was breaking everything. Isaac thought that if that was the case, they should have put barriers on the paintings too. The observer noticed that the barrier had started to disappear, so it had worked. Isaac got off Shuri's back and rolled around on the floor, while Shuri said that he couldn't go out and break everything like that. Even so, Isaac opened one of the doors and said it was right there. He asked the Watcher to close the doors, but Shuri ran after him, asking what he was planning to do. Isaac thought that boy didn't need to know anything, so when the doors closed, he began to concentrate on absorbing the mana from there. Shuri started banging on the door, asking Isaac to get out. At that moment, someone also entered the annex. It was Hilai, along with a group of knights, and he asked what Shuri was doing there. Shuri replied that it was Isaac, that little monster, but the old woman asked what that meant, since they had made it very clear that it was forbidden to enter the annex. And yet Shuri still went in and took Isaac with him. Several people had seen him carrying Isaac to that place, and had even noticed traces of sacred magic along the way. They asked if it was Shuri's fault, and he tried to deny it, but ended up saying yes, that he had used a sacred art and brought Isaac there. Hilai approached and said that Shuri had crossed the line. He said he understood how the boy felt, but reminded him that Isaac was just a child, and asked where he had locked him up. Shuri replied that he hadn't locked anyone up, because Isaac had locked himself up. But just then, Isaac slammed the door from the inside, and the rest of the group accused Shuri of having done it, saying that it was horrible. When Hilai opened the door, he found Isaac crying a lot and visibly frightened. The elderly woman commented that he was in shock, feeling sorry for the boy, while Hilai said that he looked shocked but was fine. He then cast a stern look at Shuri, saying that he should be ashamed of what he had done. Shuri swore it wasn't him, but Isaac, behind it all, gave a broad smile and said, "Thanks for the snack, asshole," only in baby language, so no one understood. Shuri just replied angrily, saying that the little pest was mocking him. Isaac thought that he had gotten much more mana than he had expected, the equivalent of an entire century. With all that accumulated energy, he could finally start the plan he had been preparing. The next morning, someone came into Isaac's room, saying they had someone to introduce him to. It was Hilai, bringing a woman called Asili Larsh, and introducing her as the new person responsible for looking after Isaac. She introduced herself as Asili Larsh, a paladin of House Joshua, and declared that she would serve Isaac until his last breath. Isaac wondered if they were putting someone to watch over him, because of what had happened the day before. Then, in baby language, he said he didn't need her and sent her away. The people present were a little shocked by this, but Asili only asked Hilai for permission to squeeze his cheek at least once. Isaac internally wondered why it seemed like there were only crazy people in that place. But Hilai still had one more surprise for Isaac. He brought a present and said it was something special from his uncle. When Isaac saw it, he asked if he had found it on the floor, thinking it was strange. The observer commented that he had heard that the fortunes of the Joshua house were shaken, but now it seemed to be worse than they had imagined. Asili asked if that object was a treasure of the saint, and Hillai explained that he got the item from the elders to give to his beloved nephew. Isaac examined the object and realized that it was a ring worn by a saint during the battle against the Skeleton King. It was an ancient ring, which contained a small miracle from the gods and possessed an unbelievable amount of holy power. Isaac thought that, the way he was now, he would only be able to use that power once or twice, but he also knew that there was a way to fix it. Besides, he noticed that Gowl looked annoyed and concluded that the guy's face couldn't hide the truth. It was confirmation that that ring really was real. Gowl approached with a forced smile and commented that his nephew Isaac was always so friendly, asking if he had gotten used to the house yet. The observer commented that he had finally gone mad. Gowl thought that things were getting very strange. First, the blessing device in the safe had been broken to prevent Isaac from getting one. Then he was given a treasure from the saint. When this treasure was given to Hillai, he of course questioned it and asked them to give a similar gift to his own son as well. The old woman replied by saying that Shuri had already received a blessing directly from Santa Cedes and that he shouldn't be greedy. Gowl thought that he should have donated that ring to the Santa Cedes and then tried to get it back, but now they had given it to him without even knowing what it really was. Gowl turned to Hillai and told him to give the boy a real present, not a piece of junk. Hillai got angry and asked how he could dare call an item of the saint's trash. Gowl then told his precious nephew Isaac that there was no point in keeping that useless object, since he wouldn't even be able to use it properly. He then showed him a much nicer ring and explained that it had received countless blessings from the Holy Seat and would be much more useful. Even Hillai himself hadn't been able to get one like that. Isaac approached calmly, but suddenly slapped Gowl hard across the face, closed the ring box and threw the gift away, saying that the garbage was good for the dogs. The ring fell into the water, and Hillai thought that, visually, it looked much more precious than the one he had given to his nephew. Even so, Isaac chose to keep the ring Hillai had given him, and everyone around started celebrating again, saying that Isaac was always the best. Meanwhile, some people started looking for the ring that had been thrown. Isaac thought he had used magic to make it extremely heavy, so no one would be able to find it. The watcher commented that he was impressed by the boy's determination never to touch anything from a rat, but Isaac said that he wanted the watcher to find that ring early that morning, because even though it wasn't that useful, he could sell it for a lot of money. Later in Gowl's office, he was completely furious. He wondered if they knew how much that ring cost. Still, he said it was fine. It wasn't as if Isaac could wear an elder ring properly. It was a good item for someone who couldn't use holy arts, but it still couldn't be activated without first absorbing holy power equivalent to that of several people. Gowl commented that on Isaac's first birthday, there would probably only be about 10 people. However, on the day of the ceremony, the number of guests was much higher than expected. Asili Larsh told Isaac that it was impressive. There were 148 candidates for sainthood, and more than 4,000 servants and aristocrats gathered there. All the houses of dukes and marquises were present. She also said that she had heard rumors that even other countries had sent their own candidates for sainthood, and she thought that was incredible. Isaac, however, didn't find any of this pleasant. He was totally annoyed by the situation. He thought that, theoretically, saints were sent from heaven, or at least that's what they always said, but now they seemed to be falling from the sky too much. Hillai was also surprised and said that it was really unexpected. He thought that everyone would suspect a trap and that no one would come. But then someone came in calling for his friend, and it was Count Simon Aegis, Hillai's childhood friend. Hillai asked what Simon was doing there, and he replied that if all the families of the Empire had come, he would too. He said that the rumor was that the weak men of House Joshua would take part in the ceremony, so everyone had come to see for themselves if it wasn't a trap. Simon commented that the matriarch of the Joshua house had set a great reward, and wondered how people didn't come here. He even said that not even the Pope's house had resisted the call. Hillai couldn't believe it and asked what that meant, saying that the Pope's house would never come to Joshua. Simon replied that all that powerful royalty shouldn't come, but they still showed up. The Barrett said that only they were worthy of power and that no one else deserved it, but the truth was that they were all there. Hillai asked Simon to keep his voice down, but he replied that his own son was also a candidate for sainthood, and that since Joshua was hosting the whole thing, the Pope's family shouldn't get involved, but they clearly had. Hillai explained that this was why everyone had to be careful with their words, until someone opened the door saying that there was nothing more dangerous than a vulgar friend. It was Bishop Barrett who appeared to say that the old sayings were never wrong. Hillai then turned around, confused, wanting to know what Cardinal Barrett was doing there. Barrett replied that the weak boy from the Joshua family was hosting the first anniversary ritual and that he was praying that this boy would manage to get something valuable out of the vault, something that would save his reputation. He was especially curious to see with his own eyes the child of the Joshua lineage, who claimed to be a candidate for sainthood, but who had not yet appeared. Barrett saw the situation as a great opportunity community and hoped that the candidate for sainthood, Joshua, would succeed in raising his family's name. Meanwhile, Hilai wondered if everyone there had fallen into the Holy See's trap, as he found it very strange that the number of candidates for sainthood had risen from 25 to 148 in just 1 week. It didn't make sense. The only explanation was that the Holy See had ignored all the proper criteria and approved any child, just to favor its own vested interests. Everyone wanted their own child to be chosen as a saint. If all those children were thrown into the vault together, they would end up dealing with weaker competitors. It seemed like the perfect scenario for a dark plan to be put into action. Hilai then turned around, worried, and thought that Isaac might be in danger. It was then explained that men born into the Joshua lineage, despite their impressive appearance and family reputation, were generally considered worthless. Even so, many desired their superior blood or sought the approval of the almighty Pope, and so a Joshua man was always tempting prey. It was common to see people trying to get these children to interact with a descendant of Joshua, not to kill him directly, but to ensure that he wouldn't be able to do anything. For this reason, many mixed sacred poison into the drinks of the children of the Joshua lineage. In fact, everyone present that year had done it. They had poisoned the drinks to ensure the death of the Joshua heir. Only to everyone's shock, Isaac was simply drinking all the poison as if it were an ordinary drink. No one could believe it. He took it all as if it were water, and even commented sarcastically that he didn't feel any effect. The other children were terrified, not understanding how he didn't pass out or even get sick. Some began to cry, saying they wanted to go home. Isaac, on the other hand, threw the bottle at one of the children's heads and demanded more drink. The other children became desperate. The adults watched in disbelief as he showed no signs of pain or poisoning, not even a simple stomach ache. Shuri couldn't understand why Isaac kept drinking that liquid and hadn't realized he was ingesting poison. Shuri begged Isaac to stop drinking it, desperately asking him to drink real water. But Isaac, without caring, threw the bottle back and said that it didn't have poison in it. He wanted the one with poison and demanded it as if it were candy. One of the children, frightened, told him that her bottle had sacred poison in it, and everyone started saying that Isaac could die if he took it. But he just jumped on it, saying he wanted it now. The people around him began to comment that perhaps he had immunity to poison or something similar. Someone mentioned that there was a kind of training with holy power that made a person invulnerable to poisons like that, and they wondered if Isaac had already reached that level. Shuri, confused, tried to understand what everyone was talking about until a new figure approached. It was Kina Barrett, the candidate for Saint of the Barrett House, and Shuri recognized him immediately. She hadn't known that someone from the Pope's house would be there. Everyone was very impressed to see that even the Pope's direct heir was taking part in the selection. They commented to each other that, for sure, Kina Barrett would be the winner. When Isaac saw this boy, he understood that he was the one chosen from within to be the next saint. But he began to wonder if Barrett had really given birth to someone with that shade of hair, since no one in the Barrett family had brown hair. Kina then began to speak confidently, saying that it made no sense for someone like Isaac to be there. He reminded everyone that the Pope was the leader of all the clergy and that the property belonged to his house, so he was just taking what was rightfully his. Isaac realized right away that this boy really was from the Pope's house, mainly because of the arrogance with which he spoke. Even so, he recognized that he was a monster, probably stronger than any creature he had ever faced. That's why he was at the top of the list of candidates. Kina declared that everyone there was an idiot for trying to end the child of the Joshua bloodline. He said that it wasn't possible that Isaac was controlling his immunity to the poison on his own, and claimed that Saint's power was probably protecting the boy. With a wry smile, he said that he could cure him if he wanted to. Isaac, however, understood that this boy was using divine power to attract attention and promote himself in front of others. So without warning, he gave Kina a blow to the head, leaving everyone in shock. People began to wonder if Kina's divine power had disappeared, and even he was surprised, not understanding what had happened. He wondered if the power had been absorbed by Isaac, and doubted whether that child was actually stronger than him. In his thoughts, he called Isaac the trash of the Zesta house. But Isaac, with his baby talk, responded aggressively, saying that he was going to finish him off, which only frightened those present even more. Shuri, seeing the tension rising, quickly appeared to protect Isaac, but not because she wanted to protect him, but because she knew that if she didn't, everyone there would end up taking a bottle to the head. Meanwhile, Kina continued to watch Isaac intently, and the others began to wonder if the Joshua family really believed they could take on the Pope's house. Shuri, however, remained convinced that his role there was to protect the others from Isaac, not the other way around. Kina, with a polite smile, tried to put an end to the situation by saying that everything was fine, that Isaac had only been scared because he was just a baby. He wished the children of the Joshua line good luck, suggesting that they should choose any toy in the safe just to save the family's reputation. reputation. Finally, he declared that the real treasure of the place was rightfully his, and that the Joshua family would never have the chance to go near the body of the Skeleton King. Shuri complained to himself that that boy was extremely annoying, but Isaac was furious and began to wonder what that idiot had just said. When he realized that it had been about the body of the Skeleton King, he became even more annoyed. Shuri then explained that the matriarch had said that whoever got the body of the Skeleton King would receive a special technique directly from her. Isaac had no idea about this, and when he understood, he was filled with rage and thought to himself, calling Melissa a wretch for playing this kind of game with his body. Later, Isaac continued to drink more poison while reflecting on everything that was happening. He remembered that he had spent hundreds of years cultivating mana inside his previous body, and if he could get that body back, reaching Hilaric 10 would be a simple task. However, he also knew that there were several children trying the same thing, which made everything more complicated. Even so, he decided that it didn't matter because he would simply eliminate anyone who stood in the way. Suddenly, someone came forward and asked everyone to gather around. He said that they were about to leave and that everyone should pay attention to the instructions. He explained that this was the sacred place where the treasure was kept, but Isaac was already getting impatient, thinking that the guy was going to start another one of his tiresome speeches. Without waiting for anyone, he got up and went straight to the front, moving with great haste. Shuri noticed and asked where he was going, but Isaac was already too far ahead, walking too fast to hear anything. Shuri then warned the elder that Isaac was heading straight for the treasure area. The elder reacted in shock, saying that the area was forbidden because the path was full of traps. Desperate, he ordered everyone to stop that little pest immediately. Meanwhile, in the main room of the Joshua family mansion, Asile was extremely worried. She said she hoped the young master was all right. It was then that the hologram finally connected with the treasure room, and one of the people present told them that they would finally be able to see everything live thanks to the tracking ability they were using. They informed them that the door to the first chamber had already been opened and that the candidates were already inside. Third place went to Amona Eges, which made Simon react with emotion, calling him his baby boy. Second place went to Shuri Joshua, and Gowl reacted with confusion, asking what that meant, but then he was very proud, saying that this was his little boy. The judge then paused for a moment before announcing who was in first place, and said that it was Isaac Joshua, who at that moment was running at an absurd speed. The old man ran after him and shouted, asking why he was going in that direction, warning that there might be traps. It was at that very moment that the old man himself fell into a trap, taking a direct blow to the head. As a result, all the children who had followed ended up activating various traps along the way, turning the whole place into complete chaos. Shuri, running through the confusion, wondered why that madman was in such a hurry. He commented that the tests to get the treasure were difficult enough, and now everyone would have to avoid traps thanks to the recklessness of that damned kid. It was at this point that Isaac finally reached the gate of the second chamber, and soon afterwards, it was announced that the second round of traps had been activated. Shuri realized that this was the wrong way to go, but the Watcher, who was following everything, praised him, saying that the young master had done a good job. Thanks to the mana core they had absorbed, he had quickly risen in rank. Isaac was pleased and replied mentally that this was great because now the Watcher could push himself even harder. He then ordered him to go after him with everything. The other candidates, already exhausted, began to slow down. Many said they hadn't known the test would be so difficult, until one of them noticed something strange. It was as if that boy from the Joshua lineage was floating. Some began to wonder what was going on, trying to understand if it was some form of flight magic. Shuri soon realized what was happening and thought that everyone there was an idiot, because Isaac wasn't flying of his own free will. He was being pulled against his will. It was then that the Watcher threw Shuri hard to the ground, causing him to fall right in front of Isaac. As soon as he raised his face, Shuri called Isaac crazy and warned him that he might have made it through the first chamber, but he would never make it through the second. However, before he could continue speaking, Shuri was struck on the head by another bolt of lightning, abruptly interrupting his speech. Isaac, already irritated, thought that he really was very boring and that he didn't care about his opinion. Even so, he demanded that he explain how the second chamber worked. Shuri, even in a daze, managed to tell him that once you entered the second chamber, you couldn't attack any enemy, no matter what. That was the only way to pass the test. He reinforced that all you had to do was wait for 3 minutes until the enemies disappeared on their own. Isaac then thought it was just a test of patience and found it all very cliche. Even so, Shuri explained that several people had already died from ignoring this simple rule. Isaac, impatient, replied that he understood, that all he had to do was wait and do nothing for 3 minutes. He didn't think it was a big deal. He then opened the door to the so-called Chamber of Tranquility, while ironically muttering that patience was a virtue and that true reasoning came from calm. The aim was not to get carried away by anger and to maintain serenity, because patience would lead one to the light. Meanwhile, further back, Kina was going his own way. One of his subordinates asked if everything was all right, given that they were among the last placed. But Kina calmly replied that there was no need to rush, as he didn't want to take any reckless risks. He explained that the meat shields, i.e. the less important candidates, had already moved on. Besides, he knew that a rank 8 demon guarded the entrance to the next chamber, and he was sure that the other candidates would be defeated by this creature before he had to make any effort. Kina then pointed to the door at the back, which was beginning to open with a great glow, and said that the real challenge was about to begin. As the doors to the chamber opened, Isaac began to tense up. He wasn't nervous because of the test itself, but because the person who appeared before him was one of the damn gods who had taken part in his sealing. While the god was saying that patience was the only way to avoid death, Isaac, overcome with hatred, was already shooting lightning at him. Shuri, desperate, asked what he had done, remembering that he had promised not to attack anyone for just 3 minutes. Shuri then shouted that he was an idiot, and now the chamber was opening for punishment. Isaac, however, thought that there was no way he could remain calm with that god right in front of him. The observer, following everything, commented that he had even resisted well, since he had lasted 3 whole seconds, which was more than he had expected. The camera system then announced that he had failed. Those who cannot maintain patience must face divine punishment. It was at this moment that a gigantic golem appeared before them. Shuri looked at the situation and thought that they were completely screwed, as there was no way of beating this creature, believing that everyone was going to die. But Isaac, without wasting any time, concentrated his magical power and fired a powerful beam of energy, a magical ray so intense that it pierced the golem's chest as if it were made of paper. Shuri was completely shocked, not understanding how this was possible. The golem, now with a huge hole in its chest, fell right there, dying with no chance of reaction. Isaac, on the other hand, showed no emotion, remaining completely serious, ready to end anything. The golem crumbled into particles, vaporizing before everyone's eyes. Isaac instantly recognized the style of the magic. It was a rank 8 technique used by one of his subordinates in the past. It was one of the spells created by one of the 14 lich demons, the most powerful warriors he himself had trained. He was sure of that, but what intrigued him was how that magic was active there, right under the Joshua family mansion. He began to suspect that it might have something to do with his very presence there. He felt he needed to investigate this further. Shuri, watching from a distance, realized that Isaac was already going somewhere else when someone appeared saying that he hadn't expected those boys to be so helpful. It was Nizer Sepet, who showed up saying that he knew someone from the Joshua house would find a way to get through the challenge. He sarcastically thanked them for defeating the doorman, as now they could get ahead. Isaac looked at him and realized that there were still many survivors in circulation. Nizer teased that he didn't know the Joshua house was so cowardly and accused Shuri of making a plan together with Isaac. Shuri tried to explain herself, saying that she was just trying to stop everyone from dying, but Nizer completely ignored her. He then pointed at Isaac, calling him a little baby, and said that it didn't make any sense for him to have avoided all the traps on his own. It was then that he realized that Isaac was wearing an artifact, and without hesitation, he took the ring from his hand. He announced to everyone that, with that artifact, they could avoid all the traps and be victorious. Shuri became suspicious, because Isaac was very calm about it, which was strange. He knew that Isaac never let anyone take something from him so easily. His attitude was frightening. While Nizer said that he didn't need them anymore, and that they would now go ahead, he said that the body of the Skeleton King would belong to House Crimson. But the moment he took the first step, he activated a trap, and an explosion hit everyone with him. Shuri thought he tried to warn them, but no one listened. She realized at that moment that Isaac had done it on purpose. Soon afterwards, they passed among the bodies of the fallen candidates in the second chamber, and Isaac, with an internal smile, wryly thanked the idiot who had deactivated all the traps for him. Even so, he knew that there were still people following in his footsteps. The other candidates began to comment, impressed by Isaac, saying that he seemed to have divine energy. They also said that Nizer was extremely stupid. The observer, who was following everything, commented that they had finally realized the greatness of their master, but that he didn't need anyone's reverence. Shuri, for her part, thought it best that those people got away from Isaac as soon as possible before it was too late. It was then that a new figure approached. He praised Isaac, saying that if there really was a saint among them, it would surely be the young master of the Joshua house. He then introduced himself as Paris Julius, and the second prince of Julius's kingdom. The people around were surprised, saying that the Julius kingdom was known for carrying a divine blessing. Isaac thought that this new boy might be useful, but was interrupted when Shuri caught his eye and told him that they had arrived at the gate to the third chamber. Immediately afterwards, the chamber itself welcomed the candidates, revealing that this was the space for contemplation. It was at this moment that several statues appeared before them. The challenge was to show courage and determination. Some of the candidates, still trusting Nizer's words, claimed that they were right to follow his plan and that the Skeleton King's corpse would belong to them. The test seemed simple: just defeat the statues and claim your honor. Isaac, however, was paying close attention to the gatekeepers and already recognized it. He knew very well what those creatures were and found it extremely amusing. Isaac communicated with Shuri And since Shuri could understand the language of babies, she realized that Isaac was right. The gatekeepers were lying. The first chamber was actually a disqualification test, and Isaac ran out like a madman. The second was the tranquility chamber, where he purposely failed. And now the third, being contemplation, was also just a clue. If everyone remembered what had happened in the previous ones, they would understand that they shouldn't attack the statues. Isaac then began sending the other candidates to the center of the challenge, guiding them with instructions. Shuri was confused and wondered why he was helping everyone. He thought that maybe Isaac was showing kindness. Maybe he had the virtue of the saint inside him. For a moment, he thought that perhaps he had been misjudging him all along. But it was at that moment that Isaac launched a fireball right into the face of one of the statues with a smile on his face. And Shuri understood that he had been right all along. The statue reacted immediately and declared that Isaac had failed his mission. It then activated a powerful magical attack that exploded, hitting several innocent people nearby. Shuri wondered if Isaac had done it on purpose once again. Isaac, observing everything, found the scene very familiar. Those puppets had been made with the magic of the 14 lich demons, the lying puppets. And with a cold stare, he said that those children would now learn what life was like by facing real demons. While the others ran in panic trying to escape the explosions, some looked for the members of the Joshua house, but they were using the sacred art of invisibility, Paris. Julius thought that was the emergency blessing his uncle had given him. He was right, because Isaac used the technique at just the right moment. Julius thanked him for being included in the invisibility spell too, and Isaac, not caring, just replied that it didn't matter. He then handed Julius the same ring he had worn earlier. Julius, curious, asked if it was because he wasn't used to fighting demons and thanked him sincerely, saying that he would never forget that gesture. But as soon as he put the ring on his finger, he felt his energy being sucked away. The watcher, watching from afar, commented that it was obvious. After all, he wasn't the master. Isaac explained that the prince had the most divine power of all and was therefore the best target. Shuri, startled, wondered where Julius's uncle had found a monster like that. Meanwhile, the others tried to protect themselves and gather strength, preparing attacks to counter them. But the lying puppets were relentless. When two of the candidates began to gather energy at the same time, one of them was knocked to the ground and fell almost unconscious. The other, confused, asked what was going on. But before he could understand, the same ring that was with Isaac approached him and also sucked out all his energy. Even the lying puppet couldn't understand what was going on. He wondered where the others were who hadn't fallen yet. The watcher then declared that all the divine power on that side had already been drained. Isaac, with a calm smile, replied that this was fine and that it was now time to move on to the other side. Then the observer went to the other side, where there were still some people standing, but soon they were knocked down too. The lying doll didn't seem to understand what was going on, but at least it didn't attack those who fell like that, which made it look like Isaac was helping those people too. The observer thought it was almost over until a very powerful energy suddenly appeared. At that moment, the lying doll was hit by a great divine power, and even the observer himself was thrown away. Kino approached, saying that he had finally found Isaac. Isaac was even curious to know what this guy had gotten himself into. Shuri thought he already knew that Kino was a genius, but he hadn't expected him to be at this level, especially with such a powerful summoner by his side. Kina said he was surprised that Isaac had managed to defeat a demon and lure everyone else into a trap, just like he did in the first chamber. However, the other two candidates said it wasn't like that. They claimed that Isaac was helping them and that, in fact, they were the ones protecting Isaac. Isaac himself thought that they could only have bumped heads. The observer wondered if it was some kind of trauma, and Kina asked if they were ashamed to be called candidates for saints and still depend on a small timer like Isaac. The other two reacted, saying that Kina had only been watching from afar all this time and had no right to talk like that. They said that Isaac hadn't challenged anyone and that they were clearly blaming him for no reason. Kina now didn't look good at all in front of the others. Meanwhile, Shuri thought that, in the end, it was all Isaac's fault. It was at that moment that a great tremor began, and when everyone looked, they realized that an enormous divine energy was emerging. This tremor was caused by the appearance of the third gate. The guardian appeared to congratulate everyone on completing the third chamber. He introduced himself as the guardian of the treasure and said that now they had to choose. They could take a treasure and end the test or face the next challenge. He warned them to think very carefully, because if they chose to go on, they would have to complete the next chamber. If no one succeeded, they would all die. The observer felt an extremely powerful mana coming from that gate. Isaac soon realized what it was and replied that he already knew it was a dragon. He thought that, if it was really true, they could die in this challenge. Even so, the candidates who had protected Isaac before said that they were too far gone to turn back and decided to go on to the next chamber. Most people agreed with this too. Then the guardian explained that the next challenge would bring a risk of death, but since they were willing, he authorized everyone to go on to the next chamber. The guardian said that everyone who had come there with the aim of becoming a saint should face the challenge. Immediately afterwards, a great divine power hit the ground and everyone was clearly startled by it, while Isaac continued to smile as if nothing had happened. The guardian explained that that the last challenge was very simple. All you had to do was worship God. People began to wonder if it was just another statue, perhaps a cardinal statue like before. The Guardian confirmed that it was only necessary to show respect to God and said that only those with true faith could enter the next chamber. Some began to argue among themselves, saying that it was too easy, that there was surely something hidden. Isaac didn't understand either. He found it very strange and thought that he would never kneel to the same God who had made a fool of him for so many centuries. Just then, a child stepped forward, knelt in front of the statue, and began to pray like a faithful servant. The Guardian said that he had learned well and allowed him to pass. People became even more confused, thinking that all they really needed to do was pray. Isaac got off Shuri's lap, and while Shuri was saying that everyone needed to pray, Isaac was already replying that even dead people wouldn't do that. He then went on his way, passing Kina, who soon took the lead to demonstrate the correct form of worship taught by the Holy See, asking everyone to pay attention. With that, everyone began to imitate Kina's prayer, and those who refused were threatened by the Guardian and forced to pray as well. The Guardian then noticed that Isaac was still not kneeling and asked why. Isaac replied that he wouldn't do that if he was dead, and continued to stand, even in the face of the pressure. Everyone was perplexed, asking if he had a problem with his faith. Shuri thought that the boy was embarrassing his family. Kina got angry, remembering that the whole thing was being recorded, and thought that Isaac could be disqualified even if he was talented, because without true faith, he would have no future. The Guardian said that Isaac's behavior was disrespectful, but Isaac only replied that he didn't care, and that he would rather die than kneel in front of an ugly statue like that. He began to feel enormous pressure coming from the statue, but he stood his ground. The Guardian warned that anyone who disrespected it would be killed, but Isaac shouted the hell with it and said that what he really wanted was to destroy it. He then began to accumulate his magical power, but was surprised when the Guardian told him that he was incredible. Isaac didn't understand and asked what he was talking about. The Guardian replied that Isaac had passed the test and could go on to the next chamber. Kina was indignant and asked how that was possible, since Isaac hadn't even prayed. The Guardian explained that Isaac was the only one who had shown true faith in God, because all the others had only knelt before a statue. He said that faith that bows down to an object is not true faith, and asked if they had understood yet. Shuri reflected and realized that it really had been a trap all along, and no one had noticed. The Guardian told everyone to look at Isaac and said that, even in the face of death, he hadn't lost faith, and that was why he was the only one who had the right to carry on. Kina, outraged, said that this was unacceptable, and insisted that Isaac was just a baby who couldn't even speak properly, so there was no way of knowing if he refused to kneel because of his faith or not. The observer commented that what Kina said was out of anger, but technically he wasn't wrong. Kina then asked if Isaac really had so much faith, where his stigma was. The stigma was a mark that appeared on the body because of divine powers. People began to wonder if Isaac really didn't have a stigma yet. After all, he was a candidate, but didn't seem to have the mark. Kina realized that he had caught everyone's attention and thought that, of all the people there, Isaac was the only one without a stigma. The Guardian explained that he didn't have a stigma yet because he was just a baby. He said that babies don't usually get stigmata this early. Kina didn't accept this explanation easily and commented that that statue could move all the time, so why couldn't a baby have a stigma? The keeper confirmed that he was sure of it, that a baby really wouldn't have a stigma yet. Kina asked to come in too, since he had a stigma, had faith, and was a real candidate for sainthood. The Guardian explained that the stigma didn't appear just because the person was good or deserving, and asked if everyone really wanted to go on to the next chamber. After some thought, he said that if everyone wanted to, they could go on to the next stage. Shuri asked if it would be that easy, but the Guardian replied that if they were ready to fly into the flames like flies, then they could continue. Suddenly, as the statue disappeared, a black energy appeared in front of them. The pressure was so strong that everyone became frightened and even nauseous. The Guardian asked if they could feel the demonic energy from the Skeleton King's body and told them to recognize their places. His plan was to spare those who were not strong enough to withstand this energy. Isaac smiled broadly, thinking that he had finally arrived. It was his body, the body of the Skeleton King. He never imagined he would see that body again. His mana was leaking out, and he could hardly contain his excitement. He seemed to be drooling with emotion. The Guardian told everyone to look at the child who had proved his faith, saying that Isaac had the courageous expression of a true warrior, but the rest of the group thought he could only have gone mad. The Guardian warned that it wasn't too late for anyone, but that only warriors capable of smiling in the face of death should continue. Anyone who wasn't should retreat. If they returned, he would allow them to take the treasure from the second chamber. Only everyone was completely terrified. Kina said he didn't want the treasure from the second chamber. He wanted wanted to go on to the third. He told them to activate the traps in the third chamber too, leaving everyone shocked and thinking he was a complete nutter. The Guardian asked him if he really wanted it. Kina replied that no saint had ever managed to conquer the body of the Skeleton King. Not even Saint Melissa, considered a genius, had managed it. Kina believed that Saint Melissa would never let a child die, so she must have prepared something. He didn't want the others to think that he was choosing this path because it was easier, so he asked the Guardian to make it more difficult. Isaac thought that guy definitely had a few screws loose. The Guardian then agreed, saying that if that was his wish, it would be done, as this would make it easier to find out who was the real saint among the candidates. The other people sent Kina in alone and started questioning him, asking why he had dragged everyone into this situation. Then that demonic energy began to spread even further around the room, increasing the pressure until everyone was trapped against the floor. Isaac thought it looked like the demon realm itself. The observer pointed to a small hand sticking out of the ground, the arm of the Skeleton King's body. Isaac recognized it and thought it was his beloved little body. Perhaps he too had been absorbed by the third chamber. People began to wonder if it really was the Demon King's body because all that energy was coming from just that one hand. But Isaac realized that it wasn't the whole hand. That absurd energy was only coming from his little finger. He knew that that little finger was the only real fragment and that the rest was just a replica. The energy coming out of his pinky was so intense that it almost killed everyone at that moment. And then, from within that dark energy, a demon appeared. Everyone was so terrified that they could barely move. The Guardian asked ironically if they didn't want to make it harder. The demon looked at the group and said that they were all insolent little pests for daring to covet the body of their king. One of the candidates quickly pointed at Kina, saying that it was all his fault. But Kina replied that everyone could trust him because he would make sure that everyone left with a treasure. Kina recognized the demon immediately. He was one of the 14 Lich demons, the Skeleton King's most trusted subordinate, a powerful idiot who had been captured by the House of the Pope. Kina thought that he had already studied this demon before coming here, and that he had therefore prepared a sacred art especially for defeating him. Then Kina began to accumulate his divine power and launched his technique, ordering the demon to kneel before him. Everyone was impressed by the glow of the Pope's light that surrounded the attack. Kina believed it had finally worked, but suddenly the demon stood up with a calm look on his face and asked if it was really him. The demon faced him directly now and asked if it was Kina who was coveting his king's body. Meanwhile, outside, at the entrance to the vault, the candidate's guardians were nervous, trying to understand what was going on inside. One of them informed them that the seal on the third layer had been removed, which left everyone in a state of shock. Simon asked Hilai if one of the 14 Lich demons wasn't sealed in the third layer, and Hilai thought that if this were true, all the candidates would be in serious danger. The people began to ask about the elders who were supposed to be monitoring the vault, but the others explained that the elders had gone in to try to deactivate the traps, and there had been no news of them since. Everyone began to comment that it was impossible for anyone to get out alive with a demon like that loose inside the third chamber. Just then, the entrance to the vault glowed very brightly, and of course everyone was very confused. Hilai realized that the vault was opening and that the light was clearly divine power. Everyone flinched when they noticed demonic energy leaking out, but someone commented that it didn't look like a demon's aura, but rather that the demon had already been defeated. Barrett began to think that it had been Kina's doing, who was now very proud. While everyone commented that perhaps it had been Kina, Barrett was congratulated for it, and he responded by saying that Kina had always tried very hard. But staring at Hilai, Barrett thought that the Joshua were extremely ignorant for daring to challenge the authority of the Pope's house, and now the body of the Skeleton King belonged to them, which would destroy the honor and dignity of the house itself. The children were already starting to return, and Hilai was immediately worried about Isaac and Shuri, hoping that they were okay. Later, the parents began to reunite with their children, and Hilai noticed that some were injured, but nothing too serious, which was a relief. However, the children who had entered the third chamber still hadn't come out, which made Hilai increasingly worried. It was then that the rest of the children appeared, with Eamon and Shuri, and everyone ran to rescue them. Gowel immediately hugged her son and asked if he was all right, but Hilai realized that Isaac hadn't shown up yet. Soon after, Barrett found Kina and asked what he was carrying in his hands, and where the body of the Skeleton King was, wanting to know who had said he could bring it. Suddenly, a divine energy appeared above everyone, and they all looked up to see a wolf carrying little Isaac, who had a huge smile on his face. Hilai and Asili immediately ran to him, and Asili recognized that this wolf was in fact the young sacred dragon, the guardian of the vault in the third chamber. Hilai realized that she was right, because she could feel that the energy was that of a true sacred dragon. Even in the wolf form, its presence was overwhelming. He thought that the matriarch must have a good relationship with this guardian, which was why he was still in the vault. vault, but Hillai heard a strange noise and soon saw that Isaac was sucking on something. People began to wonder what he was doing until they realized that what he had in his mouth was actually the body of the Skeleton King. The elders began to wonder why Isaac had put it in his mouth, but they celebrated nonetheless, for he had indeed managed to retrieve the fragment. Meanwhile, Barrett questioned Kina about why he had given the body of the Skeleton King to that child, and although he recognized that it might not have been the best plan, he said that now they would let the others taste victory. But the sacred dragon, hearing this, got angry and said that it was all bullshit, claiming that it was the baby himself who had recovered the Skeleton King's body and calling everyone idiots. At that moment, Kina, remembering what had happened, thought about why the sacred art hadn't worked against the demon. The demon had called him a damned worm and approached to kill him, preparing its final attack. Just as Kina was about to be hit, the impact was blocked by a powerful barrier. Everyone realized that it was the blue sacred art and that it was Isaac who had summoned it. The demon, furious, called them all disgusting clerics and asked them how they dared to touch his master's body. He then advanced to attack them again, but Isaac responded with contempt, calling him an idiot for not even recognizing his own master. After that, everyone returned to the present, and comments began to spread saying that the baby with wings was the one who had recovered the body. Hillai then asked the great dragon if that hadn't been dangerous, as one of the 14 lich demons was not something to be trifled with, especially around children. The dragon replied with surprise, saying that the lich demon had only appeared because that white-haired boy had asked for the seal to be broken. The children immediately confirmed that it was true, saying that it had all been Kina's fault, and that they had almost died because of him. That didn't sit well with Barrett, especially when the others started commenting that it would have been much worse if Isaac hadn't been there to deal with the demon. Everyone started boasting about little Joshua, saying that he had defeated Kina and saved the day. While this was going on, Hillai was thinking that his nephew had done a great job. The elders approached, trying to take the bone of the Skeleton King that was still in Isaac's mouth, but he started slapping everyone and refused to let go of the fragment, saying that the mana was very tasty and that he was absorbing everything very quickly, wondering if it was because of his origin. One of the elders commented that Isaac had really outdone himself and that the matriarch would be very happy with the result. She also said that now with that fragment, they would finally be able to trace the location of the Skeleton King's real body. Isaac was surprised, not understanding, and wondered if that was why everyone wanted that piece so badly. The elders kept trying to take the bone, but Isaac just swallowed it. No one could believe what he had done, and the elders began to scream in despair. The dragon, seeing the whole scene, flew away, thinking that everyone was completely crazy and wishing he'd never come back to that place again. The next day, at the Joshua family mansion, everyone was wearing masks and desperately digging through Isaac's feces, hoping that the bone fragment would somehow come out. Isaac thought that they could search all they wanted, but that piece of bone wasn't going to come out. Even so, he was more concerned about what had happened in the vault. The moment he gave the demon a strong blow to the head and sank its face into the ground. At that moment, the demon finally recognized its true master. The demon said that he had already lost everything when he learned of his master's death, but that deep down, he had always known that he would return, and that was why he needed to serve him. Isaac wished he had lasted longer. He wanted to be able to talk to him more. He also remembered that it had been the Pope's house that had captured the demon, and thought he would have to investigate this further later. But suddenly Hillai appeared, begging Isaac to go potty, while everyone around was trying to give him laxatives to help. The observer laughed at the situation, and Isaac thought angrily that one day he would kill that whole family. One of the elders said that if the matriarch found out, they would all be executed, and perhaps she would cut open Isaac's belly herself. Hillai said that she had already done this to her own son once, and wondered if she would do the same now. But the observer remembered that the matriarch was on a pilgrimage with the patriarch, so Isaac thought she would probably be a while before she returned. It was at that moment that Gowl entered the room calling for Hillai, saying that the matriarch had sent for him. Hillai was surprised, asking if she had arrived yet, because she never came back so quickly. Isaac began to worry, thinking that maybe she had come back because of him, which was dangerous, since he hadn't finished absorbing all the mana yet, and he knew that the way she was, she would be able to open his stomach without hesitation. Various treasures began to be brought into the room, and everyone began to wonder if it was all a present for Isaac. Hillai commented that she almost had a heart attack thinking it was her coming, but confirmed that she hadn't arrived yet. Gowl called him fearful, even though a letter from her had already announced that she would be back soon. Isaac thought that now everything had gone wrong. It was then that a knight appeared saying that the Pope's household had also sent a gift. The elders immediately told him to sell it as a stolen item, but the knight warned them that the Pope's messenger was listening in. When the messenger entered the room, he informed them that His Majesty, the Emperor, was interested in the incident, and so the Pope's household had decided to send a gift as a form of apology. He explained that perhaps the gift wouldn't suit the Joshua family's taste, but he believed they might change their minds. When everyone saw the gift, they were impressed. The elders immediately recognized that it was a triple crown, similar to a medal. Isaac asked what it meant, and the Watcher replied that it was a dirty medal with an engraving of the Pope himself. The elders wondered why Isaac was receiving receiving a medal from the Pope. Just then, the messenger called for Heli and asked him to accept the gift on Isaac's behalf. Isaac found it strange and asked why he couldn't receive it himself, and Heli asked the same thing, wanting to know why the medal was being given to him. The messenger replied that it was a direct order from the Pope and that the medal had to be given to Heli, no matter what. One of the elders revolted, saying that this was crazy, that you couldn't just hand someone's medal over to someone else. That meant that the original owner of the medal was dead. Not even Isaac knew that. The messenger then asked them not to misunderstand the saint's intentions, explaining that they had only decided to give the medal to another family member because Isaac was still very young. The old man retorted by saying that it didn't make any sense and criticized the use of a sunflower on the medal, since the sunflower was a symbol of soldiers killed in war, which made it even more offensive. Isaac thought they wanted him to sleep in a coffin. The old woman said that those bastards had tried to humiliate the whole family, while Gowel tried to keep everyone calm. One of the elders asked how it was possible to calm down after such an affront, but Gowel replied that the messenger represented the Pope's house, and that doing anything against him could end up causing a big problem for the whole family. Gowel thought that he had never imagined it possible to humiliate someone so much with just one gift. That had to be the cardinal's doing. He remembered that he was related to the cardinal on his mother's side, but he still felt disgusted by the man. Heli and Isaac couldn't run away from the Pope forever, and deep down Gowel believed that the whole thing might end up being good for him in the end. Gowel then asked Heli what he was waiting for, telling him to just accept the medal and stop making a fuss. Isaac thought that perhaps he really didn't have a choice. It was at that moment that the medal caught fire. A sacred blue fire began to envelop the object, which escaped from the box in which it was kept. Everyone was stunned to see that great sphere of sacred flames forming in front of them. They began to wonder who had dared to do this, while the Pope's messenger was clearly nervous. The tension grew until everyone realized at once that it had been Isaac's doing. The Pope's messenger was completely shocked to see what had happened, and began to wonder if it was an attack, a revolt, or even a rebellion against the Pope himself. But the elders explained that it had only been done by a baby who couldn't even receive the medal on his own, so it didn't make sense for him to be so angry. Heli tried to ease the situation by saying that what had happened to the medal was just a misfortune, and that they would consider that they had never received it. The messenger was surprised by this response and questioned whether he was really going to do that. But Heli returned the question by asking what else he thought could be done if he really wanted them to accept a medal that had been burned by a mere baby, even though it was a direct gift from holiness. The elders then realized that the medal had indeed melted completely. The messenger tried to disguise it by saying that perhaps he had brought the wrong item and would get it back. But as soon as he tried to approach, it was he who started burning. At that moment, the elders started laughing and said that Isaac was just a joker, while Isaac thought that he might as well burn that old man too. The messenger ran off in despair, saying that everyone there was crazy and cursed. The elders, on the other hand, started celebrating and said that Isaac had done a great job, as he had just gotten rid of years and years of frustrations that they had been building up in silence. One of the elders even suggested that they throw the medal away, and another commented that the matriarch would love to see a scene like that. They also praised Heli, saying that he had made a great move by using the sacred flames, but he tried to deny it, saying that he hadn't done anything. Heli then asked if it hadn't been the elders themselves who had used that flame, and everyone started to get confused. One of the elders asked if Reli knew how to use that skill, but he replied that he didn't, as he only knew the invisible divine art. At that point, everyone began to wonder if Isaac had used the sacred arts on his own. It was then explained that there was a book called the Book of Secret Techniques, a mythical treasure that allowed anyone who picked it up to immediately learn a secret technique and use it. Isaac was very happy that he had managed to get hold of this treasure book, because even though it wasn't as strong as it had been when he was the Skeleton King, it was still completely usable. Meanwhile, the elders continued to argue among themselves and wondered if it hadn't been Isaac's mother who had put some kind of sacred spell on it. However, one of the elders reminded them that Isaac's mother didn't have the fire attribute, but was in fact the complete opposite. One of the elders said that if it really was Isaac's work, then he was a completely unusual talent, because what he did was equivalent to writing a poem without knowing how to read. The elder commented that even Saint Melissa, who was considered a genius all her life, had to at least learn letters before using the divine arts. Asili added that all this was all the more impressive because Isaac had fought against the Pope's own blessing. The elders then agreed, as they had completely forgotten this detail. The elders said that they needed to bring the medal back to confirm what had happened, but they realized that it simply wasn't there anymore. It was then that Gowel said that he had thrown it away, since the elder himself had sent it, but no one remembered that. The elders ran around desperately trying to find the medal, while Gowel thought that the boy had melted the metal of the Pope's medal, which was supposed to be fire resistant. He knew he had to tell the patriarch. In fact, he hadn't thrown the medal away. He'd been keeping it in his pocket the whole time, and he thought it might turn out to be just a rumor without any evidence. 4 days later, in the westernmost part of the Duchy of Joshua, Hillai stood in front of a group and warned them that the mansion was near, so they all needed to stay focused until the end. But he ended up noticing something very strange around him. Meanwhile, at the Joshua house, the elders were completely stunned that the boy Isaac hadn't yet expelled the Skeleton King's bone fragment. Isaac thanked them silently, feeling that it was invigorating his body. One of the elders commented that he had already drunk 300 bottles of laxative, and another elder said that he had eaten 500 fruits and still nothing happened. Isaac thought that those fruits were really fantastic because he had heard that they had divine properties, even capable of helping divine beasts, being great tools for combat, so he saw no reason to reject that help. He was sure that Joshua also relied on a divine beast to protect his home, and just as he was thinking this, he saw an immense creature through the window. It was a demonic beast called Terranum, a sacred whale that protected the Joshua house, and which was accompanying a specific person, the patriarch. The patriarch opened the door to meet his son, and all the elders knelt in reverence. Isaac understood at that moment that this was the patriarch of the Joshua house, which meant it was his grandfather, and despite everything, he had good feelings about it. However, Hillai quickly showed up to ask for more time because his father couldn't just open Isaac's belly. Isaac thought that the old man would never do anything like that, but the Eli patriarch looked straight at him and ordered the boy to be burned. Hillai tried to stop him, saying that it wasn't time yet, and Isaac began to think that the patriarch really wanted to burn him, thinking that this house was completely crazy. The only person he could trust was his uncle, but even Hillai said that Isaac was too young to be burned right now, which meant that if he were older, he would accept. Hillai even asked them to reconsider, and Gowel agreed, saying that it was too great a reward for him. Isaac wondered how burning him was considered a reward. Hillai explained that it might be possible to remove the Skeleton King's body from inside Isaac using fire, and that it might even strengthen his body with a blessing of fire. Isaac was confused by this and wondered what this fire blessing meant. Even so, Hillai asked for more time, saying that there were still other ways to try. Goel suggested cutting directly into Isaac's stomach, but Hillai preferred the idea of immersing him in water. Isaac wondered how that house hadn't already been destroyed with such absurd ideas. Goel then said that it wouldn't work, because both the fire and the water in the temple were Joshua's secret techniques, used exclusively to elevate holiness, and that they couldn't apply that kind of blessing to a child with no ability. Hillai was angry and asked how he could dare to say that Isaac had no ability. Isaac thought that such water might be a good thing for him, especially considering that Goel was against it. Goel kept insisting that Shuri would benefit most from this blessing, because he was the one who defeated the demon inside the treasure chamber. But Hillai immediately denied it, saying that this was a lie because it was Isaac who had defeated the demon, and everyone had witnessed it when he came out with the sacred dragon. Goel commented that it had to be a mistake, questioning how a baby who couldn't even speak or walk could defeat a demon. Hillai responded by saying that Goel was going too far, and even reinforced that Isaac himself had burned the Pope's medal using the holy flame, asking if Goel would also deny this, even with several witnesses. Patriarch Eli then took the medal out of his pocket and asked if that was what they were talking about. The scene was used to explain that only one person in the world is truly connected to God, the Pope, and that the gold blessed by him is called a gold medal, a sacred item that carries the blessing of the Pope himself. Isaac was thoughtful when he saw it, because not even in his past life as the Skeleton King could he melt that kind of sacred gold with ease, so he wondered if his new body was really that powerful. Eli then asked how the patriarch had found the medal, and Eli replied that he had found it on the way, at the bottom of Lake Elisiva. Eli, the patriarch's son, asked his father to recognize how talented Isaac was with the sacred fire, while Isaac thought that perhaps this was proof that the Joshua were capable of taking on even the Pope. Hillai added that with this, they might even be able to face the flames of the Skeleton King himself. One of the elders agreed, saying that they could finally hunt down the Skeleton King for good. Shil commented that the people had recently suffered great losses because of the Skeleton King, who was hiding somewhere. Another elder warned that if nothing was done, the era of the Skeleton King could be revived. The observer of the house remarked with boredom that they were talking about it again, and said that perhaps there really was someone impersonating the Skeleton King. Isaac thought that he didn't care who was impersonating him at all, because for him, it made his movements easier since someone else would attract all the attention while he moved around in secret. Hillai said that the real Skeleton King had appeared at the Joshua mansion, placing a curse on everyone. Isaac was taken aback by this, wondering what he meant. Hillai explained that the Skeleton King had declared that he wanted to exterminate the saint's bloodline, and that he was furious at the thought of that curse. The observer commented that if that had happened 70 years ago, then there was no way he could be their true master, since the original Skeleton King had died 150 years ago. Isaac then understood that the curse mentioned was the reason they said he couldn't live for long. However, for him, a curse cast by some little demon was just child's play, and he thought it was enough to suppress it with his own mana. Later, the old woman explained that even if the curse doesn't kill, it can still cause serious effects, such as making the person impotent or even leaving them short forever. And the old man commented that many people in the lineage had also gone bald because of it. Isaac thought that he, personally, would put the devil out of his misery, while the observer said that this hair loss was probably genetic and not a curse. Then the patriarch approached Isaac and said that, considering his red eyes, it did look like he was cursed, since water and fire were weak against him, which made Isaac wonder what would happen and what the patriarch would suggest. The patriarch then said that he would give Isaac the Holy Spirit, which left Isaac completely impressed, because he knew that this spirit was from the divine faction and could only be obtained by donation, and he thought that he needed it to reach the transcendental level that not even the gods could easily reach. For him, this was like winning the lottery, and as soon as he got the Holy Spirit, he would put an end to those damn things once and for all. But Gowl interrupted, saying that this was too much for Isaac, since the Holy Spirit was only given to those who brought honor to the house, and asked what that kid had done for the Joshua house, pointing out that he had only burned a medal and provoked the Pope. However, the patriarch asked Gowl directly what he had done when the Pope's family sent them that humiliating gift, since the Pope himself had the audacity to try to pick a fight within the Joshua territory, and now Gowl was defending the Pope and criticizing his own youngest nephew. The patriarch went on to say that even animals protect the babies of their own flock, and that the Joshua family should also protect this kind of thing, since even the smallest action needs to be protected by their pride, and that if this doesn't bring honor to the Joshua, then what would? So he ordered everyone to gather in the main house as they were going to bless Isaac. A few days later, Heli asked his father if he was really going to just give Isaac the Holy Spirit, wanting to better understand what he meant by that. And the patriarch explained that if they put Isaac in water or fire to extract the body of the Skeleton King, it could end with a disability, since both the water and the fire in the temple rejected anything demonic because they were extremely powerful. He said that if this happened, Isaac would never be able to learn the sacred arts of exorcism, and Heli commented that, as such, he wouldn't be able to pass the 5th level as a high priest. The patriarch then confirmed that this was exactly what would happen, as Isaac would be stuck on the 4th level forever. Finally, the patriarch said that he would let Isaac himself choose between fire, water, and the Holy Spirit, saying that this test would be enough. Gowl was excited, as he knew it wouldn't be that easy for Isaac, and so Isaac was given the mission of choosing between the 3. Heli was mentally hoping that Isaac would pick the white ball, repeating in his head that it would be the white one, but Isaac ended up grabbing the red ball and looked closely at what he had chosen. Gowl remarked to Heli that he shouldn't be so disappointed, but before they could continue their conversation, a large flame suddenly appeared and covered the whole room, and from within that flame appeared a personification, the Holy Spirit himself, leaving everyone completely shocked by that unexpected manifestation. The Holy Spirit began to burn everything around him, and Gowl became desperate, asking how this was possible, how the Holy Spirit could be in the little red ball, and the patriarch responded by telling him to stop the scandal, as he never said where exactly the Holy Spirit would be. He explained that water is the foundation of the Joshua, but Isaac had melted down the Pope's gold using fire, so a trap was set in this last test. And apparently, Isaac passed, even if the result was a little unexpected. The Holy Spirit was furious and shouted at Eli, saying that he had completely lost his mind, and asking how he dared to summon such a high-level spirit in that human realm. Then the Holy Spirit exploded in fury with divine flames that began to burn everything around, and the elders had to defend themselves with their sacred arts. Gowl asked how Heli's father could summon a spirit of king rank, and if he wanted to wipe out their entire domain. But the patriarch explained that it wasn't him who had summoned it, but Isaac himself, that little guy over there, who was now in real danger of dying. Isaac thought he had only used a small amount of holy power to summon a medium-rank spirit, but for some reason he summoned a king-rank spirit, which made the observer wonder what material Isaac's body was made of. Isaac began to wonder what he could summon if he used all his power at once, until he realized that next to the Holy Spirit, there were anti-magic flames. The observer explained that those flames transformed mana into holy power, and since Isaac had a lot of mana, that's exactly what happened. Isaac thought that made sense, but now he wondered how he would make the Holy Spirit obey him, since he was a king-rank spirit connected to the divine realm, and Isaac didn't want to get involved with those damned gods. The Watcher confirmed that this was true, but also said that the Holy Spirit wasn't that close to the gods. Meanwhile, the elders were running around scared with their hair all burnt and shouting for the patriarch to send the spirit away because they could all end up dying. The patriarch, however, said that he would also stop getting involved with the gods if anyone criticized his hair color, which made Isaac wonder how the patriarch could take such a dangerous situation so trivially, as if it were an everyday thing. The Holy Spirit continued to rage, assaulting everyone, and asked how they dared to invoke it in a state of submission. But the patriarch reaffirmed that it wasn't him who had invoked it, but that little child over there. The Holy Spirit stared at Isaac in silence, and then said that the patriarch must be mad, that he was expiring since he had sacrificed a baby to invoke him. But the patriarch insisted again that it wasn't him. The Holy Spirit then questioned how it was possible to do that to a child, and what was wrong with that boy, because he was so intrigued that he even began to feel chills. Isaac realized that this spirit really hated the gods, and now he really wanted to be with him, to the point of drooling with excitement. The Holy Spirit then said that it would confirm on its own whether that boy had really invoked it in a state of submission and that it shouldn't cause any harm. And so, it launched a fireball directly in Isaac's direction, blowing up everything around, and then declared that the boy could now rest in peace. Except that Isaac was completely intact after the explosion, and in fact, was even drooling with desire to take the Holy Spirit for himself. The patriarch said that the Holy Spirit should now be convinced that it was really the child who had invoked him, so it would be up to him to decide whether to make the contract or break the contract and accept the punishment. The Holy Spirit, however, said that it wasn't afraid of punishment, since it was a rank king spirit, and that it would take this opportunity to annihilate them all, promising the patriarch that his land would be engulfed in flames. What the Holy Spirit didn't realize was that Isaac was right behind him, ready to devour him, and that's exactly what he did, swallowing half the spirit in a single movement. The elders began to shout in desperation, telling him to spit it out, that it wasn't food, while the Holy Spirit shouted from inside Isaac's mouth, asking if no one had educated that child. The Holy Spirit said it was a draw for now, but promised that everyone would pay dearly for that humiliation. Isaac wondered if the spirit was trying to use teleportation magic to escape, but realized that it wasn't working properly. The Watcher commented that it hadn't been bad at all, while the Holy Spirit asked why its magic wasn't working, and soon realized that there was demonic energy inside the boy's body. The patriarch then casually remarked that he had forgotten to tell them, but Isaac had devoured the Skeleton King's little finger. The Holy Spirit asked what kind of food they fed that child, while Isaac thought that holy spirits, being pure and divine existences of the holy faction, were extremely vulnerable to ordinary mana. The Holy Spirit began to feel that his strength was running out. He was already getting shaky, so he asked the patriarch to stop that boy. But the patriarch said it was a pity, because even he couldn't get close now, as the Skeleton King's power was too strong. The Holy Spirit complained that the patriarch was making a fool of himself, but the patriarch said he could let him leave afterwards. Only first he would have to stay in Isaac's body to purify all the Skeleton King's mana, asking what he thought of this proposal. The Holy Spirit revolted, asking what kind of slave house that was, accusing the patriarch of trying to make him work for free. The patriarch then said that, in that case, he would let him be eaten at once. The Holy Spirit started cursing, saying that everyone there was a psychopath. That's why he hated Joshua's people, and that he would have cut off all relations with them a long time ago if he could. But despite everything, the Holy Spirit said that he could take care of the impure mana, and Isaac thought excitedly that he wanted to hear that again, so he began to lick the spirit enthusiastically. Under pressure, the Holy Spirit gave in and said that it could be confined inside Isaac for 4 days, and in that time, it would sort everything out. The patriarch found this number very generous and, satisfied, ordered the gates on the east side to be opened. He said that Isaac and the Holy Spirit would be taken there, and that no one else could enter until the purification was complete. Hilai and Gowel were extremely shocked by the whole thing, but the patriarch said he wouldn't listen to any more objections, so Isaac spat out the Holy Spirit and thought that East Castle, being near that giant pillar full of mana, would be a great opportunity for him. In that place, known as Joie's Mansion, a huge explosion happened, but the servants weren't even impressed, as to them it was just another explosion, like so many others that had already happened. Some commented that it was probably the Holy Spirit trying to cleanse the mana inside Isaac. Meanwhile, one of the servants commented that he believed the next successor to the family would be Lord Gowel, since he had inherited the Pope's lineage, or else it would be his older brother. But one of the servants responded by saying that the young Master Isaac was clearly losing the race for succession. After all, he was considered cursed. Another servant asked if he really was cursed, and the maid confirmed it by by saying that the other day, a servant tried to spy on Lord Isaac and was so frightened by what he saw that he ran away begging for mercy. One of the servants commented that he had heard that the curse had the appearance of an old, bald, and ugly man, but the maid replied that it wasn't a skeleton. Of that, she was sure. However, when she thought about it, she realized that Isaac had been isolated with the Holy Spirit for a long time and realized that it had been 10 whole years since the purification began. Inside the East Castle, several screams could be heard, and Asili came over to take a look. When she opened the doors, she saw Isaac and asked if he was all right. He was sitting sucking on a lollipop with a calm expression. Asili was confused, wondering why he wasn't growing, and imagined that perhaps the curse was more powerful than it seemed. But Isaac knew very well what he was doing, because he was purposely suppressing his own growth. This was because, during childhood, the absorption of any kind of power reaches its peak, and there were certain powers that he could only acquire while he was still a child. The Holy Spirit complained that his body was hurting a lot, and Asili greeted Lord Salak, who responded by saying that he wouldn't be cleansing Isaac's mana that day. He said that yesterday he had almost finished the purification, but now he discovered that the boy had increased his mana again. He asked how much of the Skeleton King's body that kid had eaten and where so much mana came from, that it required 10 years of non-stop purification, as well as wanting to know why his mana increased every time he woke up. Isaac thought that this was obviously because he had been secretly absorbing the mana core from that annex building every day for the last 10 years. The observer hadn't imagined that there were so many cores hidden there either, and thought that it should take 40 years to absorb them completely. But Isaac had done it all in just 10 years, which was impressive. Now, he felt that the difficult part of obtaining mana was over, but what he still lacked was knowledge, since he was learning everything on his own. Even so, his sacred arts were already at the 6th rank. Asili approached him to comfort him, saying that everything would be alright soon, as the Holy See would soon take action. Isaac was confused to hear this, wondering silently what they were talking about, and Asili explained that the high members of the church were going to execute all 14 elite demons who were trying to attack the Empire, and that soon all the Skeleton King's mana inside him would be purified. But Isaac thought this was absurd, as he still had a lot of issues to resolve with those demons. Asili, however, just told him that he could rest for now, and handed him a sweet treat. Isaac then began to think that he needed to make a plan, until he heard Gowl's voice outside talking to Shuri, saying that his son had skipped another class and would soon be ordained as the newest priest. Gowl commented that he had heard that even the princess was going to take part in the ordination ceremony, and said that Shuri, as well as graduating so early, was going to graduate alongside the princess, calling it something glorious. Shuri responded proudly, saying that being his son was easy, and Gowl confirmed it, saying that his talent ran in the family. But suddenly they realized that Shuri had simply disappeared, as he was sucked up by a spell and fell face down on the floor right in front of Isaac. Isaac looked at him and asked if he had any last words, saying that Shuri lied every time he opened his mouth and thought his life was complete just because he was going to graduate from the academy. Shuri wondered if Isaac had pulled him back up with magic, and Isaac confirmed it, saying that it was actually thanks to him that Shuri had managed to jump classes, so he didn't understand why he was bragging so much. Shuri replied that he had worked hard too, that it wasn't that easy to be ranked as the best student, but Isaac retorted that he would never have achieved that on his own. Shuri recognized that this was true, and so Isaac began to wonder if he should prepare to be ordained as a priest too, since a large part of the sacred arts could only be used after becoming one. Isaac then told Shuri that he needed his help, and Shuri, after receiving a death stare, changed his tone and asked more politely what Your Highness wanted. Isaac said he wanted everything from him, including the prize money he had just won from his father, and Shuri thought that demon baby was really evil. Isaac then warned that Shuri had better do the massage properly and also asked about the case of the execution of the Skeleton King's subordinates. Shuri explained that these subordinates had been discarded because of their disobedience since the treasure incident, and now they seemed to be just waiting to die. Isaac thought that faced with this, there was no other solution. He would have to get ordained later that year. Shuri asked what exactly he wanted to achieve, and Isaac replied that he was going to be ordained as a priest. But Shuri started laughing in his face and asked him how he wanted to be ordained if he hadn't even entered the academy yet and was still a baby. Isaac then punched Shuri in the head, leaving a bump, and asked why he was laughing. Shuri denied it, saying that he hadn't laughed, and then explained that there was a recommendation program and that the academy's teachers were within the territory. He said that Isaac could be ordained as a priest if he got a letter of recommendation and passed the test. Isaac thought it was a great idea, but Shuri warned him that he would need some achievement to prove his good personality. Shuri was direct and said that Isaac's personality wasn't the best. The observer commented that, despite being cursed, Shuri was good at judging people, and Shuri himself added that Isaac would only get this letter of recommendation if he achieved something that involved saving someone's life, and the higher the status of the person saved, the better the chance. The problem was that this person couldn't simply be in danger by force, and suddenly Isaac appeared and saved the girl. He calmly said that there was only one decision left to be made, and then asked if the princess would take part in the ordination. Shuri confirmed that yes, the princess would. Isaac continued, wondering if she belonged to a very high position, and was told yes. Later, in the training center of the Joshua family mansion, the patriarch ordered everyone to leave, stating that he would not send Isaac to the capital. However, one of those present insisted that this year would be different. One of the women present said that Isaac should take part in the festival, since that year the candidates for sainthood would be ordained. They also commented that in the last 10 years, the young Master Isaac had never even appeared in public, and that in the meantime, the other candidates had achieved many important things. Everyone was excited to see how he was doing now. It was said that Isaac lived in the East Castle like a true saint, and many wanted to see how much he had grown. A woman introduced herself as the Academy's educator and revealed that teaching Master Isaac was her life's dream. She commented that the ordination would take place on the same day as the princess's birthday, and that the Pope would make a special occasion of it. The patriarch was surprised to hear the Pope's name and questioned his presence. The educator explained that the Pope would grant the title of hero to the person who was ordained. The patriarch then reflected that receiving this title would greatly increase one's power of domination, making it extremely advantageous. Even so, he replied that Isaac was not yet old enough to receive such an honor. But the educator countered by saying that age didn't matter when it came to power. Everyone looked at the patriarch with a pleading expression until he finally gave in and authorized it, saying that they could do whatever they wanted, but that they would be responsible for everything, since they knew very well how difficult it was to deal with that boy. Meanwhile, outside the East Castle, there was a man watching the explosions of power from the Holy Spirit. He concluded that it was in that room where the king-level Holy Spirit was summoned, a spirit so powerful that even the Pope had only managed to summon it once. This spirit was known to be of the anti-magic type and was also part of the protective barrier of the divine realm. His name was Salak, a holy spirit who had failed to become one of higher rank because of his problematic conduct and personality. The man then thought that the Pope and his family would go mad, as they were obsessed with collecting spirits, so if he managed to steal Salak and deliver it to the Pope's family, he would be handsomely rewarded. He was fully prepared for this, as he had brought an item capable of nullifying any divine power. He also planned to wait for the moment when Isaac lost control of the Holy Spirit, causing his demonic mana to destabilize. It was precisely in this chaos that he intended to capture the Holy Spirit. Then, later, they opened the doors to Isaac's classroom, and the teacher excitedly commented that she would finally be able to see him in person. Everyone approached excitedly, but when Isaac turned around, he had the cutest expression he could muster. Of course, this was pure strategy, since he wanted to win the letter of recommendation. Immediately, everyone there was hit by the impact of the so-called power of cuteness. The priest in front was perplexed, wondering how Isaac could use something like this against him, and decided that it was the ideal moment to put his plan into practice. He picked Isaac up and tried to force him to lose control of his demonic mana, hoping that it would go completely out of control. But after a while, Isaac remained calm and stable, which left the priest confused as nothing was happening as planned. Meanwhile, Salak, the Holy Spirit, asked what Isaac was waiting for, saying that it was time to eliminate that accursed priest and ordering him to use his power. The priest, for his part, thought that the Holy Spirit was right in front of him and that this was his chance. Discreetly, he took a suspicious cloth and began to wipe the sweat off Isaac, who in fact already clearly perceived his malicious intentions. Isaac thought that this guy was a real bastard, and then suddenly Salak was hit by something mysterious, as if he had completely lost control. A gigantic explosion of sacred energy took place inside the room. Salak, out of control, turned into a raging beast. The people around wondered if this was the result of the Skeleton King's mana, and the priest believed that this was the ideal moment to act. He smashed the magic pearl and activated the shackles of pain to capture Salak, but ended up being the target himself, being immediately charred by the magic's reaction. Isaac observed this and concluded that the man really was a fool to think he could achieve anything. Just then, Hilai and Asili rushed into the room to see what had happened. Isaac thought that this was the ideal moment, since there were enough witnesses. Determined to put on a show, he began to gather a huge amount of mana. Everyone around commented that he was single-handedly absorbing all the demonic mana and controlling the Holy Spirit's fury. Isaac then concluded that this energy needed to be stopped and snapped his fingers, controlling all the mana circulating around Salas. At that moment, they realized that the power used was the sacred blue power, and that he had indeed saved everyone from that chaos. They said that Isaac had been able to control the Skeleton King's mana and called it a true miracle. Hilai approached excitedly and commented that Isaac had spoken his first word. He said he was proud of the boy, but Isaac realized in surprise that he had spoken aloud without realizing it. Everyone around began to celebrate in his honor, shouting cheers to his name, while the priest remained face down on the ground, unable to understand how everything had gotten out of hand. Salak, now restored, bored, approached the priest and asked who had sent him there. The priest, in a panic, said that it was all just a misunderstanding and that he had only come to find the young master Isaac. Salak doubted this, since the man was dressed in full clothing and fire-resistant equipment, which clearly showed his intentions. Salak then declared that from that moment on, all the holy spirits of fire would sever their ties with the priests of the Pope's family. He added that they shouldn't take it personally. He simply didn't sympathize with the guy. The priest, in despair, protested that this was impossible because a holy spirit could not break a contract made with God's blessing. According to him, the spirits were obliged to obey the Pope's family, but Salak didn't care about these rules. He shouted that he would never be limited by stupid rules and sent the priest to hell, leaving him lying there, unconscious and defeated. Salak went to Isaac and said that because he had managed to control the Skeleton King's mana, the contract between them should end, since the purification was complete. However, Salak said that he would remain by Isaac's side for longer as a way of repaying the favor. Isaac thought that he had expected this answer and that it was obvious that he would accept this debt. He made an internal commitment to ensure that Salak repaid this favor in full. The educator then announced that they would return to inform the Santasides of everything that had happened. She said that the young master Isaac needed to be ordained as a priest. Isaac also thanked her for the letter of recommendation he had received. Later, Hillai was in the Patriarch's office. The Patriarch told him that the Holy See had approved Isaac's ordination as a priest, and as expected, they had asked for him to be taken to the official ceremony. Hillai asked in surprise if everything had happened so quickly, and concluded that it was probably because everyone had witnessed what had happened. However, the Patriarch explained was that the main reason was that Isaac possessed a very high level of Holy Spirit. Hillai said that there could be no objections to this. The Patriarch added that the most important thing was that Isaac had also graduated from the academy and had therefore passed a knowledge assessment. In the test, he got top marks in absolutely everything. Hillai was deeply impressed, saying that Isaac now knew how to do everything, that he walked well, spoke well, and was excellent in every way. The Patriarch agreed, but said that the only problem was Isaac's bad attitude. The Patriarch explained that now the only thing left to check was the personal test, which in truth was almost useless, since everyone usually passed it, unless they were criminals or degenerates. Hillai remembered that this was the test where sacred art was used to force the participants to write down their real thoughts, without being able to lie. Any attempt at deception would cause the answer to be revealed as the truth. The Patriarch began to read out the questions and answers. The first question asked what Isaac thought of the house, where he grew up and which raised him. He answered that he wanted to conquer it, because he believed it should be his. Hillai smiled, saying that this was the right spirit. The Patriarch, however, found it a little ridiculous, but still acceptable. The second question asked what he would do after becoming a priest, and the answer was that he would bow his head to all the gods. The last question made Hillai's eyes almost pop out of his skull, as it asked what he would do for that country, and Isaac replied that he would annihilate it. Hillai was so shocked that he couldn't even answer, completely speechless. The Patriarch said that for the time being, only they had seen this result, but if Isaac was ordained as a priest and passed the same type of test in the official ceremony, he would certainly be investigated, accused of heresy, and executed. For this reason, the Patriarch concluded that the only option was to perform Isaac's ordination in his own home. The priority now would be domestic education, and Isaac should not leave the house at all. During the night, Isaac carefully opened the window, ready to flee the house. The Watcher appeared and asked if he already had a plan in mind. Isaac answered confidently, saying that of course he did, and that the time had finally come to run away from home. The next morning, at the academy located in the Empire's capital, more precisely in the Sacred Arts Department, some students were commenting on the ordination of a child of just 10 as a priest. One of them thought it was insane and questioned what kind of power a child of that age could have. They said that it would certainly become a big issue throughout the capital. Nizer Sepet then said that he was just a little boy who could barely walk, and the others were astonished by this statement, asking how he could barely walk. Nizer explained that the child hadn't grown at all in the last 10 years, and that was because he was under the Skeleton King's curse. He turned to Shuri and asked if he didn't agree that there was no way a failed child like that could become a priest. He also said that it was probably all just an act to attract attention. Shuri was already annoyed because he thought that Nizer had always been irritating. Nizer continued to tease, saying that it must be nice to be in the house of the Holy Seat, but that not even the child who was sent there could meet the minimum standards. He also commented that he didn't understand how Ma'anta's descendant could be so disappointing. Shuri, furious, stood up ready to punch Nizer, but Kina appeared just in time and interrupted the confusion, saying that Nizer was underestimating the priests of the Holy Seat. More importantly, Kina explained that it was Nizer's own father, the renowned Leon Sepet, who had accepted the letter of recommendation that allowed Isaac to be appointed to the priesthood. Kina then teased, saying that he doubted Nizer was stupid enough to insult his own father publicly. Nizer reacted by asking if Kina was trying to pick a fight, especially with someone who wasn't even a student at the academy. Kina replied that he was there because he had been invited and had been assigned as a mentor and instructor in the sacred arts. Despite this, he admitted that he was worried about Shuri, because ever since Isaac was cursed, it seemed impossible that he would become a priest, and now all Joshua's hopes rested on Shuri's shoulders. Yet, apparently, he wasn't living up to expectations either. Shuri became even angrier, but tried to control himself. She told him firmly that she didn't need Kina's help, and told him to mind his own business. Later in the dormitory, Shuri was venting his frustration. He thought angrily about how those people were meddling in his life, and on top of that, his own family didn't even seem to pay attention to his situation. The ordination ceremony was approaching, and he couldn't understand why Isaac had to cause so much trouble just then. In his mental venting, he concluded that Isaac was the worst thing that had ever happened in his life, and grudgingly wished that he would even suffer from hair loss because of the Skeleton King's curse. It was at that moment that Isaac, without anyone noticing, emerged from inside Shuri's suitcase, and with a menacing look on his face, asked if he had heard correctly about losing his hair, and if Shuri had any last words to say. Shuri asked how that boy had got there, and why he was in that place. Isaac explained that he was there to be ordained as a priest, and that he had run away from home because the patriarch in Halai wouldn't let him leave. But, leaving that aside, he pulled out his little toy, which was his personal weapon. Shuri then asked what the problem was this time, and what he had done. Isaac got angry that they were letting those people insult Joshua, and, without thinking twice, punched the boy in the stomach. He said he couldn't accept them talking about Joshua like that, because Joshua was his and only he could insult him. After that, he told Shuri to remember that while the poor guy cried once again. Isaac told him to stop the drama and lead the way. Shuri wanted to know where they were going, but Isaac said he'd deal with anyone who spoke badly of Joshua. Later in the gym cafeteria, the students were wondering who had brought that child there, until they noticed the beautiful hair she had. It was Isaac, who was carrying his little toy as if it were a Johnny, and he came in asking where the son of a bitch who had offended Joshua was. Everyone turned around immediately. Isaac then recognized the red hair and ran after the culprit. Shuri, on seeing this, ran off too, thinking that he had to stop Isaac or he'd get into trouble, especially as that girl was Nizer's sister. When Shuri almost caught up with Isaac, he escaped and went straight to talk to Naki Sepet, asking if she was the one bullying Joshua. Naki Sepet replied that she had never bullied Joshua, saying that it was Nizer who did it. Isaac asked if she was admitting it was her, but Naki Sepet said he was deaf. The observer, who was following the scene, noticed a familiar energy coming from the girl. Isaac also realized that it was the energy of one of the 5 supreme gods. Naki Sepet then said that he was the famous Isaac, the cursed child of the rumors. She teased that the Osa would fail again that year, that they would soon be removed from the 5 great families. Isaac thought that, considering her rude manner, that energy could only be from the supreme gods. Shuri came running, desperate, saying that Isaac couldn't get involved with the red-haired family and needed to go home immediately. Isaac told him to shut up and said that he needed to be ordained a priest first. Naki Sepet then said that he would never be ordained, because Nizer himself was preparing a file to cancel the ordination. According to her, a little baby like him had no way of proving that he deserved it. Shuri thought about how much that bastard Nizer was influencing everything, and Naki Sepet said that, the way they were acting, Nizer wouldn't even have to do anything for it to be canceled. One of Naki Sepet's subordinates asked if they should call the Inquisitor, and Shuri felt a chill, because more than 70% of the Inquisitors belonged to that damn Sepet family. Shuri then told Isaac that it was time to get out of there. Suddenly, someone shouted very loudly, leaving everyone in complete despair. A demonic beast had appeared in the cafeteria. Isaac thought that was his guarantee of safety, because for some reason the beast went straight for Naki Sepet, knocking out her guard before she could even react. Isaac took advantage and knocked the creature down using his little toy. He thought he had summoned the beast, but it took too long to arrive. Even though it was wounded, the demonic creature was still standing. Naki Sepet called it a monstrous creature, but Isaac just told it to go away. The beast ran away, completely terrified. The observer commented that, as expected of his master, a demonic beast of that level was a piece of cake, and realized that Isaac had only used it to take advantage of the situation. When the priests arrived, they asked where the demonic creature was, and everyone started looking for it, making sure everyone was okay. In fact, it was an Inquisitor who had arrived, and Shuri said that it was time for Isaac to leave, but the Inquisitor said that no one could leave until the investigation was over. Shuri then realized that they were in trouble, and tried to argue by saying that they didn't know anything about what had happened. Naki Sepet told no one to do anything unnecessary, since that child had saved her life, and confirmed that his name was Isaac. She apologized for being rude earlier, but also made it clear that it wasn't as if she was very grateful. Isaac then wondered what was wrong with that girl, while the people around him began to comment that they had heard that he had received a letter of recommendation and began to wonder if the rumors about Isaac's abilities were true. Further back, the girl called Charlotte Alec Freak Hella, princess of the Empire of Hella, watched in silence and wondered if that boy was the same as the one her brother had spoken about. Meanwhile, in the Joshua mansion, in Eli's office, they questioned why he was refusing to let the boy go to the academy, since it wouldn't be better for him to be ordained as a priest. Eli just told them to mind their own business, but they said that the Pope would be very angry about it. Eli replied that it was none of their business, and that his grandson would be educated at Joshua Manor, and that was that. They insisted that keeping a child confined like that could end up creating a problematic personality, and Eli thought that was precisely the problem. Then the person he was communicating with asked him if he had heard the latest news, telling him that a silver-haired child was causing a stir at the academy. Eli immediately got up and asked if it was Isaac, shouted for Heli, and told him to leave for the capital right away, as they needed to arrive before the end of the next day. There were exactly 23 hours and 48 minutes left. Eli warned that it would take at least a week to get to the capital, but Eli said they'd hurry. The next day, Shuri was knocking on their bedroom door, calling for Isaac and asking why it was taking so long if there were other people waiting. Shuri commented that everyone would laugh at them since it was obvious that they were late. Isaac then left the room, saying he was ready, and Shuri asked them to give up and go home, begging insistently, but was completely shocked by Isaac's appearance at that moment. Even so, Isaac just asked them to go straight away. On the last night of the Foundation Festival, the ordination ceremony for the priest took place, and all the candidates were seated at the table, waiting for the great banquet to begin. And everyone was forced to stand up to welcome the leaders of the 5 holy families. Everyone was there to applaud, including Gowel, who watched intently as he thought that these were the 5 patriarchs, and that he himself would soon become the next patriarch of the Joshua family, also known as the Blue Cardinal. Heli arrived asking if he was late, and indeed he was. He also asked if Gowel had seen Isaac there, but Gowel replied that he was probably still at home. Even so, he said that the most important thing was to understand why they had rushed so much to get there. Heli explained that everything had been decided at the last minute, and then asked where Shuri was, but Gowel just said that he hadn't seen him for a while. Soon after, they announced the entrance of Pope Julius Barrett, and everyone knelt in reverence, especially the patriarchs. The Pope sat on his throne, and the patriarchs settled into their respective places. Eli looked around for Isaac, but didn't see him anywhere, which relieved him for a moment. The first name called for the ceremony was Isaac Joshua, but he didn't show up immediately. This made Eli feel even calmer, thinking that perhaps they should even remove his name from the list. However, soon after, Isaac himself replied calmly, saying that he was there, which made Eli spit out all the wine he was drinking. Gowel was shocked and didn't understand how Isaac, who he thought was at home, had suddenly appeared like that. Everyone then realized that Isaac was looking much older than before, and even poor Shu was there, exhausted by the whole situation. Eli was very surprised and shocked to see Isaac, and wondered what was going on. Isaac then walked towards the Pope, while Heli was thrilled to see how much the boy had grown. He was even wearing the priest's clothes that his uncle had prepared for him. Everyone began to talk among themselves about whether Isaac had overcome the Skeleton King's curse, and perhaps that was why he had suddenly grown so much. Nizer, amazed, couldn't understand how someone could grow so much in such a short time. Eli despaired, thinking that at the most important moment, the Skeleton King's power had simply failed. He began to imagine that his grandson might be under the mental control of something, because he didn't smile like that normally. Even Kay was uncomfortable with all the rumors that were starting to circulate. Isaac stood in front of the Pope, analyzing him. He thought that this must be the current Pope, about 60 years old, but the energy emanating from him seemed monstrous. Just by looking at him, he could tell that he was superior to any pope he had ever faced in his past life as king, and Isaac seriously considered taking the opportunity to cut off his head right then and there. Both Heli and his father remembered Isaac's answer on the application form. When asked what he would do if he met the Pope after becoming a priest, Isaac had replied that he would look him in the eye and cut off his head. Eli, worried, decided to act. To stop any possible attack attempt, he broke his own chair and pretended to slip. Heli followed up by saying that there was a cockroach, and threw the whole table over. Gowel was indignant, asking if they had gone mad. Heli insisted that there really was a cockroach there. The priest then called the next name in the ceremony, Shuri, and Isaac realized that those people had ended up in his way, so he preferred to stay put and do nothing. Meanwhile, Shuri went up to the altar, ready for the next stage of the ceremony, when the ordained would be chosen by the gods. During all this, Heli and Eli were drifting apart, as they had been expelled from the table because of the scandal. The patriarch explained that a supreme blue god would appear to choose the ordained, and Heli hoped that this was indeed the god who would appear. He He said that even if it was an evil god, he didn't think it would dare approach Isaac. The patriarch said that if that happened, he would destroy the god himself. Hillai, startled, asked if he was talking about destroying his own god, or Isaac, not knowing what to think in the face of that statement. The patriarch said that there was no reason to destroy a child, so the first to come forward was Shuri, who pierced his own finger and let his blood drip into the water, creating a great mist of energy. Gowl was happy to see that it was the supreme blue god who had chosen him and began to celebrate excitedly alongside Shuri. Meanwhile, Isaac thought that the Joshua served the god of light, the god of incorruptibility and purity, and now it would be his turn. He knew he would be annoyed by any god that came along. When Isaac's blood dripped into the water, the Pope was shocked as a black evil mist appeared in front of everyone. Who appeared out of the darkness was the Skeleton King himself. Everyone was terrified and shocked. The Joshua Patriarch stepped forward to try to attack the Skeleton King, but it had no effect. The Skeleton King bound Isaac with his chains and said that he had been waiting for this moment for a long time. He said that he would begin his revenge by killing that boy, and that would be his first step towards destroying the Empire. Isaac wondered what was going on, because that sounded exactly like him in his past life. It was an outrage. The Watcher commented that it all seemed fake, and that his master seemed even more pathetic than that. Isaac wondered what he was hearing. Meanwhile, the Patriarchs and the Pope also tried to attack the Skeleton King, which caused a huge explosion. At the same time, civilians fled in panic, and the place was evacuated, but the Patriarchs kept fighting. The Joshua Patriarch used the power of the snake, but this power was also absorbed by the Skeleton King, who scoffed that that blue Patriarch must have limited power because of the curse, and asked why he didn't keep quiet. Eli said he was trying to restrain himself so as not to destroy the entire building, but since the other was talking too much, he decided to unleash his full power. The Skeleton King asked him if he really wanted to see his own grandson die. Isaac was shocked and thought that this was exactly what he was doing, because how can someone summon such great power while his grandson is bound by chains and still have the nerve to open his mouth to provoke the enemy? The Patriarch replied that a saint doesn't die from an attack of that intensity. Just as he was about to be devoured, Isaac was sure that he would die right there, but another gigantic explosion occurred, blinding everything, including the Skeleton King. After the chaos, everyone was alive, although the building had been badly damaged. The Skeleton King had disappeared, and many wondered if he was finally returning after guarding so much power for so many years. Isaac thought that it wasn't a comeback, but blatant plagiarism, and called that bastard an imitator. Eli asked if Isaac was all right, and people commented that even though he was a Joshua, that boy was alive after the Skeleton King's attack, and only a true saint could have survived something like that. But the people began to wonder why the Skeleton King had appeared. Isaac explained that he wasn't really alive. It was just an illusion he had created. The observer said that the being had copied Isaac as if he were a shadow and thrown him there, but there was something very strange about it. Isaac also realized that the illusion was using his own mana, so he thought that perhaps his mana core had fallen somewhere in hell. That wasn't unlikely, since even his bones had been lost. However, he concluded that this was good for him, as he only needed to recover his mana core. Eli was very relieved, because at the moment when everything was happening, he realized that the Pope would have attacked even with his grandson in the line of fire, which meant that he would have killed Isaac along with him. Eli wondered why the Pope would do such a thing. Meanwhile, the Pope could hardly believe his eyes. The primordial god, the one that the Golden House had longed for thousands of years, and that even the 5 supreme gods revered, had appeared. But the most unbelievable thing was that he had appeared in front of that boy. The Pope wondered how this could have happened. Eli then approached Isaac and said that they had to go back, because his grandfather was very proud of his grandson who had managed to overcome the curse. Isaac wondered why that old man looked even scarier when he smiled. The Patriarch said that Grandpa was going to buy sweets for his grandson, and Isaac thought that was even more frightening, because the way he spoke sounded like a pervert approaching a child. It was then that Kina approached and said that Isaac couldn't go straight to the exit, as they were surrounded by demonic creatures. The situation wasn't over yet. Isaac stood up and replied that there was no other option, so for now, they wouldn't go back and deal with it. He took a step ahead of Kina, who thought that Isaac was thinking too much of himself, as if he were a saint, just because he had suddenly grown up. But Isaac also thought that he didn't know what Kina was planning, so he intended to take advantage of it just the same. They both thought at the same time that they would show who the real saint was. Isaac began by invoking the power of purification, which shone so brightly that it overshadowed all the demonic beasts around him. The priests were impressed by this power, for it had been over 100 years since they had seen such a beautiful light. But one of them wondered why he was using purification instead of some offensive art. Another priest explained that the power of purification also cleanses mana, which prevents those demonic creatures from being summoned again. But suddenly the monsters began to show off their muscles while their hair swayed silkily, as if to tease him. Isaac thought it would have to be that way. After all, it was Sala who had taught him that. When his purification art finally reaches rank S, he'll be able to kill demons instantly. However, even now, all the monsters began to feel pain at the same time. Kina tried to stand up for himself by telling them to get out of the way, because Isaac's art was nothing compared to his, but Isaac only replied by confidently showing his thumb. Kay, observing this, thought that Isaac could only use C-rank arts, but even so, he already showed incredible talent. Even so, Kay believed he was much better, and explained that he would be using a sacred art that hit multiple parts of the enemy's bodies and focused on the complete destruction of the creatures. But Isaac found it very funny, and Kina wanted to know if he had learned what those monsters were yet. Kina explained that they had very high regenerative abilities, and that you had to use really powerful attacks to kill them. However, Isaac didn't take it seriously. He said that Kina didn't know anything, that those monsters were just a distraction, and that the real enemy was hiding. So he started searching the core until he found a small cockroach. Kina was confused and asked what was wrong with that cockroach, but Isaac pierced it without hesitation, causing it to explode. He explained that this little cockroach was the real danger, as it spread a slow poison that affected people's brains until it killed them, all without them realizing that they were being poisoned. The Skeleton King himself had declared that he wanted to annihilate the Holy Empire, and since the priest students were the future of that empire, the main targets were precisely them. When the others realized this, they all began to run in desperation. But Isaac noticed something even more worrying. All the monsters had been defeated at the same time, which indicated that the poison had spread widely in the air. The observer commented that this was the perfect moment for his master to shine, as he had the knowledge needed to purify all his colleagues. Isaac thought that he really was a genius, and that this was his chance. But before he could act, the Pope appeared and stepped in front of him. He absorbed all the corrupted mana in the area, purifying it all at once. The Pope told them not to worry, because now everyone was safe. Isaac thought that everyone in the Pope's family was a real pain in the ass. However, there was still one last demonic wolf lurking. He was wounded, but when he saw that the child had attacked his king, he decided that the last thing he would do before dying would be to attack the boy. But Isaac slowly turned around and looked the wolf in the eye. The wolf was so frightened by Isaac's gaze that it ran away in panic. Isaac thought that those beasts were nothing in front of him. Kina witnessed the whole thing and was terrified. He wondered if Isaac had really frightened a demon with just his gaze, and concluded that it was completely impossible. Kina thought that the ability was so powerful that not even the Pope could use it. Later, at a meeting between the Pope and the patriarchs, everyone was discussing the information that had been leaked. They realized that this would definitely be a big problem for the future. They were investigating everything that had happened, trying to understand how the Skeleton King had managed to appear. This was about to become a scandal, since the Sacred Dragon Barrier should have prevented the manifestation of an entity of that level. The next morning, Isaac was also reading the news and saw that the demonic invasion had only happened because the Empire's barrier had been weakened. As the Sacred Dragon is related to the Imperial family, the Pope wasn't held responsible, but Isaac thought that it was his fault, and that they only deflected responsibility because he was a coward. Gowel showed up to congratulate his nephew, saying he was happy that he was getting older, could read the newspaper, and had been ordained a priest. But Gwel showed no sign of being happy about this, while Hilai was extremely happy and proud. He commented that Isaac could now even speak fluently and that he could finally read the letter of the Skeleton King's curse. It was then that the Patriarch entered the room and asked to speak to his sons in private. He asked Isaac to leave for a moment. When Isaac closed the door, the Patriarch used a sacred art that created a soundproof barrier to ensure that no one outside could hear the conversation. Hilai asked if the matter was really so serious as to need this barrier, and Hilai confirmed it, saying that he didn't even feel safe in his own office. The subject was Isaac. During the ordination ceremony, Hilai had the impression that Isaac had been chosen by an evil god. The Patriarch said that it didn't seem to be an ordinary god, because usually, when a god manifests itself, its emblem or characteristic color appears. Furthermore, the Pope himself had tried to kill Isaac during the ceremony. Hilai was shocked and asked if Your Holiness had really done that, and the Patriarch confirmed it, saying that if it hadn't been an evil god, the Pope wouldn't have acted like that. But Gowel disagreed. He said that perhaps it wasn't an evil god, but an emblem of the Golden Faith. He explained that those followers were obsessed with purity and abhorred anything that wasn't absolutely pure. They would not tolerate it if someone from the Joshua lineage invoked a god that was revered by them. According to Gowel, considering the extreme reaction of Your Holiness, it was more likely that Isaac had invoked a god with whom only the Golden lineage could establish contact. Perhaps it was a god that not even the followers of the Golden Faith were able to invoke. Hilai agreed, saying that it made sense, but the Patriarch asked if they really believed that Isaac had invoked a golden god. Gowel replied that he didn't, that he thought it was impossible. Even so, the Patriarch ordered Gowel to contact the Pope's family to investigate and find out which god had contacted Isaac. Gowel asked why he should do this, and the Patriarch replied that he would give Shuri an artifact, which made Gowel stop and think. The Patriarch also stated that Isaac would be under special supervision. If he got the same result in the last test of faith, his career would would probably be as a dark priest, which was not good for anyone. They thought that if anything went wrong, their whole family would be treated as a traitorous family. They would be collectively punished, exiled, and even excommunicated. Hilai thought he couldn't let that happen to his nephew, and the patriarch said they needed to avoid that fate at all costs. Later, Isaac and Shuri met with Hilai and Gowel. Hilai commented that they would soon be going through the apprenticeship and that the overseers, or rather the elders, might not be very kind to them because they belonged to the Joshua family. Isaac found this very unpleasant and thought it was like being back in the days when he served in the army. Riff explained that when they are apprentices, the apprentices work closely with the elders, and while trying to discover their own strengths, they learn what the real duties of a priest are, duties that are not taught within the academy. He said it was important to do their best because the final assessment would decide both their membership and the treatment they would receive. At the end of their apprenticeship, they would make a contract with God. Isaac asked if he could take part in the offering ritual, and Hilai wanted to know if he was really interested in it. Isaac said yes, he was very interested, especially in the execution of the Skeleton King's subordinates. Really was thrilled to hear this from his nephew and said that little Isaac's faith was growing. Then he put on his explanation glasses and started talking about the ritual. He explained that the offering ritual is when an offering is made to the gods, and that it is an event similar to a festival where many people come together. Even so, the offering is individual and should be considered something personal. When Isaac tried to interrupt, Hilai went on to explain that this led to an important question about whether it is really necessary to make the offering together with others. According to him, an offering is a rite dedicated to the gods, and rites have always been performed with many people gathered together. However, at the end of the day, it all comes down to serving the gods. The fact of standing alone before a god, offering something as a gesture of personal faith, prayer, or spiritual refinement is precisely what proves this devotion. This was the most interesting aspect of the ritual. The explanation went on to say that if a group performs the ceremony, it is not possible to clearly determine whether it is true faith or just collective obedience. It all depends on the purpose and nature of the meeting. They ended up straying a little from the focus of the conversation, but really said she trusted Isaac to understand the true meaning. Isaac noticed that he seemed very happy explaining everything, but he still kept talking. As he listened, Isaac thought that he was saying that lesser gods and even angels could take part in the ritual. And then he silently concluded that, if that happened, it would be better if none of them appeared before him, because if any of them dared, he would destroy them all. Hilai commented that it seemed that little Isaac could carry out the task himself, and that fighting spirit was also important. Gowel told his son that the team with the highest score would have the honor of executing the Skeleton King's subordinates, and asked him to do his best. Isaac was surprised to realize that this was a group project, but Hilai immediately wished his nephew well, believing that he would do well. Isaac understood that there was no other option, and decided that he would have to eliminate all the other teams, so he told himself that he would do his best. Hilai reflected, not believing that such a kind, gentle, polite, and affectionate child could one day become a dark priest. But Gowel, showing a certain nervousness, told her that during the ordination ceremony, he had asked her which god had appeared before him. He said he couldn't remember clearly, but that an emblem had appeared, and that it was so unpleasant that he wanted to vomit. They both realized that the god who had contacted Isaac was actually an evil god. Hilai tried to soften the blow, saying that some gods were just like that, and Gowel agreed, saying that what mattered was faith. Isaac said he wasn't too worried, but Gowel warned him that the Golden Cardinal wanted to get in touch with him. Isaac wondered what was wrong with that guy, when suddenly Kina appeared shouting for him, saying he had important business to attend to. Rala and Gowel were desperate to see his sudden arrival, and wondered why someone from the Pope's family had shown up there, since the whole family was present. Gel imagined that it was probably related to the evil god who had manifested himself. Kina approached Isaac, saying that he thought he was useless, and Isaac wondered if he had come all that way just to offend him. The observer burst into laughter as Kina explained that Isaac hadn't shown up for the last 10 years because he was training, trying to prevent his skills from mixing with those of the others. Now, after seeing his incomparable skills during the ceremony, he realized that it would be a waste of time if Isaac was just a priest's apprentice. Kina said he wanted him to join his training, along with his grandfather, so that they could go straight into the professional world without wasting time in that little gym. According to him, together they could behead the Skeleton King. Shuri watched from afar, wondering if this was some new kind of bullying, but concluded that it was too serious, to the point of causing goosebumps. He thought that if he were in Isaac's place, he would accept immediately. Isaac replied nonchalantly, saying that he didn't want to get ahead in life that easily, but would rather start as an apprentice. Shuri was relieved, remembering that Isaac had always been a bit crazy in the head. Kina insisted that he didn't need to worry about qualifying to be a priest, as he already had what it took to skip all the stages. Even so, Isaac refused again, firmly affirming his decision. Kina said that he could even take Shuri along, not caring, but then added that Shuri was on a completely different level to Isaac, which Isaac admitted was true. Shuri felt deeply offended by the comment, while Kina continued to praise Isaac's power, saying that he was so powerful that he had driven away a demon with just his gaze. The watcher commented that this was probably the effect of Isaac's intimidation skills. Isaac began to wonder if all this wasn't just because Kina wanted to learn his skill. Even so, he said that he was no longer interested, and that it was fine, because he didn't want to learn anything from the Pope. The thought of taking lessons from the Pope made him want to vomit. Kina was surprised and asked what he had just said, but Isaac repeated it without hesitation, saying that he wanted to cut that bastard's head off. Before he could continue, the patriarch appeared and took Isaac on his lap, saying that his grandson was very busy and that no one else should talk to him. Kina protested, saying that he was part of the Pope's family and that the Blue Patriarch couldn't stop him. But the patriarch replied firmly that if Kina stayed close to Isaac, he would end up being contaminated by him. Kina was indignant and asked what that meant, while Isaac angrily thought that those bastards would pay for this, and that he would annihilate everyone in that damned family. After all the previous confusion, it was finally explained what the Pentagon was. Every priest had to go through this challenge. The Pentagon was divided into 5 stages: ivory, gold, blue, obsidian, and crimson. Each stage corresponded to a trial supervised by the cardinal of the respective faith. A recruit priest could only become a true priest after facing all these trials. Now, Isaac was about to enter the room assigned to his group. He knew the other members were already there. The rooms consisted of up to 30 children, grouped based on family ties or shared beliefs. Isaac suspected they were trying to provoke a faction war. That's why he was glad he had sent Shuri ahead, since he had already gotten close to the group. Isaac planned to use his subordinates well, but he knew the first step was to make a good impression. He entered with a smile on his face, but quickly realized everyone there already hated him. Some muttered that the bastard had arrived. Others stepped forward and asked if he was the one who bullied Shuri. They threatened to teach him some manners and warned that if he told Shuri anything, he would be dead. In response, Isaac decided to act. He grabbed his rattle, his main weapon, ready to use it. The others burst out laughing, asking if he was a baby, but Isaac didn't hesitate. With a quick strike, he hit the first boy's face, breaking his nose. Everyone was shocked, asking if he had gone mad, but Isaac answered calmly, saying that this was part of a dynamic to improve group bonding. According to him, it was important for everyone to get closer. Then he began blessing everyone he encountered along the way. He climbed on top of a pile of classmates and sat as if on a throne made of subjects. When Shuri entered the room, he was baffled by the scene. He said he honestly couldn't understand that crazy school idea. Some of the boys asked Shuri for help, claiming that since Isaac was his cousin, he should do something. Shuri only thanked them for playing with him. Then he warned Isaac that the first evaluation would be in groups. He asked what Isaac was doing. Isaac confidently replied. He said that the human pyramid he had built was an excellent demonstration of teamwork. Shuri thought it looked more like forced submission, but decided not to argue. He simply handed Isaac a document to read. On the paper was a list of all the people who had approached Shuri over the past 7 years, trying to take advantage of his influence for personal gain. Although the Joshua family had never asked for anything in return, there was a limit to how long this could go on. One of those present got angry and said they had never needed the Joshua family for anything. Isaac then asked if that was really true, and at the same time, put more weight on the boys who made up his human pyramid. He ironically remarked that the pyramid was still fresh. He claimed he wasn't asking for much. He was just returning a favor and wanted everyone to work as a group with dedication and honesty. Faced with silence, Isaac demanded an answer. The boys then said they understood. He stepped down from the pyramid and everyone collapsed to the ground, hurt and exhausted. Shuri asked if they couldn't fail the evaluation because of that. Isaac just told him to forget those losers and follow him because he wanted to show him something. According to him, there was a plan. Opening a closet, he revealed someone tied up. Shuri was shocked. He said that boy was part of their group and even the son of Uncle Eli's friend. Isaac confirmed it. He said that was exactly the problem. The boy was in their group, but it wasn't Isaac who had captured him. There was a letter with the boy saying, "Stop being a spy." Suspicious, Shuri removed the gag from the boy's mouth and asked if it had been Nigel who did that. The boy confirmed, embarrassed, saying he had no choice. There was a whole story behind it. Isaac said he didn't care. He was willing to forgive him, but wanted to hear the whole story. The boy then explained that Nigel had instructed him to sabotage Joshua's group. His mission was to find a way to break the team apart. He also revealed that it was Nigel himself who planned the attack against Isaac, precisely at the moment he arrived at the site. Isaac seethed with with anger at that damn Nigel Safet. It wasn't enough that he had plotted an attack against him, now he was also trying to corrupt his subordinates. But Nigel would learn a lesson. A few days later, Nigel was frustrated. None of his spies managed to carry out their orders. The most recent one, who was already giving up, said he couldn't do anything because there had been a social gathering. Nigel was puzzled and asked what the hell that meant, then dismissed the boy. Other members of his team tried to reassure him, saying the opposing team wasn't even that threatening. But there was something about Isaac that deeply bothered Nigel. More than the boy himself, what irritated Nigel was Isaac's father, someone influential who showed interest in his son. He then decided he would destroy the cursed Joshua family, no matter the cost. Meanwhile, the Pentagon's Unity stage was underway. Isaac stood in line, yawning, showing no interest at all. Nigel reflected on the rules. If a member of a team gave up, the whole group would be disqualified. The traitor would be transferred to another team. This was his chance. He already had several spies infiltrated in Isaac's group and was sure they would fail. However, later, the results were announced. The blue team, Isaac's group, had remained united unanimously and passed the Unity test, the teamwork stage. Isaac gave a mocking smile in Nigel's direction, calling him a sucker with his eyes. Later, Shuri wanted to understand how Isaac had achieved that feat. How had he made the entire team vote in favor and pass unanimously? Isaac then asked if he remembered how the Golden Cardinal had been desperately looking for him for days. Shuri confirmed, even recalling how Isaac had refused the summons without a second thought. Isaac explained that it was simple. He demanded a golden pill in order to accept the meeting. Shuri was shocked. That was a secret pill, used exclusively by the direct lineage of the Golden Faith. Extremely valuable. Isaac said he received it and used it to strike a deal with the other members of the team. Shuri then asked if he had blackmailed everyone with the pill. Isaac denied it. He said he would never hand over the pill before the vote. Shuri asked what would happen if they had betrayed him. Isaac assured him that it would never happen, because he trusted the group. Shuri, however, found that supposed benevolence strange, but the truth came soon after. When Isaac opened the door to the room, all the members of his team were on the ground, writhing in pain. They begged for an antidote, saying their stomachs were destroyed. Isaac, with a cold smile, said he had always known they would never betray him. Shuri was shocked. He asked what Isaac had done. He wanted to know if Isaac had poisoned everyone, but Isaac explained. He had given them the golden pill, but with some adjustments. 93% flour, 5% essence of the Skeleton King's mana, 1% laxative, 0.5% hair extract, and only 0.001% of the true golden pill. Shuri, outraged, said that if he threw that pill down the drain, it would leave more traces of gold than inside it. Isaac replied that now they would pay for everything they had done, but as promised, he would give them the antidote, and he revealed that the antidote was hidden inside a diaper. Suddenly, Nigel burst in furiously, slamming the door open. He demanded Isaac return his subordinates and shouted that he would never forgive him for stealing them. But Isaac's teammates, desperate for the antidote, turned against Nigel. They began to beat him and then started attacking each other, completely out of control. Isaac watched it all and remembered Nigel's own words. That overwhelming power was what people sought in times of crisis. But to Isaac, the true impulse of people was to save themselves. Nothing compares to the fear of death. Nigel, staring into the dark and profound soul of Isaac, wondered if that boy was truly human. Meanwhile, at the Seed's office, Hoore's work was once again interrupted. A subordinate apologized, but said he had to deliver a message. Isaac had declared that he would no longer attend, even after receiving the golden pill. Hoore, irritated, ordered them to fetch that brat immediately, by any means necessary. The subordinate only remarked that next time they wanted to summon Isaac, they should bring a lot of money. Nigel, however, remained furious. Even so, he knew the situation wasn't entirely unfavorable. His subordinates had reported something important. There was a reason everyone avoided direct confrontations with the Inquisitors. As he thought about this, he overheard a group of students talking. He asked why they were idling in the dormitory. They replied that they had business in the young master's room. Isaac was lying down, hearing strange murmurs about some business in the finger of the room. It sounded far too suspicious. Some priests began whispering among themselves, wondering what the young master of House Karmazin, that is, Nigel, was doing there. Nobody liked him, to put it simply. Isaac then appeared and asked why they had taken so long to arrive. He said they needed to hurry because he was organizing a social gathering and needed supplies. The group thought it sounded simple and even believed Isaac was willing to cooperate. It seemed like a fair exchange. One hand washes the other. They fell for his words. They said they had come to deliver the items he had requested and that everything was already prepared. Isaac reminded them that a social gathering required tea and refreshments, and everything had to be ready by the end of the day. Meanwhile, Nigel Safet watched everything with suspicion. He wondered if that social gathering was nothing more than another excuse for Isaac to brainwash his subordinates. After all, Isaac had already used a technique called infernal penance, a fifth-level sacred art, to emotionally break his classmates. Nigel then interrupted, saying that he had given his men a break because he needed to speak with Isaac, and suggested they carry out a little test of faith, just for fun. Shuri, upon hearing this, grew extremely worried. He knew that if Isaac took part in a test of faith, he could be condemned to the stake, and if anything went wrong, the entire Joshua house could be accused of treason. Nigel explained that he had a device that reacted only to touch, so the test could begin easily. But at that moment, Hooray, the cardinal of the Seedeesies, appeared furious. He hadn't expected Isaac to ignore his summons just to play around, and he asked if Isaac thought the cardinal was some kind of joke. Nigel, surprised, wondered why the cardinal was there. Hooray then declared that he hadn't expected to find Isaac socializing with Dahlia of House Karmazine, and revealed that she had attacked his men without permission. Nigel, trying to make sense of it, wondered if the attacked men were from House Barity. Isaac, with an innocent expression, apologized to His Eminence. He said he was only following instructions, since Lord Nigel had prevented him from meeting members of the Golden Faith, which kept him from answering the previous summons. Nigel denied everything, and demanded to know how a mere student of priesthood could have been summoned personally by a cardinal. He said it was absurd. Hooray then turned and asked if that was true. Isaac, trying to hold back his laughter, thought the situation was getting more amusing by the minute. The cardinal continued. Addressing Nigel, the third son of House Karmazine, he said he had been far too generous, giving him time to build connections. But now, because of the problems caused, Nigel's squad would be assigned more work at the Vatican. Nigel, desperate, could hardly react. Hooray then asked Isaac to accompany him to his office, but Isaac apologized. He said he had already been summoned by the Karmazin cardinal, and that his hands were tied. He remarked that this cardinal was very persuasive. Hooray then asked if that was true, if he had indeed been summoned by another cardinal. Nigel, realizing that he had to act quickly or ruin his own position, rushed to take the blame. He said that yes, he himself had invited Isaac, and that he was there precisely to deliver that message. Hooray accepted the explanation, saying that if Isaac had a more important appointment, then so be it. But he reminded Nigel that he had caused trouble for the Golden Faith, and therefore, starting the next day, he would be responsible for cleaning duties. No exceptions. Nigel was desperate, thinking that if he managed to bring Isaac to his father, maybe everything would be fine. But Isaac had already vanished. Shuri explained that Isaac had said he was going to bed early. According to him, those who sleep a lot grow taller. Nigel, unconvinced, grew even angrier. It was only 2 in the afternoon. While Isaac slept peacefully, Nigel pounded on the door. The rest of the priest group was furious with him as well. 3 days later, there was Nigel, mopping the floor after 18 hours of work, exhausted, swearing to himself that he would kill that damn boy. He told his father everything, who also became furious. Nigel's group had low grades, and everyone was blaming him. Now, even his father refused to help him. If Nigel wanted support, he would have to bring Isaac personally, but for that, he had to find him first. He thought he could just wait in the prayer room. 6 hours later, still no sign of Isaac. Then members of the Karmazin faith appeared and dragged Nigel into a new mission. At the back of the chapel stood Isaac, waving his hand in farewell. Nigel shouted for them to let him go, desperate to reach that boy. Shuri, indignant, asked if Isaac had really checked Nigel's schedule just to show up at the exact time and provoke him. Isaac answered simply, why wouldn't he? It was far too entertaining. Shuri, however, reflected that in the end, that meeting between Isaac and the Karmazin cardinal might actually be a good thing. After all, Hooray Barrett would never grant them a king. Isaac, confused, asked what he meant. Shuri then questioned whether he even knew how the ranking system worked. He said he should have explained earlier. In short, the system went like this. Anyone ranked as a skeleton was deemed unfit to become a priest. A pawn, on the other hand, was seen as someone with average talent. A knight was considered a talent who stood out in a specialty. A bishop was an exemplary talent, someone seen as a model. The queen represented a talent capable of protecting the empire, and the king was an incomparable talent, above all others. Shuri explained that if they angered a cardinal, they could be demoted to mere skeletons and expelled from the Academy of Priests. He also warned that Hooray would probably try to kill Isaac if he continued refusing for too long. Isaac's own conscience found that absurd. What kind of man would hold a grudge against a 10-year-old child? But then Shuri revealed that Isaac's mother had once been Cardinal Hooray's fiancée. Technically, it had been just a political arrangement between two families, so it wasn't so serious. Even so, the resentment remained. The Observer, a mysterious entity, watched everything while eating popcorn, and Isaac realized that, of course, Hooray had plenty of reasons to want to destroy him. He wondered why Shuri hadn't told him this earlier. Shuri said that if they gained the support of the Karmazin Cardinal, they could use it to keep Hooray in check. Even the powerful Golden House had to follow the orders of the Karmazin Pentagon. If they could secure an agreement with Karmazin that didn't involve sacrificing a skeleton to the Golden Pentagon, that alone would be considered a victory. Suddenly, a powerful entity appeared. Its presence enveloped Isaac and pulled him away, making him vanish from the chapel. Later, someone knocked on Cardinal Hooray's door. Hooray's assistant authorized entry, but the door was simply blown apart. It was Isaac who walked in calmly and greeted him with irony. He wished His Eminence a good afternoon, or rather to the kidnapper. He asked whether the cardinal had abandoned all formalities and simply kidnapped him. Hooray called him an idiot, but admitted he was irritated at being being ignored. He summoned Isaac with anger. What he revealed next, however, deeply surprised the boy. He said he wanted to make him the adopted heir of the Golden Faith. Isaac was shocked at the proposal. He suspected it was part of some hidden scheme. He questioned whether Hooray really wanted him to become part of the Golden House. It sounded like a cruel joke, but Hooray assured him there was no trick. It was simply a direct proposal. He would cease to be a son of House Joshua and become a son of House Hooray. For Isaac, this only deepened his distrust. He suspected it had to do with the false skeleton who had called him Saint. Still, he didn't care about Hooray's intentions. What he wanted to know were the real benefits of such adoption. Hooray asked if such a young boy really knew how to negotiate agreements. Even so, he answered that the papal family could provide everything House Joshua could not. The papal house had many privileges, but Isaac said he lacked nothing where he was. In response, Hooray remarked that he had heard the boy's family intended to confine him in the mansion. According to Hooray, following the Vatican's faith required patience and suppression of one's own nature. The path to becoming a priest was full of restrictions. The Golden House, on the other hand, would not interfere in any of his personal affairs and would support him in whatever he wished to do. Isaac still found it hard to believe. He said that unless they were offering him the position of the next pope, it wasn't enough to convince him. Hooray reminded him that not long ago, he only wanted to be recognized as a saint, but now he seemed interested in going further. Hooray insisted that if Isaac truly wished to become pope one day, joining the Golden Faith was the best path. He added that beyond granting him the right of direct succession, he would have all the rights of a member of the current papal family. Isaac said he would consider the proposal. Hooray was satisfied with that and said they could begin the affiliation process. He only asked that Isaac not tell House Joshua just yet. Isaac replied that he would tell no one. However, as soon as he turned around, Hooray saw Shuri eavesdropping on the conversation. Panicked, he ran off. Even so, Hooray insisted that Isaac's opinion was the only one that mattered. Isaac, in turn, made it clear that he had never said he agreed to the proposal. He declared he would never join the papal family, not even after death. Then Hooray remarked that he resembled his mother greatly, both in appearance and in the way he spoke. He said that since he was part of the papal family, one word from him would be enough to have Isaac excommunicated. And with his Vatican authority, he could forbid Isaac from even setting foot in the Holy Empire. But Isaac said he would simply create a country where priests and popes would no longer be necessary. To him, that made sense. After all, why would a nation need two leaders? The country would be his anyway. Hooray, confused, asked what he was talking about. Isaac replied that he would need that level of courage if he wanted to defeat the Skeleton King. He decided they would pretend that the adoption proposal had never happened. It would be better that way to preserve Hooray's reputation for excellence. And in fact, thanks to all that, Isaac was even more interested in the matter. He began to imagine what would happen at the ordination ceremony. He thought about how the Joshua house would react upon discovering that their rival had tried to adopt his successor. He also imagined how the entire Holy Empire would be curious about such a story. Meanwhile, in the Joshua family mansion, Eli questioned whether his grandson had really passed through the Union Pentagon. He couldn't understand why Isaac would do that. To him, the boy should have failed, since his faith seemed insufficient. So he prayed, asking for the divine powers of heaven and earth. Benjamin Joshua, Relay's second son, who had not appeared until then, asked Relay what had happened in that house during his absence. He wanted to know since when his own father had been using Vatican powers to curse his own family. He also asked if Isaac was really such a troublesome child. Relay replied that he wasn't. He said Isaac was pure, good, and very intelligent. Benjamin then wanted to know why his father was acting that way. And while making the sign of the cross with holy water, he heard Relay say that he was probably just worried about his grandson. Benjamin commented that since he could not inherit the house for being the second son, it was good that a child with heir potential had emerged. However, even accepting this, he admitted that he still felt somewhat uneasy. Shortly after, Relay appeared visibly irritated. He said that anyone affected by the blessing he had cast would become so energized that they would stumble over themselves and faint for 3 days. But for some reason, it hadn't worked on Isaac. Benjamin reflected that it seemed more like a curse than a blessing, and thought it was a good thing it hadn't taken effect. At that moment, a new voice manifested. It was Leah Joshua, candidate for sainthood, who tried to join the conversation. However, she was completely ignored by everyone. Relay then reflected that the papal family was showing far too much interest in Isaac. And if the Vatican was indeed trying to threaten his life, perhaps it would be better for the boy to leave the academy and return home. Still, he acknowledged that it was far too early. That would greatly hinder his studies. Only 1 or 2 years remained until ordination. While everyone was arguing, Benjamin noticed a letter and asked who it was from. The envelope was far too luxurious to have come from the Joshua family. The patriarch explained that it was a letter from his fourth brother. Relay asked if the message was from Goel, and indeed it it was. In the letter, Goel asked when the patriarch would finally step down, since, in any case, he would die someday. After reading that, the patriarch tore up the letter. He said that this was exactly why he had taught Isaac molds, so the boy wouldn't end up like Goel. Relay agreed with that decision. Relay reinforced that, if Isaac wasn't suitable to lead the family, the next patriarch would be Rilek. But since Isaac had passed the Union Pentagon test, there was still hope. Suddenly, a flaming spirit appeared and said that hope was. The patriarch, irritated, asked Salak what the problem was this time. Salak replied that Isaac was beating the other children. The most absurd part was that he used healing magic on them just so he could hit them again. He had even poisoned his own friends to pass the Union test. The patriarch simply replied that it was fine, as long as the papal family didn't find out. Then Shuri appeared with more news. He said that Cardinal Hooray had made a proposal to adopt Isaac. The patriarch wanted to know how the boy had responded. Relay stated that Isaac was a true Joshua man and would never accept such a thing. But Shuri said Isaac had said it was a good deal. Relay, surprised, asked if he hadn't tried to persuade Isaac otherwise. Even the servants began to comment on the matter. Furious, Relay shouted that as long as he, Isaac's grandfather, was alive and breathing, no one would take that boy away from his people. Meanwhile, in Joshua's Hall of Faith, everyone was astonished at the amount of gold accumulated there, probably offered to Isaac. Some whispered rumors about his closeness with the papal family. One of those present speculated that the gold was compensation to keep him silent about the agreement. Suddenly, Shuri appeared holding a banner that read, "Isaac Joshua is the future of the Blue Faith." Isaac thought that could only have come from the patriarch himself. When he picked up the note Shuri handed him, he read the message, "With love, patriarch, you are one of us." That left him confused. Why were they doing this to him? Overcome with frustration, Isaac tore up the letter, just as his grandfather had torn up Goals. Someone asked whether Sister Leia was also present, meaning, could it be that even the matriarch was there? Isaac was startled by the thought. And then, before everyone in the Joshua Hall of Faith, the saint and the candidate saint appeared. Inside, he panicked. He thought this was terrible. Why was Melissa there? But to his relief, he realized it was only a communication orb. She was speaking to them through video. Isaac felt relieved and even complained to Shuri for scaring him with a false alarm. He thought he should have been more direct. Shuri asked what Isaac had done to deserve a kick in the butt. Melissa, approaching through the image, asked if that was really the boy Isaac. She said she had heard about him, that he had grown too fast, and that the rumors were true. He had broken the Skeleton King's curse. She was impressed. Isaac thought that thankfully she wasn't really there. If she saw his face, she might recognize who he truly was. But then Melissa felt something strange, and Isaac wondered if she was able to sense it even through the orb. She asked, "What power is that inside him?" Isaac panicked. He kept repeating to himself that this was bad. If she discovered the truth, he would die right there. Trying to mislead her, he said he had swallowed the Skeleton King's finger 10 years earlier. There was silence. Then Melissa confirmed the story. Relay had told her, after all, there was no way he could be the Skeleton King reincarnated. That would be impossible. But if he were, she would have killed him right there, without hesitation. Meanwhile, Nigel and another member of the Karmazian faith questioned why they were there only to see a saint's apprentice. Nigel remarked that Melissa rarely took an interest in family matters, so why was she there? Leah answered that the interest was in Nigel, the third son of House Karmazine. She said he was next in the line of succession, but had lost in the Union Pentagon because he lost all his allies. He had been stupid enough to cause a penalty for himself and his companions. That cut deep. Even Isaac was surprised at Leah's coldness. Melissa, trying to change the subject, said she had prepared a reward for Isaac for the challenges he had faced so far. He already imagined it would be money. But she announced that his reward would be the sacred magical attack that had defeated the Skeleton King. Internally, Isaac thought it was useless. He didn't need that power, but everyone around was completely shocked. Someone commented to Nigel that, at this rate, they would lose to the faith of Joshua. Nigel replied that this only made him hate that child even more. Meanwhile, the spy infiltrated in Joshua's class saw there the perfect opportunity to bring Isaac down. He declared that Isaac had poisoned all his classmates to pass the Union test. He said that a saint candidate had used poison. Nigel was thrilled. He thought that finally his spy had done something useful. Soon Isaac would be expelled, and he could get his informant back. Melissa then questioned Isaac about the use of poison. She found it unbelievable that he had done such a thing. She said it was an irresponsible choice. Poison was inefficient to strengthen the mind. He had made a terrible mistake. But the spy corrected the version. It wasn't just poison. After poisoning them, Isaac had beaten his own classmates. Melissa sighed and said Isaac had been stupid. Just beating them wasn't enough. Bones had to be broken. She said that, as punishment, she herself would break a few. Leah, worried, asked her not to kill any children, but she also offered to help break a bone quickly and cleanly. Isaac stepped forward and said there was no need. He would handle the boy himself. He turned to the spy and declared that, from that moment on, he would serve him directly. He would be his flesh shield. The boy, shocked, thought the Joshuas were all insane. Later, in a private meeting, Melissa asked if Isaac really wanted to become the head of the house. She also asked what he would do if he became patriarch. Isaac immediately replied that he would remove all the saints. He said there was no need to keep them, that he would even bring down the Skeleton King with his own power. And he provoked, "Why doesn't your grandmother just give up being a saint as well?" Melissa answered with sorrow. She said she couldn't. She had committed a sin no man or woman should commit. In the past, she had confessed to Leah that she once had the chance to kill the Skeleton King, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, but she failed. She couldn't do it. And to this day, she believed God still hadn't forgiven her for that. Melissa explained that both she and Joshua were cursed. For generations, they had tried to kill the Skeleton King to break this curse, but they never succeeded. It was a burden they both had to carry. Isaac asked what kind of sin exactly she had committed. Leah also showed curiosity. She knew Melissa must have had a good reason not to kill the Skeleton King. Melissa then said she was there for exactly that reason. She showed him a holy rosary, the unique symbol of the saint, as if there were only one such artifact in the entire world. Isaac was confused, not understanding why she was giving him that. Melissa explained that she had sealed her own power inside the rosary, as she had heard that Isaac's offensive holy spells were too weak. With that rosary, he could invoke divine energy whenever he wished. She recommended that he use it to strengthen his sacred attacks, since he would not survive the Union Pentagon using only purification spells. She also said that soon she would visit the Holy Empire, and when she arrived, she would give him some lessons. Right after, the image in the communication orb faded. Isaac, relieved, thought he never wanted to see her face again. Leah, in turn, also said her farewells, but as she passed by him, she asked if he possessed a mana core. Isaac replied that he didn't. Inside, he grew tense. Did she know that he had created a mana core? Not even Melissa had realized that. Leah remarked that maybe it was a mistake. She believed that what was inside him was the mana core stored in the annex building, the very one he had stolen. Isaac immediately agreed with the excuse. He said yes, that was exactly it. That's it. He then remembered that he had indeed absorbed a common mana core, not a demonic one. Leah commented that the seal on the necklace she was about to give him could undo any problem. She then handed him the necklace. Isaac thought that was something very good for him. Leah stated that she didn't know if he would be able to use the necklace's full potential, but she knew he was striving to revive the family's ancient techniques. She then asked, "If you become patriarch, what will you do after removing the saint?" Isaac answered honestly that he wanted to be a rich man who didn't need to work. Leah smiled and said that it was truly a wonderful dream. She promised she wanted to meet him again when his training came to an end. Isaac thought that surely that woman wasn't very normal in the head either. As Leah prepared to depart with her knights in her carriage, one of the knights warned her about the necklace she had given Isaac. He said that necklace could help him unravel other techniques of the house. Leah replied that she knew. The knight questioned the fact that she had simply handed over something so important, something that had been given directly to her. He said the necklace could be stolen, or worse. Leah responded that if that happened, it would mean Isaac wasn't as powerful as she expected. If the necklace were stolen, it would mean he didn't deserve it. The knight stated that if Isaac managed to keep the necklace, he would surely become the successor. Leah then remembered everything he had said, that he would remove all the saints, that he would defeat the Skeleton King himself, and she amused herself by recalling those words. She admitted to herself she believed in him. Meanwhile, Goal was heading out on an investigation. Goal had emancipated himself from the family and, upon arriving, commented to the maid of the place that everything in the Joshua family was still a mess, as always. The maid agreed, saying it was exactly what one could expect from those hypocrites. Goal suspected that something had happened during the ordination ceremony of the saints. This was because the cleric responsible for Isaac's ordination had been found dead in the monster forest. It was something serious enough to justify the disappearance of witnesses. He also suspected that the Golden House now wanted to adopt Isaac. Everything was a mess, and everyone seemed to have gone mad. He thought that perhaps even the boy's life was at risk with everything happening all at once. There were moments when he felt that Isaac was getting too close to the Joshua family. He went to the main office of the Luce Barrett Mansion, more specifically to the Classified Information Archive. There, he found a book on the ordination of saints and located the page that spoke directly about Isaac Joshua. On that page was the mark of the god who had chosen Isaac, and Goal realized it was the greatest of all gods, the one who declared that everything was under his command. Goal ran off. Now he understood why the Pope's house had done everything it had. This wasn't just a dispute within the Holy See. This affected the very survival of House Barrett. In truth, it concerned the survival of the entire empire. Later, Isaac was organizing his wardrobe, storing all the gold he had received as a reward. The observer asked whether that amount of money wasn't enough to find a weapon capable of destroying the orb. Isaac replied that maybe it was, but the real problem was the anti-demonic stone. According to the observer, this stone not only destroyed all mana, but was also immune to mana itself, to aura, and even to sacred powers, which made everything even more complicated. Isaac explained that the enemies had transformed his link orb, the object that connected him to his minions, precisely into this anti-demonic stone. The observer remarked that this was the only known way to defeat a ninth circle demon. Isaac then said that at the very least, he would try to remove the magical seals. The observer asked if he would finally absorb the object's power. Isaac replied that, according to Leah, the necklace he had in his hands could help remove the seals. It was the closest item to that which he had ever obtained. Indeed, when he activated the crystal, the seals broke, releasing a great amount of demonic energy. The observer began to absorb this energy for himself, while Isaac realized that the demonic mana was far more intense than he expected. It was enough to raise his magical level. He began to use this power, letting out an evil laugh, but failed to notice that he was abusing the energy. When he looked at his hand, he saw that it was completely skeletal. Confused, he wondered what was happening. Once again, he had assumed his skeletal form. He thought it could only be the fault of his curse. The curse that had allowed the Skeleton King to become the most powerful demon lord of all time was called the reversal between the living and the dead. The observer asked if the curse would take over Isaac's body, but he replied that his current body was protected by several blessings, and so it would not be consumed so easily. Isaac then explained that the curse had suddenly strengthened because he had received too much magical power all at once. The observer understood that the balance between sacred and magical power had been broken. Isaac said he could raise his sacred power to suppress the demonic mana, but for that he would need to pray. The observer reminded him that Isaac's body already converted mana into divine power, so perhaps it wouldn't take that long. Even so, Isaac commented that his skeletal hand might remain that way for quite some time. He said he would use the pentagon to his advantage in this situation. If he could pass the Karmasin test, known as the Heretics test, he could increase his sacred power. For now, he would wrap his hand in bandages to hide it. It was at that moment that Shuri appeared, asking what Isaac was still doing there. Quickly, Isaac hid his hand, but Shuri suspected he had been laughing to himself in a sinister way again, which frightened him. He noticed Isaac was hiding his arm and wanted to see if he was hurt. Despite Isaac's denial, Shuri insisted and ended up seeing the skeletal hand, reacting with shock. The observer suggested that Isaac use memory erasing magic, but he refused, fearing it could be discovered. Shuri mocked him, saying that Isaac was so rotten ethically that even his own body was rotting. He remarked that everyone already thought he was evil all the time, and now they would be even more certain. That comment made Isaac remember the Joshua family curse. Either the men were born without talent, or they were born with talent, but with some severe physical disability. Shuri explained that an ancestor had already faced the same problem. Since Isaac was now partially incapacitated, he asked if this would affect his ethics. Isaac considered killing him right then. Shuri said the first thing they should do was tell their grandfather. Even if Isaac's life was short, the grandfather might be able to extend it a little. But Isaac, worried, thought that if his grandfather discovered the truth, he would realize Isaac was the Skeleton King himself. For that reason, he asked Shuri not to tell anyone. He didn't want to worry the family. The Pentagon was very important, and he needed to stop the true Skeleton King's plans before dying. Shuri was moved by this, and Isaac assured him he would not die so easily. There was a way to prolong his life, but for that he needed Shuri to make a small delivery. 20 days later, a group was discussing bizarre events. One of them wondered what kind of lunatic would place a bomb inside a bathroom. Another commented that Isaac had put poisonous gas in his pillow. Yet another said he had laced his food with cyanide, but Isaac justified it by saying that it wasn't torture. It was structured, personalized training. The training list was extreme. The first step was to fall off a cliff and die. The second, to die to a demon. The third, to be beaten to death. And the fourth, simply to die. According to Isaac, those were the goals of the training. After they ate, he told them to put on sandbags. The others wondered if Isaac really wanted them to train their bodies, since they were priests, not knights. But Isaac explained that they needed to be prepared. The Pentagon was approaching, and they would have to rely on the strength of their own bodies in the next test. Still, one of them refused. The next Pentagon test should have been the gold test, which required intelligence and strategy. But Isaac explained that the order of the tests had been changed. The next one would now be the Crimson Pentagon, a physical test. The others were confused, questioning how this could have happened. OC confirmed the change and added that even the projects would be different. Then, he said it was time to stop asking questions and ordered everyone to grab a sandbag. They would run 50 laps around the field. One of the young priests protested, saying it was a lie. Another questioned the 50 laps, calling it absurd. Isaac, with his rattle in hand, corrected them. It wasn't 50, but 100 laps. He asked in a challenging tone if anyone wanted more. Then, he commanded everyone to run immediately. Later, everyone was exhausted. They had pushed themselves to the limit. One of them said that 2 kings would be enough to pass the Pentagon, but another disagreed, saying at least 5 would be necessary. One of the young priests commented that the Crimson and Gold tests would never produce kings. The only ones that could offer that chance were the Joshua Pentagon tests. Another insisted that the next one should be the gold test, since they were already training their bodies. He said the test order was a historical tradition and should not be altered. It was at that moment that Simon's son appeared with important news. He confirmed that the next test would indeed be the crimson one, since it had swapped places with the gold test. The revelation caught everyone by surprise. Many were desperate. The crimson test involved one-on-one combat, and if someone failed, they would be expelled from the priest program. With the confirmation of the change, Isaac said that now was the perfect time to train. A few days later at the Imperial Training Center, Nigel wondered why his father had agreed to Isaac's request. Nigel's own father, Leon Safet, handed him a plan, instructing him to attack Isaac with full force to make him reveal his true powers. Nigel knew that the test was now a team battle, no longer just individual. Evaluating the opposing team, he believed that only Isaac posed any danger. The rest seemed easy to deal with. That's why he named his own group Team Crimson, convinced they were ready, confident, and well prepared. However, when he entered the arena, he was shocked. Even his father, Leon Safet, showed surprise. That was because Kinnabet, a high-level priest, was on Joshua House's side. Isaac explained that one of his allies had suffered severe stomach pain and had to be replaced by Kina. Nigel couldn't believe it. He asked how they had managed to place Kina on their team, since he was extremely powerful. Leon asked Harry why he had put Kina on Joshua's team, but judging by Harry's expression, he hadn't known about it either. The truth was that Kina had made a direct deal with Isaac. In exchange for teachings on very powerful techniques, he agreed to participate. The deal was sealed, and that was why Kina was there. Nigel protested, saying it was cheating. Kina wasn't even a novice anymore. It made no sense to have him fight against beginners. But Kira explained that Kina had refused his promotion. Despite having the right, he voluntarily gave up his privileges to remain a novice, just like Isaac and Joshua. The audience was impressed by the situation, and a strange atmosphere took over the place. Kina then asked the judge if a decision had been made. The judge confirmed that since Kina Barrett was still officially a novice, there was no rule preventing him from participating. Nigel knew that even if his whole team attacked Kina together, they wouldn't be able to defeat him. And besides him, there was still Isaac. It was practically a lost battle. The only hope was in a duel between the leaders of each group. If that happened, they might have a chance, since Shuri was the leader of Joshua's team, and Nigel considered him weak. Isaac noticed Shuri was restless, and asked if he should have gone to the bathroom beforehand. Shuri replied by asking if Isaac's hand would be alright after the fight. Isaac said yes, as long as he could get more divine power. Shuri then stated that Isaac should lead the team. It was thanks to him that they had gotten that far. Because of him, their grades had gone up. They had passed the Pentagon's union, and they had even voted for him as class president, even if forcibly. Isaac admitted that he taught very well, but not everyone could keep up with him. He said that those who managed to do so had only done it because of Shuri. That's why Shuri should continue as leader. Shuri agreed, but warned that they should not go easy on Nigel. Isaac then said that if everything Shuri had said was true, facing that redhead shouldn't be a problem. Shuri was moved to see that Isaac trusted him, but Isaac added that if he lost, he would be the first to die. The other members of the group pretended it had nothing to do with them and discreetly moved away. The time left until the fight began was only 5 minutes. Ashley, as always, was worried about Isaac. Even with Kina on their side, Relay commented that it was still a disadvantage for both Isaac and Shuri, since the Crimson team had cast ruin spells on themselves. In truth, the one controlling those beast-like people was still Isaac, with his chains. Ashley remarked that it looked like a Joshua spell, which made sense, since she herself had taught Isaac the spiritual elevation spell. When Riley asked about the effects of that spell, Ashley explained that, in theory, it only made people braver. However, it was clear that something was wrong, because the individuals seemed far too agitated, almost like beasts. Relay confirmed this impression, observing that they behaved like wild, uncontrollable creatures. In reality, this was Isaac's own secret. He had combined the spiritual elevation spell with herbal doping, and the result of that fusion was the state of bestialization. Since he had trained these people physically to withstand such a transformation, he could now reap the benefits of his efforts, using them in battle. Suddenly, magic circles appeared and summoned roots, knights, and even a great titan representing the patron of the Crimson House, the god of justice. This meant the test had begun. Shuri ordered everyone to kneel and pray to the patron, since those who demonstrated the strongest faith would be blessed by the god. He believed that blessing was essential to victory. But Isaac, defying all expectations, was the first to act. He grabbed a stone and hurled it directly at the statue of the god, shattering it completely. Then he thought perhaps he had overdone his strength. Shuri, shocked, asked if he had lost his mind. The others were bewildered. They said Isaac had broken the statue of the Crimson House's own own god. Kina was surprised by the feat and wanted to know what spell had been used. Yet Kina, with another motivation, did not care about the statue itself, but about the power behind that attack. He wanted to learn that strength. Shuri scolded his curiosity, while Kina declared that he did not wish to be blessed by any god other than the Golden One. Shuri prayed, asking for the salvation of his soul as well, just as he prayed for Isaac's. To smooth things over and avoid hostility against their group, Shuri pretended that Isaac only wanted to test the statue's resistance, saying it had been an excellent demonstration. He then asked Isaac to apologize, which Isaac did, in an overly repentant manner. Leon, for his part, commented that Isaac was an unpredictable and troublesome child, and that he could hardly wait to break him completely. Hooray, however, questioned whether the real problem wasn't with the Crimson House itself, for allowing a statue of a god to be destroyed by a mere novice's spell. Thinking about it, he decided not to let Leon act against Isaac. As the two faced off with their eyes, Leon considered that perhaps a more resistant statue was indeed unfair to novices. Shuri decided to proceed with the Pentagon as usual. Secretly, Leon sent a telepathic order to his son Nigel. He should cripple Isaac, at the very least. Later, the judge explained the rules of the Crimson Pentagon. The goal was to find the true necklace among several fake copies. The team that found the real necklace would win. Whoever was chosen as the bearer of the true necklace would be the leader. And once chosen, he could not be replaced. Shuri understood that this decision was very important and that he could not make a mistake. The judge explained that there were 3 ways to find the true necklace: capture the enemy leader and make him confess, use deduction skills to identify the real necklace, or defeat all enemy team members to collect their necklaces. While Nigel was organizing his team, saying that the Joshua house was not that powerful, Shuri surprised everyone by renouncing his position as leader and handing it over to Isaac. Isaac himself was confused by the gesture. Nigel was thrilled, thinking Shuri was too weak to lead. He thought the only real threat in the enemy team was Kina, and that the others wouldn't be a problem. As soon as the battle began, the Crimson House members, who had been motivated to defeat the Joshuas, were terrified by Isaac's presence, as he advanced like a true demon, laughing like a madman. For him, that combat test was the perfect excuse to beat his enemies without restraint. Shuri even wondered if the boy was really human. Isaac then charged forward like a raging beast, declaring that it was time for fun for the new priests. He began attacking everyone with his chain flail, a weapon adapted from his old golden rattle, now turned into a machine of destruction. The Crimson team was falling into despair. Isaac ordered them to take him to their leader. If they did so, they could still leave alive. Meanwhile, the Crimson House's front line was being completely crushed. Nigel tried to react by sending reinforcements and ordering the formation to be held so they wouldn't break completely. However, Kina exploited the gap and dashed through the defenses as if there were no obstacles, reaching Nigel with ease. Nigel, however, had anticipated this. He knew Kina was formidable, and precisely because of that, he had prepared. That form of Nigel was actually just a clone. At the same time, all the novices in his team, who were not on the front line, began chanting together a 5th-rank restriction spell, prepared in advance. Nigel declared that it was time to capture Isaac and Shuri. He was confident that tricks like bestialization would not work against him and his team. He believed that all bestialization did was give their enemies a slight boost in strength, nothing more. Soon, he found Shuri and prepared a powerful spell, intending to rip off 1 or 2 of his arms. Ashley warned Shuri of the danger, urging him to dodge, but at that moment, Shuri remembered what Isaac had said, that it was fine, and that following the plan would lead them to victory. Nigel, as expected, would try to face him directly. Shuri then took his stance and prepared for combat, ready to counter Nigel's strike. When their spells collided, Isaac only smiled in satisfaction. He declared that this was the moment when the Joshuas would show their true strength. With precision and control, Shuri grabbed Nigel's arms with ease and slammed him to the ground with a martial arts technique. The impact was so brutal that the boy nearly fainted from the blow to his back. In the past, Shuri and Isaac had been told that the Joshua techniques could not be used against humans. They once wondered if it was because those techniques only worked on demons, but the truth was different. Humans simply could not withstand their impact. Nigel was left completely motionless and unconscious after the strike. Shuri declared that no one would ever underestimate House Joshua again. By that point, House Crimson was practically defeated. Kina kicked yet another fallen opponent while observing Shuri's sudden strength. It surprised him. He wondered if Shuri's boost in ability had been Isaac's doing. Isaac then ordered him to finish the enemy off at once. Shuri replied that he would only take the necklace, but Isaac insisted he should kill. If Shuri didn't do it, he would. Even so, Shuri chose to press Nigel and demanded he reveal where the true necklace was. Nigel resisted, saying he would never fall for such interrogation. He claimed to be the successor of House Crimson and to have an unshakable mind. Shuri, trying one last time, told him this was his only chance to leave alive. Nigel replied that he had learned every form of torture and how to resist them. Then Shuri, warning once again, stood up and shattered Nigel's femur with a single blow. The sound was so horrible that part of the audience nearly vomited. Not even Shuri himself liked doing it, but Isaac had forced him. Nigel screamed in uncontrollable pain. Shuri only repeated that he had warned him. When some some members of the Crimson team tried to stop it, Kina blocked their advance. He cast a wide-area paralysis spell that trapped not only the opponents, but also all enemy teammates inside the arena. Immobilized, Nigel realized they had known about his plan from the beginning. What Shuri had done was only bait, and he hadn't noticed. It had all been part of Isaac's damned plan. Some began to wonder if all of this had been done just to force Nigel to confess. Even so, Nigel's allies insisted he would never confess. But Isaac replied that he didn't need him to. They all already knew where the real necklace was. Then, with his chain flail, Isaac began beating the enemy team members one by one to force the information out. Before long, he found the real necklace. Thus, House Joshua's team was declared the winner of the Crimson Pentagon. Relay thought those boys had done an excellent job. Then someone appeared at the center of the arena. He said he had already expected the youngest priest to represent the Empire with such a performance. He ordered his subordinate to present the winners, who had offered such a magnificent spectacle with a worthy gift. That man was the Crown Prince of the Holy Empire, Chablis Hela. Relay bowed before him. The prince, smiling, said that Relay's nephews were exceptional and that he wished to gift them priest uniforms. He asked if that would be a problem. Relay replied, of course, that there was no problem at all. Considering that they would leave the country when the time came for the Golden Pentagon, this gift would be perfect. A gift from royalty was something valuable, meant to be passed down for generations. Even so, Chablis asked if he could personally deliver the gift. Relay questioned whether he truly wasn't busy, since he usually was very occupied. Still, Chablis insisted. The prince asked Riley to see it as a symbolic gesture and took the opportunity to give him some advice. He said it would be better to warn his younger nephew to give up the Golden Pentagon, as the Pope was trying to kill Isaac. The prince asked him to keep that in mind. Relay deeply thanked him for this advice and replied that he trusted Isaac to escape such dirty schemes. Later, the Joshua group celebrated greatly. The prince had gifted them all with special uniforms, which everyone considered incredible. During the celebration, Isaac asked why Kina had not yet returned home, since the test was over and he no longer needed to remain there. Kina's subordinate agreed, saying that even the patriarch wanted to speak with him. But Kina replied that he would not return. He said Isaac had invited him to join House Joshua, which surprised everyone, even Isaac himself, who didn't remember making such an invitation. Kina insisted that he had said so the previous night, but Isaac replied that, in truth, he only wanted him to participate in the Crimson Test. He had never asked him to officially become a Joshua priest. Even so, Kina didn't care. He had accepted the proposal and declared that he would remain there indefinitely. He asked his subordinates to inform his father that he would not be returning anytime soon. Meanwhile, Ken reflected on everything that had happened. He knew Isaac had cast a holy spell on Shuri's body, which had made him stronger. The problem was that he couldn't understand exactly what overwhelming power had been used. Ken also thought about the uniforms delivered by the prince, which raised suspicions. All 5 faiths were controlled by the Pope, and this suggested that the Crown Prince might be challenging the authority of the current pontiff. Kina, in turn, stood up and said he would receive his reward for helping Isaac, but since he saw him very busy, he decided just to remain nearby. Kina's subordinates imagined that the Golden House would collapse when they learned of his decision. Then, Kina offered his help to Isaac, saying he could support him in any pentagon, whether blue, gold, or black, and even suppress the Golden Priests, replacing them with Joshua priests in the extermination of demons. He asked if there was an agreement between them. Isaac refused the proposal, saying he didn't need that. Kina insisted, reminding him that Isaac had promised to teach him certain skills. He said he wouldn't leave until he learned everything. He was willing to be dragged out if necessary. He made it clear that, having fulfilled his part of the deal, he demanded that Isaac fulfill his. In the end, Isaac said he would do it later, but asked Kina to leave before he changed his mind. Kina replied that it was fine and that he would wait for the training. At that moment, Isaac remarked that there was already a student who listened to him better than Kina, which offended the other. Kina thought it impossible that anyone could be better than him and asked who it was. Isaac, who was present, said it was obviously Shuri. Kina grew irritated, questioning whether Isaac truly thought Shuri was better than him. He declared that if he proved himself superior to Shuri, he wanted to be taught. Shuri, surprised at being dragged into this without knowing anything, couldn't understand how he had ended up in that situation. Isaac, as always, enjoyed provoking rivalry between the two. Meanwhile, in the Holy See's Grand Ballroom, people were astonished. The members of the Joshua group were receiving special treatment, with better meals and superior dormitories. It was clear that being ranked first in the Pentagon came with privileges. Relay was surprised to see Isaac's group placed first, as he couldn't understand the criteria used for that evaluation. It was then that Leon appeared, remarking that Riley should be happy about the victory. He also mentioned it had been quite some time since they last met. Leon had heard rumors that Relay was about to reach rank 9. For someone his age, that was remarkable. However, the patriarch of the Joshua family surely faced a major headache. After all, the only worthy successor was Relay himself, but his time was already running out. Even if life expectancy wasn't an issue, he might consider that assuming the role of patriarch was too heavy a burden to bear. In addition, there was the matter that he could not have children, and therefore could not continue the bloodline. Even so, he had strong and brilliant nephews, something that surely filled the patriarch with pride. The problem was that although Isaac was the third son, his brother had been mercilessly defeated by him in front of royalty and guests alike. This made it clear to Riley that the Crimson House was already well aware of the curse that plagued the Joshua family. Still, he didn't care. He had never intended to become patriarch, and none of it meant anything to him, unless someone tried to harm Isaac. At that moment, Leon approached Isaac directly. Meanwhile, Shuri was puzzled by the provocation, since the Cardinal of the Crimson House always sought enemies among the Skeleton King's spies, and there had long been rivalry with the Joshua House. Leon, however, noticed something more. He claimed he had felt within Isaac's body a trace of demonic mana, something inexplicable, yet undeniable. Isaac replied that perhaps he had forgotten what happened when he was still a baby, when he swallowed the Skeleton King's finger. Leon then commented that he had expected more from the Joshua House, but admitted the young man had learned something impressive. He believed it would not end well, especially since Isaac had beaten his son Nigel in front of everyone as if it were a spectacle. Isaac, with irony, said that had only been a warm-up, and he could still put on an even bigger show at the Golden Pentagon. The atmosphere grew tense. All eyes turned to Kina, the successor of the Barrett family and guardian of the Golden Pentagon. Leon then asked what Isaac wanted in exchange for such boldness. The answer was straightforward. He wanted permission to see the demons who answered the Skeleton King's call, and for that, he needed the prison key. Leon refused, saying it wasn't even worth it, since Isaac and his team would vanish in the Golden Pentagon anyway. His words were not merely a refusal, but a veiled threat. Soon, a shocking revelation came. A mission had been issued in the Golden Pentagon, an S-rank expedition. Leon explained that such missions served to recover lost tasks in various regions of the Holy Empire. The fate of the Joshua family was sealed. They were to be sent to Kraziandia, the Arcane Empire, a demonic land notorious for ambushing priests whenever possible. The news left everyone horrified. Isaac, however, remained silent, deep in thought. When Goel delivered the news to Relay, he grew furious, declaring it a suicide mission and threatening to destroy the Holy See itself if the order was not cancelled. The Patriarch had said the same earlier. To Goel, it was clear that the Holy See wanted Isaac eliminated at any cost. Still, he promised to do everything to stop it, as he also didn't want Shuri to be sacrificed. But worse news soon followed. A knight of the Joshua family brought even darker tidings. The mission had already been accepted. Isaac himself, with an insane smile, had agreed to take part. Meanwhile, in the Dark Fields, the demon's territory, the demoness Ash was interrogating her subordinates. They had failed to kill Isaac, but chaos had already been unleashed. Moreover, they had managed to place a magical device on the Empire's barriers, which until then had been impenetrable. Even a fraction of the Skeleton King's power had been enough to corrupt the protection. One subordinate reported that during the mission, he had clearly sensed the presence of the Skeleton King inside a young man. Ash understood immediately. It was the boy who had swallowed a fragment of the Skeleton King, the very one now training to become a priest. They had been unable to touch him before, as he had been protected within his family's territory. But now, things had changed. He would finally leave and face the Golden Pentagon trial. The news of the mission spread quickly. Ash remarked that it would be the best opportunity to capture Isaac, and even said she wanted to taste the flavor of the Joshua children. The topic soon became the talk of the entire priest academy. The mission assigned to the Joshua family had been accepted. They were to be sent to the Arcane Empire on an S-rank task. To Shuri, it was clear that everyone believed they would die. No one trusted in their success. Worse, paladins and priests began to completely ignore them, meaning they would be in extreme danger as soon as they left the Holy Empire. Crossing the border would make them easy targets for demons and bandits. Isaac, however, thought everyone was ridiculous and wondered why no one would side with their team. To Shuri, the blame was entirely his. This was not just a difficult mission, it was suicide. Their companions began writing testaments and last words to their families, having completely lost hope. Isaac, silently, reflected on how much the Crimson House's cardinal resorted to dirty tricks. If they refused the mission, they would be destroyed. If they accepted, they might die. But if they survived, no one would ever underestimate them again. To him, this mission into demon territory was almost a prize. It meant the chance to absorb all the mana available. Even so, Shuri reminded him there was still one possibility. They could choose a paladin to accompany them. At that moment, Count Malik appeared, lamenting. The first paladin had chosen to join the Golden Team, and he had even transferred his son to the same group. He regretted having placed him in the Joshua team, merely out of adherence to old traditions. Confident, Isaac replied that the Count was being short-sighted and would regret it when they returned victorious. While Shuri grumbled in Isaac's ear, Isaac wondered where those paladins had even come from. Soon, Shuri pressed him to make contracts quickly. Isaac spoke with the representatives and managed to strike a deal. He then announced that the Joshua family's team had chosen the fourth group of paladins. That decision pleased no one. Isaac himself considered the choice good news, since it meant the contract had been sealed with powerful warriors. But Shuri was outraged. The fourth group was known as the Pack Mules. They had never left the Holy Empire, and so humiliated, were used only as messengers. Despite possessing skills superior to the royal knights, they harbored deep hatred toward the clergy. The situation caught the patriarch's attention, who appeared demanding an explanation. He was furious. Isaac, unflinching, said that if he had accepted another mission, it would have stained the honor of the Joshua family. The patriarch confronted him, indignant at hearing about honor from Isaac of all people. The observer beside them remarked that it all sounded absurd, and Eli questioned how someone who used dark magic dared to speak of honor. Although he had once reserved a place of trust in his heart for Isaac, he could no longer believe him. Even so, Isaac declared that he hated the Skeleton King and wished to kill him more than anything else. He reminded them that he had lost his parents to the curse laid by that monster, and that House Joshua had always fought against this threat. He claimed he could barely sleep at night because of the humiliation. Eli, suspicious, thought it was a lie. But then Isaac spoke firmly. He said he would destroy the false Skeleton King, and that he was using the true king's power only to investigate and defeat the imposter. The observer judged him completely insane. However, Isaac insisted he needed to protect the house, for one day he would inherit it. If they gave up on honor, the only thing still sustaining their family, House Joshua would fall into misery until it disappeared from history. Moved, Eli said he had always believed Isaac didn't need to sacrifice his life for the house, but he admitted that, after all, Isaac was a Joshua. He could fail the mission as long as he returned alive with his companions. And if he managed to return safely, he would officially declare Isaac his successor. Isaac's gratitude was immense. Days later, on the outskirts of the capital, he was leading his group. The goal was to meet the knights in that city. Shuri reminded everyone that they must do everything possible to return home alive. The observer, alert, informed Isaac that he had researched the demons active 14 years ago. Nearby, there was a demon of the Western Army. Though not one of the 14 great demons, perhaps it was someone Isaac already knew. The new enemy seemed extremely violent. She devoured cadets with immense brutality. Isaac suspected those bastards were breaking the rules he himself had established, and decided to watch closely what was happening. Meanwhile, Ash herself was following their trail, claiming she had finally found the boy of the Joshua family. In the Holy Empire's capital, Chablis questioned a messenger about rumors that Isaac had chosen the Pack Mules as his knights. The messenger confirmed it, saying Isaac had shown no interest in the warriors sent by the prince himself. Perhaps it was merely poor judgment. But Chablis disagreed. He believed Isaac actually had a keen eye. The knight commander appointed by the prince was weaker against demons because he was half spirit. The messenger was surprised and asked why then the prince had sent such a man to Isaac. Chablis replied that it shouldn't be taken as something negative. Although weak against demons, he was still strong enough in combat. Even so, the choice of the Pack Mules was interesting, for among them was one member who was half demon. The messenger, uneasy, reminded him that those men were uncontrollable, true beasts. At the Joshua family's meeting point, the commander of the Pack Mules, Derek, was furious. Isaac was 5 hours late. When he finally appeared, he slipped up quietly beside him, startling him. He asked if he wasn't that late after all. Derek, annoyed, said he had heard the clergy were always punctual, but apparently that was a lie. Isaac answered that they had been attacked by a group of bandits, but he had come as quickly as possible so the captain wouldn't worry. The truth, however, was that Derek himself had sent those bandits to test him. Still, Derek insisted they should have arrived on time. Tension rose. Derek declared there was nothing to gain from that partnership and that they might as well leave on their own. Isaac coldly asked why he had then waited 5 hours. If it were true he didn't want to cooperate, he would have left already. Besides, he noticed Derek seemed too heavily armed for just an escort mission. He suspected Derek wanted to use them as bait to meet his old companions again. He said that if that were the case, they could part ways right there. Derek reacted immediately, drawing his sword and telling him to shut up. He wanted to know if it was Halak who had told him that. He was convinced that damned uncle had sent him to that mission on purpose. Shuri, astonished, realized Halak was actually his secret fourth uncle, which confirmed the family's involvement. Derek declared they couldn't enter Krasiandia without his help, and that, if necessary, he would force the issue. But Isaac, unfazed, merely ordered him to sheathe his sword. The aura of the Skeleton King emanating from his body was enough for Derek to feel feel instinctive fear and obey immediately. The observer remarked it had been a stroke of genius. Demon blood ran in Derek's veins, preventing him from disobeying the order of someone bearing the Skeleton King's power. With the situation under control, Isaac said they could set off. Sure, he couldn't believe it was possible to continue traveling after such a quarrel, but Isaac explained they both needed each other. It would be cooperative work. He stated they had two goals: to rescue all the captives and eliminate all the demons involved. Moreover, he promised that, if possible, he would also try to save Derek's old companions. Derek, intrigued, asked if Isaac had already known all that when he chose them. He replied ironically that no, he had no idea. Then he said, of course he knew. That confused everyone, who couldn't understand his true intentions. To them, trusting a half-demon was madness. After all, demons were humanity's enemies. Suddenly, one of the group members transformed and grabbed a Joshua family priest. Without hesitation, Isaac struck quickly, forcing him back to consciousness. The warrior, embarrassed, apologized. He said he had never transformed so fast and had felt a strange pressure in his mind. In truth, it was the observer who had manipulated him on purpose. Other knights also commented that they were feeling strange, but the one who had transformed noticed he returned to human form quickly, impressed by Isaac's power. Deep down, Isaac knew he had provoked everything to boost his own reputation. He truly was a cruel strategist. At that moment, he noticed a small bird lying apparently dead on his bag. Looking more closely, he realized the creature was only pretending. Soon he heard a voice saying it would fulfill the bird's wish since it wanted to die. The little creature revealed it had been sent to watch that mad priest, under orders from the dreaded Lord of Blood. Isaac began to suspect the origin of this mysterious visitor, wondering if that Lord of Blood had been sent by one of the great demons. Later, he raised a magic barrier around himself to ensure no one would overhear the conversation. Isaac was suspicious and wanted to know what kind of information the bird messenger carried. The small being responded arrogantly, saying it had nothing to say to a mad priest like him, only that it would confront the Supreme Demon King. The messenger confirmed that it had been sent by a copy of the Skeleton King, and that they had managed to plant a magical device within the Empire's barrier. It also said that the demoness Ash, now strengthened after absorbing the Demon King's power, had ordered the execution of Joshua's priests. With such power, she was able to cross the Holy Empire's sacred barrier. Upon hearing this, Isaac quickly connected the dots and understood that the Lord of Blood was indeed involved. The little bird went on, saying it believed the current Skeleton King was an imposter. According to it, the real one had been captured after accusing the false king. It also claimed to have heard that Isaac had consumed a fragment of the true king. That would explain why Ash was likely waiting for him in her domain. After that, Isaac released the bird and ordered it to carry the message back. Before leaving, the messenger asked Isaac not to die, for it would make its master very sad. Shortly after, Shuri appeared, asking where he had been since everyone was looking for him. He said he was proud of Isaac, mentioning that he had ordered food from the tavern for everyone. Isaac, confused, didn't remember doing that. But then a girl, supposedly from the tavern, approached, saying everything was ready to be served. What seemed to be just an ordinary waitress revealed herself to be none other than Ash, the demoness, who was there in person and not just watching from a distance. During dinner, while everyone ate peacefully, Isaac began to tease the waitress. He complained that there was dust in the water, demanded a new plate because the one he had was ugly, and whined that the food was cold. He did this several times, forcing Ash to run back and forth trying to serve him. At one point, Isaac said the food was too salty and that he hated hearing her breathe, ordering her to stop breathing. Derek, who was nearby, reinforced that Lord Isaac wanted another dish. Ash, irritated, questioned why the so-called pack mules were siding with Isaac. Still, she said they should eat first, since they looked tired. Derek replied that they were there because they had been hired by Isaac. He himself refused to eat, but the waitress insisted, saying they needed to be well fed to complete their mission. Inside, Ash cursed them all, but kept up her facade. Then Isaac asked why she herself wasn't eating the food, wondering how they would know if it was poisoned. That made her suspect he knew more than he let on. When the Joshua priests tried to stop Isaac from continuing to torment the girl, they took the food themselves and immediately fell poisoned after eating. Isaac, indifferent, remarked that this only made things easier, since he would have had to defeat them anyway. One of the observers asked why he didn't summon a spirit to purify them, but Isaac preferred to let them suffer a little longer. The observer warned that the poison was converting holy power into mana, and that it was paralyzing. Realizing this, Isaac thought about creating a kind of mana farm with them. The situation worsened when Ash, furious, declared that everyone there was weak. She said that if he wanted his allies to survive, Isaac would have to follow her to obtain the antidote. However, he completely ignored her and nearly struck her head with his rattle. Ash fled, ordering him to follow. Derek offered to accompany him, but Isaac refused, saying he needed them to stay and protect the others. Derek assured him they would handle it. Satisfied with the promise, Isaac thought he would have even more mana to harvest later. Thus, he went alone into the depths of the forest at night. When Ash saw him arrive without any escort, short. She remarked that he was either courageous or just an idiot. Isaac replied that there was only one idiot there, her, for underestimating humans without recognizing who he was. He ordered her to kneel. Isaac's aura, fueled by the Skeleton King's fragment, was so powerful that it forced Ash to her knees, unable to move. She couldn't understand why he possessed so much of the king's mana. She imagined it was because he had consumed part of him. Even weakened, Ash said she would rescue her master from inside Isaac. When Ash tried to attack, she was immediately immobilized by the Skeleton King's power, which wrapped around her completely. Isaac told her she was a fool and that he would show her who the true king was. Later, one of the observers remarked that it had been incredible. Even though it was only 5th circle magic, its power was comparable to a 7th circle spell or higher. The combination of holy power with mana was working, a move worthy of a genius. Isaac silently agreed. He realized he had reached a new peak of power, and perhaps it was precisely for this reason that the gods had decided not to make him an ordinary human. Meanwhile, Ash was kneeling before him, trembling and sweating. One of the others wondered aloud if Isaac had gone too far with her, and if he had already slapped her awake. Ash then acknowledged her grave mistake before her king. She admitted she had committed a terrible error and offered to hand over the antidote. Isaac, however, said he didn't need it at that moment. What he wanted was for her to bring back the paladins she had kidnapped. He gave her only 1 minute to comply. He also said he needed evidence to secure a perfect score in the Pentagon, and proof of having defeated a demon would be essential for that. 2 days passed, and everyone was deeply worried about Isaac's disappearance. Derek tried to reassure Shuri, saying Isaac was far too strong to be defeated easily, but Shuri still felt that something was wrong. To everyone's surprise, Isaac suddenly reappeared. Shuri, relieved, asked where he had been. Derek also wanted to know his lord's whereabouts. Isaac simply answered that he had brought the antidote and one more thing, a heavy bag that should be kept safe. When Shuri opened the bag, he found the kidnapper's head. Isaac said that this was the evidence needed to secure a perfect score in the Pentagon. Curious, Derek asked about the missing companions. Isaac explained that they were too heavy to carry, so he had hidden them in the bushes. Another paladin confirmed to Derek that they had all been found there, thrown together, still alive, but completely weakened. Shuri declared that it was true. Isaac had gone there, saved everyone, and even killed the demon. He asked if Isaac had faced everything alone, especially since he had gone to the land of the mages. Derek commented that it made no sense at all, but Isaac explained that it was better for everyone to believe that version. He said that once the mages learned of the mission, they had planned to kidnap the priests and later pretend they had rescued them from demons, trying to bargain with the Holy Empire. The woman who had drugged them was actually a mage. She wanted to deliver them to the Arcane Empire. Since possessing divine power, they were far too valuable. Isaac said she gave up on the plan after he threatened to report everything to the Holy See, and that even the mere mention of the Pope was enough to terrify her. He went on talking a lot, then asked if no one believed him. Shuri replied that nobody cared about the details. What mattered was that everything had worked out in the end. Derek said he believed him, but Shuri insisted that Isaac's actions were still irresponsible. Something bad could have happened. Isaac, in turn, said that he had done everything for his people. If everyone had gone into direct conflict with the mages and demons, the number of victims would have been much higher. As a guardian of peace, he could not allow that. Derek said that he truly was a man of faith. Shuri commented that at least Isaac had returned safely. Many thought that he too had been kidnapped, especially after the appearance of the mages. Isaac then mocked, saying that mages concerned about priests was hard to believe. But soon a mage appeared and said that was a bit rude. He explained that yes, they had been worried that demons might have captured Isaac. He distrusted their intentions and thought the mages were only there because of the mana core. The mage commented that a report had indicated the presence of a demon nearby, but Isaac said he had not seen any. The mage insisted he had sensed a mana core in the area. Isaac said it must have belonged to someone in their own group. He also remarked that demons weren't that common, and a novice priest like him wouldn't stand a chance against one. The mage agreed, saying that a novice truly wouldn't survive an encounter with a demon. Still, the presence of that core made no sense. He mentioned that Halak had confirmed the existence of a demon. Shuri found that curious, since that was the name of his fourth uncle. He said it might just be a coincidence. Isaac then said he was going to rest a little and asked Shuri to organize everything for departure. Shuri replied that the conversation wasn't over yet. Later, Isaac went to a warehouse where he found Ash, who was still trembling. He said it was time to settle that matter as well. It was then that the truth about the previous 2 days began to be explained. Isaac said that he wanted proof of the demon's death, the one who had devoured Azure 14 years ago. He asked if it had been Ash. She denied it, saying no. Even if she had wanted to, someone as weak as her could never have accomplished something like that. Even 14 years ago, Ash wouldn't have been able to defeat Relay. Isaac knew that if he only brought back her head, they probably wouldn't believe him. That's why he decided he needed concrete proof. He wanted to bring the head of a true demon to the Holy See. Later, someone commented that it was good Ash had brought back the head of the culprit and admitted that, after all, she wasn't a complete fool. Ash replied that this time she had managed to do it. She said that Isaac had known from the start who the real culprit was. Isaac remarked that there had been a woman and a monster with her, and it wasn't hard to figure out, but he wondered why the informant had said Ash was the demon from 14 years ago. Ash explained that back then, it had been her sister who caused it. She was the one who had ordered the monster away from the hunt. Isaac thought that if they truly were from the same family, the priest might have been confused, since the two of them probably had very similar energy. In the end, they managed to identify who had devoured Relay's whole group back then. After that, Isaac spoke with Ash. He said he needed information and asked how the hierarchy of the demons stood nowadays. Ash explained that the false skeleton king was controlling the true demons of the Ninth Circle. He had ordered the assassination of all priests and saints to seize the power the skeleton king had lost. That king was weak after battling the gods. Ash commented that, for now, they were quiet because they had also suffered a heavy blow. Isaac found that strange. Maybe the skeleton king's self-destruction had caused more damage than even he imagined. The gods had been silent for 150 years. Perhaps they were gathering strength to try to find his soul again. But Isaac considered the possibility that maybe they hadn't even realized that the insect meant to seal his name had not sealed anyone at all. Thinking about it, maybe the gods had noticed that the seal was empty. In that case, another soul might have taken the place of the original. That could be good. Perhaps it was some form of shadow life, or even another catastrophe. Who knows, maybe even another god was trapped there. To Isaac, that seemed amusing. Then he called for Ash, which made her tremble completely. He ordered her to return to the demons and become his eyes and ears. He wanted her to act as a double agent. Meanwhile, the villagers thanked Isaac greatly, saying that he had done something they could never repay. They were impressed that he had defeated a demon alone. Isaac had saved every person in that place. When they told him that, he replied that it was no big deal. He was just doing his job. The so-called pack mules praised Isaac, saying that he was truly worthy of the name of the Joshua family and a man of great honor. Derek then said that the answer to how they could repay him was simple. He and his Nar squad kneeled before Isaac, pledging to serve him completely. Isaac was surprised by this. He had not been expecting such loyalty, but he realized that he had gained excellent soldiers for free. Moreover, the connections they had throughout the continent would be extremely useful, providing intelligence and mobility. To him, it had been a true bargain. However, there was a child among them, and Isaac had no idea who he was. Derek then asked if Isaac knew the boy's identity. In truth, it would have been surprising if he did. The boy introduced himself as Hiberius, the youngest prince of the Arcane Empire, and thanked Isaac for saving his homeland. Isaac was shocked to learn this. He then realized that the mages of the Arcane Empire had probably only helped because one of the kidnapped had been the prince himself. Hiberius commented that he had always thought the people of the Holy Empire were arrogant, but that someone like Isaac, who had saved his life, had proven to be far more honorable and refined than anyone from the Holy See. To him, Isaac was truly worthy of gratitude. Isaac then asked if the prince could help him with a favor. Meanwhile, Hooray Barrett was informed that Joshua's team had already headed toward Cassandra. They said they had not been able to follow them for long because of the mages, but they were certain the group had entered the mission area. Hooray was surprised. He had not expected the pack mules to take Isaac that far, but the messenger explained that, in truth, Isaac had gone alone into enemy territory. Hooray then concluded that Isaac had probably failed to tame the pack mules and had given up on trying. He said there was no chance of him completing that mission, and that the possibility of any of the group members returning was minimal. At the same time, Hooray knew that one of the Joshua brothers had promised to amuse himself greatly if the priests entered his territory. Surely he had used the mages to eliminate them. But the messenger asked if Hooray Barrett didn't think the crown prince could help Isaac. It seemed that the prince was truly interested in the boy, but Hooray replied that, for the moment, he didn't have enough resources for that. Cassandra was a contested area between the two empires, a territory in constant conflict between the Holy Empire and the Arcane Empire. Any wrong move within that region could trigger a serious incident. That was why the prince could not intervene directly. Hooray remarked that he could already imagine the shame the Joshua family must have been feeling at that moment. And Isaac, in turn, thought the very same thing, that Hooray must be laughing inwardly at their fall in reputation. That was why he decided it was time to make a masterstroke and turn the tables. Isaac then decided to present his secret weapon before the Holy See, the crown prince of the Arcane Empire himself. Everyone was shocked. Sure, he could not believe what he was seeing and wondered what that lunatic was doing. Who, in their right mind, would present the prince of an enemy nation in such a way? Hiberius explained that this was precisely why he would hide his identity. Even so, Shuri was still suspicious and asked if Isaac had not kidnapped the prince. But Hiberius replied naturally that, of course he had not been kidnapped. Isaac added that the Holy See was now in trouble. After all, not only had they rescued the kidnapped paladins, but now the prince also owed them a life debt. This was the first rule of politics, according to Isaac. Always make your opponent owe you something. By saving the prince of the Arcane Empire, they had secured an invaluable trump card. Shuri was uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation and thought such things should not be said in front of the prince himself. But Hiberius simply praised Isaac, saying that he was a brilliant strategist. It was then that Shuri realized the two of them were insane, two madmen talking and plotting together. Shuri then asked if Isaac wanted to use the prince's rescue to make a triumphant entrance and gain recognition. But Isaac replied that it was not yet time to make anything public. That was exactly why he had called that meeting. He was certain that the Golden Faith had prepared traps to sabotage the mission from the very beginning, and he knew very well what would happen if the prince fell into one of those traps. It would be chaos. Hiberius enthusiastically commented that Isaac was so incredible that he himself would jump into the fire if ordered to. And Isaac concluded by saying that now was the time to bring down those traitors of the Golden Faith. Hey guys, if you're enjoying this, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next video. Let's hit that goal together.